Oakland, California, a 20-year and now Berkeley High alum sentenced to 9 months in jail for massive CP hacking/extortion scheme. Out in Oakland, California, a 20-year-old former Berkeley High School student was recently arrested, charged, and pled no contest to charges of distributing photos of 13 naked people, young people. The guy, Liam Bergman, had apparently hacked into a bunch of different Berkeley High School students' Snapchat accounts. Specifically targeting teen girls in order to find their spicier photos. Once he got the pictures, he started posting them to places like 4chan and Reddit using the username Will Convo. He kept some of them to himself and used them to blackmail the victims. The police actually arrested him for this back in 2021 after linking him to a Kik account that contained over 130 video clips of CP. The age of the victims in those clips ranged from 3 years old to 12 years old. That's when they found that he also had pictures of students from El Cerrito High School, which led them to the pictures from Berkeley as well. Liam had well over 100 names, emails, Snapchat accounts, Instagram accounts, passwords, phone numbers, birth dates, and even addresses for all these people. This was all purely for the purpose of using their personal information to get into their accounts and steal their nudes. Upon initially being arrested in September of 2021, Liam was able to pay his $220,000 bail and go free. But then this year he showed up to court and pled no contest to 2 different misdemeanor counts, one being invasion of privacy and the other being distributing images of intimate body parts to cause distress. That charge included the names of all 13 of the victims. In exchange for pleading no contest, he was sent to Santa Rita jail that same day in order to start serving a 9-month jail sentence. Liam Bergman is still in jail. It looks like he'll be able to cut his sentence in half if he stays on good behavior. Whenever he's released, he's going to be on house arrest for 3 months with an ankle bracelet before moving on to 3 years of probation. Now, New Mexico mother, 19, admits to tossing newborn into hospital trash can. As the title says, a 19-year-old
all of the chores for them instead. But then they were all pissed when the whole thing turned out to be a giant lie. JJ also told all of them, all the other inmates of, I guess their sick plans after they got out. They were gonna, quote, do business with the upper class. That's what they said. I'm gonna get out of here and do business with the upper class. And in order to mingle with the upper class, you have to learn advanced sports. Skiing, fencing, archery, rich people sports, horseback riding. So we can assume that's why JJ wanted to learn fencing immediately after getting out of prison. Oh, side note, JJ was also married while they were in prison. Married a man this time. Because apparently in Korea, if you get married, the courts might be easier on you and let you get released early. Isn't that crazy? The minute Bruno stepped out onto the field as a kid, everyone's like, yeah, no, you're not gonna make it. He's tall, which goalkeepers are usually the tallest on the team because they need to be able to reach up and block the balls, but he's kind of spaghetti noodle tall in the sense that he was very thin to the point that people thought he looked frail. Like the wind would blow and he would lose balance. But he was good. There was no denying it. I mean, a country of kids who think that they will be the next soccer prodigy, he had something. He just did whatever it took to try and focus on soccer. Bring his team, because he couldn't even afford a bus ticket when he was a kid, which at the time the ticket would have been like 20 cents. He would have been the only kid in practice that didn't have food. He didn't have any food from home to bring. His teammates would ask, hey, are you not eating? Are you not hungry? And he would sit there next to him drenched in sweat and say, yeah, not hungry. There was just no way. I mean, they've been running around in the hot sun for hours. He's starving. They're all starving. So these kids, they would look down, break off a piece of their sandwich and give it to Bruno. Maybe they kind of felt bad for the guy. I mean, Bruno did have a bit of a strange upbringing. He was raised by his grandma, Donna Estella. And because when Bruno was 3 days old, not 3 years old, 3 days old, fresh out of the hospital, his 2 parents, they look at each other and they're like, okay, let's just eeny, meeny, mo this. Okay, they didn't actually say that. They might as well have. They just decided to pick one brother, one of their kids, one of their sons to take and leave the other one with grandma. They did not take Bruno. It said that his parents only came back into his life once he was a pro soccer player, which is kind of sad when you think about it. But that's not the only people either in his life. It said that a lot of Bruno's relationships in life changed once he became a pro soccer player. He started hating
anymore, Kyle's dad would tend to end the conversation with an insult. Kyle gradually upped his mistreatment of his father. In addition to the constant insults, the death threats soon became commonplace. Even more disgustingly, arguably, Kyle would often text his father unsolicited dong pics in all states of arousal, I'll say. He did this as some twisted form of revenge, saying that he would never let his father forget the mutilation. He would be sending disgusting, sexually charged messages all along the way. Kyle's father would often send a happy greeting only to be met with racial slurs and pictures of his son's wiener. It wasn't long before Kyle began to show a lot of malice towards his sister, who we will call Sarah as well. He again and again threatened to mutilate her genitalia, going against his own supposed values of being very against exactly that sort of thing. This was something that came up on his channel time and time again on countless occasions. He would even show screenshots of their texts in which his sister threatened to have him committed if he didn't leave her alone and stop threatening to chop up her junk. Kyle also began to fantasize about his mother, erotic fantasies that involved extreme violence, threatening her much in the same way that he threatened his sister, arguably much worse though as he considers her to have ruined his life by having him circumcised. While telling her that he loved her, he stated that she deserved to have her underside shoved into a meat grinder. He said that she doesn't even care about his trauma because she's too busy having orgasms, something he 2 months of peace. But by April of that year, George's company was experiencing multiple layoffs. He felt that his turn was coming any day now, writing, I predict I won't survive the next layoff. That is when there's no point to continue. Right now, life is bearable and I can get by indefinitely. Something bad must happen. The paycheck is all I have left. The future holds nothing for me. 25 years of nothing fun. I never even spent one weekend with a girl in my life, even at my own place. Also unlikely to find another similar job. I guess then is when I take care of things. I don't have kids, close friends, or anything. Just me here. If you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. Feeling that his livelihood was coming to an end and that he no longer had anything left to lose, George started falling back into his old plans of committing mass murder. May 5th, 2009. To pull the exit plan off, he was slightly awkward. He kept to himself but participated in class lectures. There was no sign of aggression or hatred towards anybody. In fact, he was quite intelligent. He always had good questions to ask our professor and seemed to do well on his assignments. He seemed to be a good student and his professors seemed to like him. Despite his ability to study though, his peers didn't really seem to get along with him. Despite all of this though, at the age of 24, he decided to move out of his parents' home and really try to get his life started. And his support of Trump in the US. He would often talk about how Americans were cool and how he would love to live there himself. He started going to the gym, getting pretty serious about his fitness. He would go to the gym every single day aside from weekends and stay for a much longer time than most of the other people there. Attendees of the gym said that he was very quiet, kept his head down, and stayed in his own world for the entire time he was there. Jake also made an account on YouTube, calling his channel Professor Waffle. In his videos, he tended to show himself working out, talking about his past, and his nihilistic, defeatist views on the world. Jake started getting angrier as his despair and lack of motivation grew. He started lashing out in violent ways more and more at home. He attacked his father during a visit and started punching holes in the wall when his mother made him angry. Against his mom's wishes, he built a home gym in their living room. When she asked him not to build it, he got enraged and threatened her, so it went ahead as planned. Jake got more and more single day aside from weekends and stayed for a month. Americans were cool and how he would love to live there. Attendees of the gym said that he was very quiet, kept his head down, and stayed in his own world for the entire time he was there. Jake also made an account on YouTube, calling him something that he had pined over for his entire life up until this point. Jake, however, wasn't happy for long. He was a very deeply troubled young man, and one of his biggest troubles was his own loneliness. He constantly came back to one thing in his mind, the fact that he missed out on teenage parties, fun, and ultimately young love. This feeling gradually grew into resentment within his mind. He hated seeing happy teenage couples, feeling that he himself, at the age of 20, was now too old and had already missed out on his life.
Love is for the young.
Because I didn't want it to escalate any further. I was very fearful for my life. I was fearful for my future. And it wasn't until I found out he was doing similar things to other girls that I gathered the courage to reach out to an adult and to try and stop what was happening. I met with Nexopia and Minmods, and we met at a little temple, so ashamed that their daughter had engaged me, that they would think I was disgusting, that I did this thing online, that they would take my computer away from me forever. He had been very clear with me that my parents would disown me, that they would think I was disgusting, that I did this thing online, that they would take my computer away from me forever, and I would never be allowed back on the internet or to talk to my friends again. And it was very real to me that that was a real possibility, that my parents were going to be just so ashamed that their daughter had engaged in these behaviors online, that I was mainly trying to shield myself, but I believe in a way, looking back now, I was also trying to shield them from the embarrassment, from the complete mortifying feeling I had. And he had told me as time went on that he had sent the pictures to his friends with instructions on what to do if he was ever caught. If the police ever came knocking on his door, he would make sure those pictures got out to everybody that I knew. I didn't like that I was in this situation where I was doing things that I had never wanted to do. I'd always dreamed that I would first have these acts happen with somebody I loved and with somebody who was my partner. Told me that this was how it was now, and that if I wanted to keep the pictures from going out and everyone finding out what I had done, then it was best to just do what he said. And the more I did what he said, he would delete the pictures one by one. Unfortunately, that proved to be untrue at the end, but 12 and naive. The first few times he asked me to do stuff for him, it was just flashing him. It was just showing him either my chest or my behind or whatever it had to be. But as it progressed, he started asking me to do sexual acts on myself for him and performing these acts live on camera for him to see. And it varied for a bunch of different things over the next 6 months, and I was mortified. I was absolutely terrified of what was happening, but I was so determined to get these pictures erased that I blocked out everything else in my mind and just tried to get it done, to not think about it, to just
attention to me, which is mainly what we're talking about today. And there was nothing really happening until he knew I was able to keep a secret. And when he finally started acting on his fantasies, I was 7 years old. He didn't just straightforward go right in and start penetrating me. It would start with, hey, come lay down, come lay on my chest, take a nap with me. He would rub me down there, and your body has natural reactions. So even if I didn't want this and didn't like it, my body still reacts to it. Everybody's gonna react to it. And
talk about it first, don't make it a thing. Talk about it, learn from it, move. There was this one, I think her name is Annie, and she's really good at reading micro expressions. She's basically a human lie detector. Her daughter helped her form a lot of her daughter helped her with a bunch of her research stuff, and it's so crazy because as soon as she taught her daughter how to read facial expressions and what's contempt like and all that, she freaking I think one of her teacher's boyfriend was actually a predator. And because she told her mom, this guy, there's something off about him or whatever, her mom took her seriously, notified authorities, and he actually was a freaking predator. And the only reason he was dating a second grade or elementary teacher is so he could have access to these kids. So crazy. So what can we do from it to prevent all this? There's so many tools.
Criticism for their poor handling of this massive case. It's widely accepted by virtually everyone that the police didn't take the missing person case seriously enough due to their prejudices against hostesses. It's because of this that it took so long to find her body, and in turn, it was impossible to find a cause of death. Not only that, but the police leaked crucial information about the case to the media as the investigation was ongoing, leading to further scrutiny. Today,
walrus as much as the next guy, but that website became so addicting for me, I was swearing at 50 walrus a night, and so I had to cancel that months ago. And so I knew that $2,000 charge could not be mine. Someone had stolen my credit card. But when I pulled out my 20-pound wallet, my credit card was still there. Well, it turns out the Dementor that was at the grocery store with me, who bumped into me as I was scooping up my spoiled milk, he wasn't just bumping into me, he was using his RFID scanner and scanning my wallet through my jeans and ripping off my credit card information. Yes, that's a real thing. People literally can scan your cards with a scanner through your pocket. Needless to say, after I discovered this, I canceled my credit card and I got a Ridge wallet. Ridge wallet has a sleek and durable design. They can hold up to 12 cards, and most importantly, they are built with RFID blocking technology. So if you're like me and you're tired of Dementors stealing your credit card information with RFID scanners, then you need to get a Ridge wallet too. Get the best offer for Ridge with my link, ridge.com/MrBallin, and save up to 40%. And so they had no idea that Zhu Ming was still just completely furious at them. And eventually Zhu Ming's fury just became completely unhinged, and he used his chemistry know-how, because remember, he's studying for his PhD in chemistry, to begin putting together this deadly mixture of chemicals that contain things like methadone and hydrocodone, and he put them into a syringe, and he began injecting them into Umar and Samira's apartment to poison them to make them be quiet. And so by the time Zhu Ming was arrested, he had been injecting these deadly chemicals into their apartment for a month. That was obviously the cause of all of Umar and Samira and their baby's symptoms. It was this poison. Umar, Samira, and their baby would get treatment, and they would fully recover from their poisoning, but very likely, had they not been quick thinkers and put that camera in place and caught Zhu Ming in the act, it's entirely possible that over time, the poison that was being injected into their apartment would have killed them. Officials are still investigating this case, as it's still relatively new. However, the legal process was paused when Zhu Ming was deported back to China. Zhu Ming has not been convicted of any. On video, you see this guy walk up the stairs and enter the hallway right in front of Umar and Samira's apartment door. And this man had a syringe in his hand, and he knelt down and he placed the syringe into that crack at the bottom of Umar and Samira's door, and he pushed the plunger of the syringe before pulling the syringe out, quickly turning and disappearing down the stairs. And so as Umar and Samira and their baby rushed to the hospital after discovering this video and after calling 911 to
But we were talking about how it seems like some people start out fine and then suddenly their lives just start spiraling into this black hole of crime, like a just rabbit hole of death. And you can see cases where the killer is just like all the other kids growing up. And the only difference is maybe they have a slightly abusive parent or a slightly absent parent, or maybe they have a bully at school. Or the most random one that I've seen in so many cases is they fall off a swing and hit their heads.
Yes.
It's happened so many times, and it's just the weirdest. It's weird. It seems like that's a key moment that has them going at 50 miles an hour towards the dark side, falling off a swing.
Yeah, so there's definitely brain injury.
Yeah, to the frontal lobe is what people suspect. Yeah. But it makes you wonder, okay, if that hadn't happened, would they have lived a different life? But then again, there's a ton of people who are dealt much worse cards and they never kill anyone. So it can't just be the environment. So maybe the conclusion is a little bit of both. So let's say each time a person is born, they're either born a teddy bear or as a gun. And as they live life, all the little bits of trauma, or sometimes even perceived trauma, become bullets. And you can put a bullet in a teddy bear, but it's not going to do anything but hurt the teddy bear. But if you put bullets continuously into a gun, all it takes is a little bit of pressure, and boom. And again, this is no way of excusing it. Like, being born a certain way is no excuse to take a life or hurt another person. But that's kind of how I explain it in my head to make it make sense. It's obviously oversimplified, but it's weird that so many people can live such similar lives, such traumatic lives, and one is a killer and one is a guidance counselor / activist that helps others. So the only way that I can try and understand today's case is, I was thinking, okay, if Amar had committed these crimes when he was older, like when he was in his 20s, I would probably assume that he was born a gun and through life trauma, he became a serial killer. But he's 8. He's 8.
Yeah, that's...
So do we just conclude that he was born a fully loaded gun? Were there any additional things that have pushed him over the edge at such a young age? Honestly, I don't know. I tried to comb through all of the research, and obviously with the help of our wonderful researchers, there's just a few things that we could find, and I'm not even sure how much these contribute. Amar's family was part of the scheduled cast, aka the Untouchables in India. We did a case that covered
He spent more and more time online playing games with Lewis and less time doing really anything outside of that. A good chunk of his conversations revolved around gaming with Lewis, and a good portion of everything he said began with the phrase, Lewis says, such as, Lewis says I shouldn't have to do chores, or Lewis says I don't need to finish school because he can get me a Microsoft apprenticeship when I turn 16. That person named Lewis was Lewis Daines, a 19-year-old man from Roseberry Road in Grays. Lewis was a currently unemployed computer engineer who met Breck a while back online while playing games. He grew up as a lonely, only child. Once his parents divorced when he was 16 years old, he started living alone in an apartment that his grandparents owned. His neighbors would describe him as being a recluse. To be more specific, Lewis is said to have met Breck and his friends on a forum dedicated to gaming and not on a game itself, if that matters. He claimed to be a successful engineer running a multi-million-dollar company all on his own. However, as you may suspect, he wasn't all he was cracked up to be. His claims ranged from being a bit of an exaggeration to being outright complete lies. It turns out that he had also been accused of violating a younger boy in 2011 and posting certain indecent images of him online. However, despite investigating this, the police would never go on to charge him with anything. He would later defend himself online about this, saying, "The media and family have accused me of falsely raping a boy, incredibly whilst 2 adults were sitting in the next room. The police fully investigated this accusation and found it to have no substance. They found no evidence whatsoever. The boy retracted this false accusation."
In question. Just who did the Jack family run into that night?
There's good data going back to the 90s about the preferred occupations of serial killers, or at least the recurring occupations of serial killers. And truck driver, as recently is recognized and still is, as the third most prevalent occupation among what we call semi-skilled serial killers. The only ones ahead of it in that category are actually a arborist or a forestry worker. Certain jobs offer opportunity to motivated offenders. The pretext of lawful employment allows you to be that stranger using the highways, frequenting places that we call crime attractors, where a motivated offender can know they can travel to find what they're looking for. And in many cases, that's people, it's vulnerable people. There's a recognized set of ways that offenders typically get a victim into a car or control the victim. So the vast majority of commuter killers use what's actually called a ruse-con-based approach, and this is recognized actually in criminal analysis or profiling. So some type of story or lure to get them in the car, either of a ride or money or what have you.
Given the available research on serial offenders, I can't help but wonder, is it a coincidence that this strange man should happen to find himself in a local dive bar on the edge of town where not a single person would recognise him? Is it a coincidence that the bar just so happened to be a 30-second drive from a turning onto Highway 16? And given the ad hoc nature of the job offer, the ambiguous location of the camp, the complete lack of witnesses outside the Prince George area, and the fact that most forestry workers interviewed were baffled by the idea of daycare at a logging camp, what are the chances that the job was real in the first place? And if it wasn't, then what kind of person would be able to lie to multiple people over the course of several hours, never giving themselves away, not even once? You have to wonder if this kind of behaviour implies confidence or experience. Now, just because the unknown man lied, that's not to say he wasn't a forestry worker. On the contrary, the fact that he was able to tell a lie convincingly enough to Ronnie, someone with experience in forestry work, suggests otherwise. That's just one other small detail that I found buried in the archives. It's mentioned in one source from a student researcher who clearly had access to the case file back in the early 90s. The logo on the unknown man's jacket read Husqvarna, supplies of forestry equipment. If this is true, then the unknown man was most likely not lying about working in the industry. So doesn't this mean that the job offer was most likely real? If he was lying, then why would he openly discuss his occupation in a public space? Isn't that incredibly risky? Well, maybe. But to play devil's advocate, who's to say this man was smart? Or concerned with being particularly careful? Maybe all he needed to get away with this wasn't his superior cunning, but dumb luck, and a few apathetic institutions still struggling to intellectualize their deeply problematic beliefs about native people. There are a plethora of explanations that have been offered.
The defendant was aware of the illegality of the acts as he made attempts to prevent them from being revealed, such as by attaching a stolen number plate on the car he had used to kidnap the girl. The court said in the 90s. By this point, he had even researched CIA brainwashing techniques beforehand, along with techniques employed by the Aum Shinrikyo cult that gained prominence in the 90s. He even researched none other than the Fusako Sano case that had ended about a decade prior. This case was a major motivation for him. When researching the brainwashing-related material, he became interested in hallucinogens. He found that the seeds of the Japanese morning glory plant can cause hallucinogenic effects to some extent, and they weren't too hard to come across. Kabu would often mix these seeds into the food he gave Anna in hopes that he could brainwash her more easily while she was under the influence. He would tell her, over and over again, that her parents had already abandoned her, that they had forgotten her, and that they had already moved on. He did his best to reinforce both this to her and that she was of no use to anybody. He forced her to write these things herself, over and over, until she actually believed it. "I was abandoned. I have nowhere to go home. Nobody needs me," she wrote, time after time after time. Later on in the confinement, Kabu noticed, among some of Anna's writings, that she had written, "I want to run away," on one sheet of paper. So he immediately went out and bought additional padlocks and surveillance items for the house. Everything to reinforce the locks that he had already had on the outside of the home, and also cameras that he could watch through an app on his phone. He even started transcribing every single conversation he had with Anna in an obsessed ploy to further understand her and analyze her. While Kabu was out on campus, nobody suspected a thing. He seemed completely normal. He attended classes, never missing any, went to seminars, and studied on the internet at the library. He even went to overnight events and parties with his classmates without anyone ever noticing anything was amiss. He was never too much of a social butterfly, but his communication skills were pretty solid, and he got along normally with those around him.
I had multiple choices for English tests.
I had a deadline approaching.
Chiba was located. He was looking for a place that wasn't really too rural and wasn't really too urban. He specifically set out during a time when a lot of nearby junior high and high schools were hosting events. I think you can see where this one's going. He came back to the area from March 4th to 6th and started scoping out the girls who were leaving school alone. He focused in on one certain girl and followed her back to her home, quietly. From the address plate on her house, he was able to make a pretty solid guess as to what her last name was, but he needed more information. He surveyed the yard of the home and found a homemade flower pot on which the girl's name was written. The girl's name was Anna Sato. She was a 13-year-old middle school student only in her first year. But even this early on, she was already a member of the student council and active in learning ballet. The subject I was looking for was a middle school or high school student who was weaker than me. I thought about how I could go about being undiscovered. I wondered about how she would develop over time. I wanted to see what would happen if I confined her, isolated her from society, and put her under severe oppression, said Kabu. While Anna was on her way back home from school one day, Kabu pulled up near her in a white vehicle as she was almost back to her home in Saitama. He had even gone as far as stealing a license plate to use on the car during the act. He gave her a grand story about how her parents were splitting up and about how he was actually their divorce lawyer, and asked her to get into the car to talk with him about it. Knowing her full name was likely what gave him the credibility that allowed her to get into the car in the first place. He continued on with his story. He said that her parents were actually deep in debt and well on their way to a divorce because of it. Not only that, he added, but they were so desperate that they were about to kill her and sell her organs for money. He then drove off with her in his car back to his home. After taking her home, he sat down and told her that, instead of having her organs sold, she had been sold to him to pay off her parents' debts. Several hours later on, his mom started to get worried when she didn't return home at her normal time, or even hours later after it got dark. She asked around, and the people in the neighborhood said that they had seen her talking to a young man near their home that day. The mother decided to call the police and formally report her missing. She later found a note in her mailbox, one that was apparently written by Anna and seemed to match her handwriting. "I want to take a break away from my home and from school for a while. I'll be with a friend. Please don't look for me." Anna had been forced to write this under duress, ordered by Kabu to do so. Many tense, worrying days passed with no leads on where Anna could be. After 10 long days, another note arrived at the home. This time it read, "I'm sorry to trouble you. I'm doing well. I'll be home in about half a year. I'm with a high school student that I met online." It was confirmed to be Anna's handwriting. However, both her phone and her computer were searched by the police, and there was no evidence of her ever really contacting a high schooler in any capacity. The kidnapping became major news around Japan at the time. Her parents' first real urge to... He started being bullied. In his youth, Kabu was mostly a loner at school. He did well in class, but he didn't participate in any clubs and didn't really have a circle of friends. He started being bullied when he was a third-year junior high school student and began to isolate himself from his peers. This period of solitude was when he had his first real urge to capture and confine someone. He wanted to really set them apart from society in the way that he felt he was. It's now speculated that he had some kind of psychiatric disorder at the time, but back then nobody really suspected anything. When Kabu became an adult, he seemed to act like he was very well put together. He got a lot of admiration from his peers and respect from his teachers. He seemed to be the natural-born leader type. But despite this, he was not without his faults. Not by a long shot. Those around him noticed that when he took an interest in something, he became obsessive, to a concerning degree, to a dangerous degree even. He was able to hide it well, though. At school, he always excelled. He had fantastic weight going home. By 1999, Sato began using the stun gun on his mother as well. Along with punching her and kicking her, he began tying her up as well, only releasing her to let her go to the bathroom, according to the mother. The mother called to get mental help for her son on January 12th of 2000, and basically getting nothing out of it, she then tried calling again on January 19th, begging 3 times a day. It was either food that he brought by himself or food that was cooked by his mother, who was still living on the first floor. Sugar, and began limiting her meals to once a day. She went from weighing 46 kilograms to 38 kilograms and began feeling very faint most of the time, usually spending most of her time lying down. Eventually, her legs withered to the point of being unable to walk around on her own anymore. She needed to build strength in her legs, but Sato wouldn't allow this, as that might end up with her exposing herself to his mother. There was no toilet on the second floor of the home, and Sato, obsessing over cleanliness in an odd way, didn't use the toilet, instead using plastic bags, which he would then seal and put out into the hallway. He was embarrassed of this, so he forbid Sano to see the hallway, blindfolding her if it were ever necessary to go out there. One day, after being severely weakened, Sano fell out of bed, injuring her already weakened body. Nevertheless, she was forced to crawl down the stairs and into the shower herself while still blindfolded. The mother of Sato consulted the public health center in January 1996 because Sato continued to threaten Sano repeatedly during her confinement. He would often swing his knife around her, injuring her dozens of times in the process. In the beginning, he would bind her up so tightly that she couldn't move whenever he went to bed for the night. Her legs were bound tightly together for over a year straight. To make it even more difficult for her to escape, Sato kept the layout of the home a secret to her. Whenever he would leave the room, he would either blindfold her or tie her up and throw her under a blanket on the bed. After about a year or two, Sato got more violent in his torture of Sano. He started using a stun gun to deal out his sick punishments, threatening to stab her if she let out her voice while being shocked. She often had to bite down on a blanket to refrain from screaming as she got stunned. He would also attempt pro wrestling moves on her as well, again punishing her if she let her voice slip. It's believed that he hit her lightly during the duration of her captivity over 700 times, and that he hit her with considerable strength around 300 times. She would get hit in the eyes so hard that she would lose her sight from time to time. Eventually, she started using the stun gun on herself, hoping to be able to get used to the sensation so that it wouldn't bother her anymore. She developed a dissociative disorder as a defense mechanism, meaning she began feeling that another person was the one being hit, not her, allowing her to kind of distance herself from the pain inside her mind. Sano was initially... No, this didn't work out. While still on his suspended sentence, Sato took his mother's car and went out for a drive on November 13th of 1990. He drove around for a couple of hours until he ended up spotting a young girl that piqued his interest, Fusako Sano, at around 5 p.m. It was unplanned, as far as we know. Upon seeing the little girl walking around by herself, he made the decision to kidnap her. He parked the car in front of her and got out brandishing a knife, making his way closer to her. He told her, "Be good and don't say a word." Sano was too scared to move, so Sato was able to pick her up and throw her into the trunk of the car easily. He drove for a while until he stopped on the side of the road, where he got out and ran to the back of the car. He opened the trunk and bound Sano's hands with tape and covered her eyes as well. He once again closed the trunk and set off towards his house, arriving home at around 6:30 p.m. So that his mom wouldn't spot him hauling a 9-year-old into the house, he decided to enter the home through an entrance to the unfinished addition to the house. Then he went back around to the front door by himself and entered the home as normal, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. He went up to Sano, locked up in the old nursery, and removed her blindfold. He told her, "You don't want to end up killed like all those other kidnapped girls, do you? You're never going to leave this room. You're going to live in here forever. If you break this promise, I won't need you anymore. I'll bury you in the mountains or send you floating away in the ocean," he added. From here on, her confinement would continue for years and years and years. For murdering Kazuya on May 30th. When we raided Matsunaga's home, we found loads of pornographic photos and videos that he had taken. There were even photos where Matsunaga had taken pictures of naked women walking around with vibrators still inserted into themselves, said investigators. Mika wasn't accused of any of the murders, but terminated. As with Toraya several years back, all of the victims were broken down into pieces and boiled in pots. While this was happening, once again neighbors heard strange noises and noted a horrible smell. The family's bodies were all either flushed down toilets in public bathrooms or thrown out at sea. They had gotten completely away with it. As huge and climactic as that may have sounded, this wasn't even the end of Futoshi and Junko's crime spree. Just 2 years later in 2000, Futoshi already had another woman on the hook. This woman already had twins and was likely very desperate to find someone to become a father figure to them and to kind of help her out a little bit. Futoshi capitalized on this, once again luring her in with the promises of marriage and saying that Junko was his sister and Mika was his niece. The woman trusted him so much that she even handed over her kids to him. Futoshi and Junko put all of the kids into a separate apartment, about 5 minutes from their place in a different building. They basically just left them there. Futoshi would come to the apartment and give each of the kids one piece of bread. He would tell his son a line that his son still remembers to this day. "Think about how you're going to spread this out throughout the day." Sometimes Junko would come back later, bringing a little bit of food in a plastic bag, but it still wasn't much. Under the guise of needing money to take care of the kids, Futoshi ended up screwing his new lover out of 20 million yen, about 246,000 US dollars. Mika was still being held captive with them, unable to go anywhere. Although this new woman was told that they were all one big happy family, Mika always seemed rather gloomy and depressed. Eventually, she couldn't take it any longer and ran away from the family in January of 2002, going to her grandparents' home, possibly the only family she had left. After telling them that she had been on a very very-long business trip with her father, she begged to stay with them, and they happily complied. However, it didn't take long for Futoshi to track her down after talking to her own sister. In February, he was able to take her back home. Before he did, she left a note for her grandparents, urging them not to trust anything Futoshi ever said. As soon as they arrived back home, he severely tortured her more with electrical shocks. Futoshi stood by the door so that she couldn't run away again, as Junko continued to mistreat her even more horribly. Eventually, Junko started ripping out her toenails one by one with a pair of pliers. Screams echoed throughout the apartment, but again, the neighbors didn't report anything. A few days later, despite walking being extremely painful, Mika, now 17 years old, got away again, once again fleeing back to her grandparents' home in Kitakyushu. This time, the grandparents were ready for her, and they all called the police. Her captivity was finally at an end. The police waited for Futoshi to come pick her up one more time. He predictably did, unable to let anyone out from under his thumb. This was when the police ambushed him and arrested both him and Junko on the spot. Both Junko and Futoshi's 2 children were found and taken into police protection. Their most recent female victims' twins were found as well in another apartment alive. They were also taken in. Once the couple was taken into police custody, the details of the case slowly became known to the investigators, mainly due to what Mika was saying at the time. The details were so horrific that most of the media refused to even cover many more of the graphic details, only reporting that they had been holding people captive for the past several years. The media originally compared this case to the case of Fusako Sano that had taken place a few years before. Over time, they all actually began to grow to idolize him. The grandparents, very young, Aya being 10 and Yuki being 5 years old. Futoshi took control over the family and started using his tried and true brainwashing techniques on them. Over time, they all actually began to grow to idolize him, even become dependent on him. He often got the family drunk and encouraged them to share their deepest, darkest secrets with him. In true Futoshi Matsunaga fashion, he then used their own secrets against them and used them to turn them against each other as well. He even had the members of the family destroy evidence related to his previous crimes, hoping that they could be held as accomplices if need be. It was just one more thing to hold over their heads. After a while, Futoshi decided that he would like to have his way with Junko's married sister, Reiko, and went on to seduce her. By this point, her husband Kazuya wasn't even bothered. In fact, he seemed to be completely okay with it. He simply idolized the con man that much by this point. It wasn't only him, their kids, Aya and Yuki, were completely enamored by him as well. Junko found out about this business with her sister and was furious, but Futoshi denied it up and down. As he did with Toraya a few years prior, Futoshi began to severely limit the family's sleep, began taking their money for himself, started limiting their food intake, and of course started beating them and administering electric shocks to them. He pushed his perverse acts on the women of the family as well, even using electric shocks on their private areas while doing so. He wanted to control their minds and break their wills, which he did. It has been said that he employed a lot of mind control methods that cults tend to use, namely those that Shoko Asahara had used in the Aum Shinrikyo cult in the past. Limiting sleep and food, specifically protein, are a good way to severely limit a person's mental capacity, and Futoshi was well aware of this. After some time, he had successfully gotten Reiko and Kazuya to hate each other, even to the point where Kazuya was fine with beating her and her parents. He even got them to start divorce proceedings. It wasn't too long before Reiko and Kazuya stopped showing up to work entirely. Because of this, their money was starting to run dry. Futoshi started thinking that it was just about time to decrease the amount of people he would have to feed. Soon enough, something would happen that would lead him to decide who was to go in life. His main accomplice, but also that she was free to go and turn him in whenever she wanted if she chose to do so. Not only that, but he saw her as property, something that he owned, and he was furious that he couldn't just go and get her back. He decided to go full-on nuclear about this. He released false information that after Junko left him, he decided to take his own life. He even went as far as faking his own funeral and holding a service. Junko believed it and was finally comfortable enough to go back to her family and meet everyone. She hoped that she would be able to go back to her original life. Sadly enough, things would not be near that simple. Instead, Futoshi had been scoping out the home, waiting for this very moment. Once she went inside, he came up to the home and knocked on the door there along with Mika. He informed Junko that he had been waiting and went on to violently assault her. Junko's father, Takashige, and her mother, Shizumi, begged for him to leave. They even went as far as offering him 63 million yen to leave once and for all and never come back. To their surprise, Futoshi agreed. He never planned to keep this promise, however, as you might assume. He promised to leave, but instead took the money and then proceeded to hold them hostage instead. In the apartment was not only Junko's parents, but most of her extended family. This was at a time when the 3-generational family home was still pretty commonplace. There were Takashige and Shizumi Ogari and a horrible odor coming from the apartment, but they never actually did report it to anyone. While doing all of this, Futoshi and Junko took some of the remains and made some sort of heinous stew out of them. They forced Mika to drink some of the broth while they continued breaking the body down. Once they were all ready to get rid of it, Junko and Mika booked a ferry ride out into the bay, where they threw all the remains out into the ocean near the Kunisaki Peninsula. They didn't even take much of a break after this whole ordeal, as Futoshi soon found his next target. This time it was an older female acquaintance of Mika's. He took an interest in this woman, saying again that he was Junko's older brother, but this time adding that he was Mika's uncle. He was able to convince her that he was a graduate of Kyoto University, a very prestigious university, and soon won her over pretty easily. Over the course of less than a year, they were already in talks about marriage. But instead of actually marrying her, he just engaged in his good old fraud tactics and swindled a huge sum of money out of her. He got about 5.5 million yen out of her, which was, roughly about $70,000 at the time. The woman and her daughter ended up visiting Futoshi at his place, not knowing that it would be a very long time before they would ever be allowed to leave again. They were held prisoner there for about 7 months. Over these months, they experienced a lot of what had been going on over the past years: electrical shocks, torture, and mental abuse. It got to the point where the woman was so desperate to escape that in March of '97 she leapt from a second-story window and made a run for it. After all that happened, she was in such bad shape that she was put into the care of a mental hospital. Her daughter was given back to her father to be taken care of. By the time the police heard about all of this, the crew, being Futoshi, Junko, and Mika, were all long gone from the apartment. Again, Futoshi had gotten away with it, and again, he was further emboldened. The group settled into a new building, and Mika was never allowed to leave the apartment from this point onwards. Junko, however, had gotten Futoshi to trust her enough over the years that she was at least allowed to go to work. However, finally getting her fill of horror, she decided to make a break for it 1 month later in April. She left for work one day and simply never came back. She ran away to the Oita Prefecture and started working in a hostess club. Futoshi, needless to say, was enraged. He only knew of one possible place she could have gone, back to live with her family. He called them, and her mother, Shizumi, answered the phone. After much interrogation, she simply responded that she didn't know where Junko was and wouldn't tell him even if she did. She actually wasn't lying, though. Junko actually did go into hiding somewhere else, which her mother knew, but it wasn't at her home. Futoshi decided to go through his typical blackmail tactics, telling Shizumi that Junko had murdered Toraya and that he would go to the police if she didn't turn her over. However, Shizumi stood her ground. Futoshi then went on to tell her that he would tell everyone that he forced himself on her all those years ago to add some further humiliation, but she still didn't relent. Futoshi had finally seen a dramatic failure. This failure meant that he was not only losing his main accomplice, but also that she was free to go and turn him in whenever she wanted if she chose to do so. Not only that, but he saw her as property, something that he owned, and he was furious that he couldn't just go and get her back. It was believable as they had some experience doing that themselves. Later on that year, the couple was completely bankrupt. So Futoshi decided upon his next victim, a previous acquaintance from back home named Toraya Kumio, and his daughter. The daughter's name has always been withheld in the media, so let's call her Mika just for simplicity's sake. While still living back in his original city, back in the tatami business days, Futoshi had become friends with Toraya, and the two had often gone out for drinks. When drunk, Toraya would often talk way too much, spilling details about his criminal history to Futoshi, even going as far as telling him that gangs and loan sharks were after him. Futoshi listened very intently, gathering all the information he could over a long period of time to use it to as great an advantage as he could. One night, Futoshi and Junko decided that they would be moving back home. They went to none other than the Kumio household and knocked on the door. Futoshi informed Toraya that he would be living there from then on out along with Junko. With Futoshi knowing about what he did and his past, Toraya could do little to refuse him and reluctantly let him in. This would be the beginning of the end for him. He and his daughter would be held captive in his own apartment for the next 2 years. Right from the beginning, Futoshi and Junko set out to make Toraya and Mika hate each other as much as possible. First by simple rumors and gossip, and later via violence. They forced the father and daughter to punch each other, being told that they would be shocked by the stun gun again if they refused. At one point, they took this very far, with Mika having to punch her father as hard as she could while he did nothing to protect himself. This did some damage, both to him physically and to the both of them mentally. This changed something in Mika, and she was never the same since. Futoshi would only allow the two to eat small bits of food, usually some rice here and there or some instant ramen, and they were given a very limited time to do so. Not content with only controlling their food intake, he began controlling their sleep as well, only allowing them 3 hours a night to sleep. Mika was still in school, although needless to say, her grades began plummeting. On some days, Futoshi would force Toraya and Mika to commit acts on each other, usually involving the mouth, and took pictures of it while laughing to himself. Toraya and Mika would be locked in the freezing cold bathroom for long periods of time in the winter. Futoshi and Junko would periodically spray cold water on them, which would freeze. Sometimes Toraya was unable to continue standing, and after he fell, he would be severely beaten. Most parts of the home were only reserved for Futoshi and Junko. They laid down cardboard boxes throughout the house that marked where Toraya and his daughter were allowed to step, which wasn't many places. They slept on either a drain on the ground or on newspapers laid out in the bathroom. They were forced to sit on these newspapers and eat on the floor as well. The two were only allowed to use the bathroom once a day, and they were forced to use glass bottles rather than an actual toilet. If Toraya failed to hit the glass bottle, or if he would make a mess at any other time of the day outside of the designated bathroom time, he would be forced to eat whatever hit the floor. Futoshi documented all of this with pictures. He took photos while Junko harmed the victims, drew graffiti on their faces and took pictures of them eating in front of egg timers, basically documenting all of this for his own amusement. Over time, Toraya began taking more and more of the abuse. Electrical shocks had become a normal part of life for him, which resulted in unsightly scabs all over his body. At points, his limbs were completely swollen and bone was even visible in some areas. If any of those scabs ever fell off, he would be forced to eat them as well. A lot of this took place while he was in an actual wooden cage. He was shocked to the point where he could no longer move any of his limbs. Not only was Futoshi doing all of this to him, but he started forcing Mika to attack her father as well, often forcing her to strike him and bite him. Toraya Kumio's body couldn't hold out any longer, and he died from the torture in February of 1996 at the young age of 34. Using Mika's recent increase in abuse to her father to his advantage, Futoshi decided to manipulate her into thinking that she, in fact, was the one who actually killed him. So he said that this was on her, and Junko, of course, to dismember, pulverize, and dispose of the remains. He even forced Mika to write a letter of confession, saying that she was the one who killed him. That night, the neighbors complained to each other about the noise of a buzzsaw and a horrible odor coming from the apartment, but they never actually did report it to anyone. While doing all of this, Futoshi and Junko He cared that it was a great way to launder money, which he was likely doing at this point because he had already defrauded and stole from numerous people that he knew at this point. He had amassed a small fortune after swindling many people out of their life savings using his traditional manipulation and blackmail techniques. Most of the people he did business with looked like they were gangsters, said people who were his acquaintances at the time. Futoshi mingled with everyone he could, usually having a different identity and supposed career each time. Sometimes he was a novelist, sometimes he was a university lecturer, sometimes he was a graduate of Tokyo University, the most elite university in the country. He would just use any career that he felt made him seem like more of a prestigious intellectual. By 1992, Futoshi Matsunaga had stolen about 180 million yen from those he had defrauded, the equivalent of about 2.2 million US dollars. He specialized in blackmail in particular, which made it very hard for his victims to come forward. He always had some sort of horrible secret that he could hold over their heads. However, regardless, the police eventually did catch on. Futoshi dipped and suddenly disappeared along with Junko. The police issued a warrant for his arrest, that being for fraud, and he quickly made it to the top of the country's most wanted list based on sheer numerical figures alone. Futoshi and Junko started living in a condo out in Kokurakitaku. Futoshi told this woman he did on several occasions herself, as well as having seen her bruises. Her lack of approval infuriated Futoshi. He was used to getting whatever he wanted, especially when it came to getting whatever he wanted by manipulating those around him. Losing himself to his anger, he forced himself on Shizumi, his own girlfriend's mother. Junko, although knowing that they had got into some sort of altercation, wasn't aware of this. Futoshi had told her that Shizumi had tried to seduce him, so he hit her a bit. That's all she knew. 1 year later and in control of another person, he admitted that he'd like to know that people were afraid of him, and this was when he also admitted that this incident was not his first rodeo. Scott would often go out to bars in San Bernardino, where he would meet various men, usually male prostitutes. He would then invite them over to do some drugs with him. When they were high as a kite, he'd restrain them much as he did the previous victim and take them out into the desert. There he would force himself upon them over and over again until he grew tired of it. Then he would murder them and throw them into one of the many abandoned mine shafts in the area. He confessed that he had done this with up to 7 men, adding that nobody ever suspected him of anything, let alone questioned him. His ex-girlfriend, Catherine, came to admit that she knew about these crimes but was too afraid to say anything. Meanwhile, Joshua was 16 years old. Everyone was talking about a cool new movie, The Matrix. Joshua said, "The Matrix impacted me a lot. When I would watch The Matrix, I would see myself in that role. I would see myself shooting the bullies and the people who had hurt me in my life. And this movie was a type of a release of aggression. It made me feel better when I would watch it. So I watched this movie hundreds of times." Continuing, he added, "The video games were the same, played the same part. Video games like Grand Theft Auto, Blood Rain, Resident Evil, Doom, Quake, shooter games. When I would play these games, it did a lot for me mentally, for I could release my aggression with these games. I could almost bring my fantasies to fruition. The way I would immerse myself in these games, sometimes I would play them 12 to 15 hours a day without leaving my room. I would have food and all kinds of things stashed in my room so I wouldn't have to leave." When an old bully from middle school taunted him in class one day, Joshua completely lost it. He was now a good-sized kid, being 6 foot and 200 pounds. He flipped his heavy desk over, grabbing that kid by the collar until the teacher broke them up. That kid never did bother him again. Joshua started dressing in all black. Joshua kind of got the sense that their father often shrugged them off. Joshua started wetting the bed, frequently. He didn't know why, there didn't really seem to be a cause. This made his mother very angry, causing her to go as far as rubbing his face in it like a dog, yelling, "Smell it, you're disgusting." To avoid this treatment, Joshua began hiding his sheets in the closet. It appears that Eli Gill still holds his employee hid under guest beds to record them naked after showers. Here we have the strange case of took a keen interest in girls who were not quite of age, hiding cameras in their bathrooms and photographing them in various states of undress. Arvind didn't stop there, though. He didn't keep his distance. In fact, he got very direct with his spying, even going as far as hiding under his victims' beds to film them changing himself. Arvind's plans were foiled when a young girl reached under the sink in her bathroom to get a new roll of toilet paper and touch something strange, coming across a hidden camera screwed into the underside of the counter below the sink. She was in horror, realizing that she had used this bathroom to change, shower, and do her business multiple times by this point in the trip. Not only that, she was staying with her mother and older sister in the same room. The family notified security on the ship, and they quickly came out to inspect the room.
That John is likely guilty of far more fires and potentially deaths than we can ever possibly know about. All said and done, Matassa believes that John Orr set nearly 2,000 fires between 1984 and 1991. And according to Glenn Lucero, there was a significant drop in all types of fires that John was known to set, with one source stating that that drop is as much as 90% for brush fires in the nearby foothill areas after John's arrest. The significance of this book and this specific letter simply cannot be overstated. And, a word of warning for anyone out there who's trying to do bad things and get away with them. Maybe don't write about yourself committing any crimes in a book. And especially don't try and get that book published. I feel like those are pretty intuitive rules to follow if you plan on getting away with anything. But needless to say, those days were long gone. The entire cover letter and concept of the book was so fundamentally damning for a very simple reason. Even if John had some kind of inkling that a firefighter was responsible for the fires in his area, the city of Glendale, and even if he knew about some kind of ATF investigation into a serial arsonist, he shouldn't have known that this investigation went beyond Los Angeles, or that a firefighter, which all arson investigators are by the way, was at the centre of it. The ATF had only just found out themselves. They needed more than circumstantial evidence. They needed to catch John in the act. So they followed John back home, attached another tracking device to his car, this time smaller, and waited for something big to happen. They needed John to set a fire. Short of a confession, it was the only thing that was going to work. Of course, at this point a confession would be nice, but it's not like John was going to write a whole bunch of his crimes in a book and then try to get that book published. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous, perhaps, but no one is exempt from John's poor decision-making skills. Not even John himself. It was about a month later when the Amigos received a frantic call from John Orr's boss. He had something. Burn LA to the ground. Store after store after store. These weren't small fires either. Entire department stores were being burned to the ground at peak shopping periods. Some of these stores were filled with hundreds of customers who barely escaped with their lives. Some of them contained large toy sections that kids were browsing with their parents. Again, how nobody died during these attacks is a complete mystery. These fires caused millions of dollars worth of damage. It was a disaster. People were getting paranoid. Any abandoned shopping bag or package would prompt a call to emergency services. The bigger retail establishments even started hiring extra security. These fires were strategic and malicious. Fires and then distraction fires, always the same MO. The point of origin always in a display rack of synthetic materials, usually cushions or pillows of some type. And then the delayed incendiary device started popping back up again. It was out of control. Towards the end of this spree, the arsonist had started 5 fires within a 2-hour period in one small area. And if you're exasperated right now, don't worry. Do you remember how I said that communication between departments just wasn't that great back then? Well, it turns out if you burn enough buildings to the ground, that'll change. I guess it should come as no surprise to anyone that while setting fires near an arson investigators conference will certainly get you some attention, going on a full-on GTA-style timed rampage mission in central Los Angeles is going to get you the full 5 stars. So welcome back again to the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, the big guns, the folks that invest without losing his... Marv was bitterly disappointed. The whole thing had made him an outcast. Many of his fellow investigators shunned him. He knew that he couldn't take it further. At least, not right now. Not without losing his job. He would just have to wait until the arsonist struck again. That wait would be a long one. 2 years, to be precise. But eventually, as you now know, our lone arsonist is not a very good decision maker. And he just can't help himself. This time, the Arson Investigators Conference was in Pacific Grove, a city on the coast. This many arsons, recall that nobody was hurt, or worse. Scott Baker, an arson investigator with the Californian State Fire Marshal, arrived on the scene that day. Oh, he knew it was arson all right, but this many arsons in a city that was holding an Arson Investigators Conference? Some things are just beyond coincidence, and alarm bells were going off. The very next morning, Friday the 16th of January, 40 miles south from Fresno, another fire erupted in a surplus store in a city called Tulare, again in a sleeping bag display, and then 45 minutes later, on the other side of the city, there was another fire, this time in a bin full of foam pillows at a discount store, but the arsonist wasn't done yet. A few hours later, an hour south down the highway from Tulare, 2 more fires broke out in a city called Bakersfield, the first in a craft store, and the second in a fabric store, both in, you guessed it, a display bin full of synthetic materials. Only this time, the arsonist messed up. Because called to the scene of the first fire in Bakersfield, the one at the craft store, was an arson investigator called Marvin Casey, and no prizes for guessing what he was about to find. And the fire in the craft store hadn't been that bad. The manager had noticed it right away and put it out with a fire extinguisher. This left a white powdery residue at the fire's point of origin, which Marvin noticed straight away. It was a wooden bin that was at one point full of decorative synthetic flowers. Marvin poked his head inside, and right there at the bottom, he saw something. A delayed incendiary device. The delayed incendiary device. And right next to it, a small piece of yellow lined notepaper. He carefully picked both up and put them in an evidence bag. Later that day, Marvin received a call from Scott Baker, the arson investigator up in Fresno, and it was here finally that the dots started to connect. The same incendiary device, right down to the brand of cigarette and the number of matches, was found in one of Scott's Fresno fires. And the witness descriptions, though fairly vague, were all similar. Dark-haired man of average height and average build. The device was found on a particularly bad hillside fire that had destroyed several homes. Investigators began theorizing that the arsonist was disguising himself as a photographer and then returning to the scene to watch, perhaps taunt investigators. Then, of course, there was the time he showed up at a gift and home accessories store in Burbank. When the inevitable fire started, the owner of that store wasn't able to get through to emergency services. When she escaped the store, she luckily ran into a deputy sheriff just hanging out in the alleyway. Panicking, she told him she was really worried about the old man living next door. And then this mysterious deputy sheriff quickly sprang into action, jumping the fence to warn the man. When the firefighters finally arrived, the elusive sheriff was nowhere to be seen. Of course, the sheriff was the coin tosser playing yet more mind games, though he had just made himself extremely recognizable to the shop owner, which feels like one of those decisions that will have consequences somewhere down the line. That's the weird thing about the coin tosser. He makes some pretty risky and brazen choices, yet somehow, he always has this uncanny ability to disguise himself, to blend into a crowd. Every time Doug and John thought they had something, a suspect, a clear van description, for example, they chased the lead all around town, and would always come to nothing. It was obvious. And it didn't take Marvin long to find the device that had started it. A cigarette, designed to burn down to 3 matches. Whoever had done this was experienced, but they had just made a huge mistake. Because next to that device, Marvin found a single piece of paper containing a fingerprint, and that fingerprint would eventually lead investigators to the most prolific arsonist of the 20th century. A vicious and cold-blooded killer who had been terrorizing California for years, burning buildings to the ground with people still inside. But not only was that man the last person anybody would have expected, in one of the most bizarre twists I've ever come across.
That he began to hate studying. While one of his teachers has said he wasn't outstanding in studies or extracurricular activities at all, he was really a mediocre student. In competition with the brighter students at his high school and suffering from quite the blow to his motivation, Tomohiro's grades began to plummet. Because of this, he felt like he really was losing his mother for good. All she really seemed to care about was his success, and he wasn't getting it. Whether it was true or just inside of his head, he felt that his mother was slowly losing interest in him and abandoning him in favor of his more successful younger brother. Eventually, both Tomohiro and his younger brother started to turn on their mother. After taking her abuse for so long, they were now big enough to turn the tables on her. A neighbor of theirs has said that she would hear them from time to time beating on their mother. This same neighbor was told by the mother that it was now painful to sit at the dinner table together with them. This increasingly hostile and violent home life didn't do anything to improve his school life by any means. His academic ranking fell rules as to what makes a story flow. He even admitted that most of very few methods of communication, all he really had to do was work on his new book. He admitted that he wrote the entire book non-stop, taking breaks only to sleep. The book was a complete stream of consciousness. He even admitted that most of it was, quote, garbage that he needed to discard, only keeping the remaining half. He didn't know how to write and didn't follow any of the traditional rules as to what makes a story flow. Regardless, he was happy with the outcome.
There's a certain madness in anything grand, right? To the extent that this book has grandeur, there's madness baked right into it.
Over the period of only a few months, he was able to bust out 2,400 pages, 1.2 million words in total, making it longer than the actual Bible itself. He said that he felt the book existed as a mind virus, a method to implant ideas into people.
The book is a mind virus. I
down that it happened, only until they search it up. Yeah. Crazy Mandela effect. Gmod. Gary's Mod is a sandbox game that I used to frequent myself. It's a game that can be anything you want it to be. It can be seen as a first-person shooter game, a role-playing game, just anything you can think of. But that's just where things go absolutely wrong. As on Gmod, you're able to make custom mods and maps. And so some people decided to recreate the mass shootings that I listed earlier as realistically as possible. Meaning, yes, you can go out, download these maps, and reenact those happenings. This mainly became an incredibly well-known thing when Gmod realism started popping off, which, if you don't know, is essentially a mod that aims to make Gmod look as realistic as possible. As you had someone re-upload a reenactment of the Columbine massacre, which led to lots of controversy after being shared on Reddit. Of course, this isn't the only case of mass shootings being reenacted in Gmod, because you literally had maps being made reenacting Christchurch not even a week after it happened. It's just some crazy stuff. And those are just a bunch to name. Was an attack that took place at the annual Boston Awards on April 15th, 2013. The brothers behind this tragedy were Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev. They planned 2 homemade cooker pressure bombs near the finish line of the race that would both successfully detonate. 3 people sadly lost their lives and hundreds of other people were injured, 17 of which lost their limbs. Tamerlan, while on the run, ended up suffering from critical injuries which he ended up succumbing to.
It's thought to be inspired by a real event, which is the MK-Ultra program by the CIA in the 1960s, when they secretly tried to use many people as test subjects for their mind-controlled drugs and psychological manipulation experiments. And by putting the hints together, you'll find out that Dwayne worked in a water plant before, and he was paid to develop a substance to poison the water. This substance was basically a psychological drug that was intended to be tested on the residents of the houses that drink that water, and one of these houses is the one we're currently in. It is suggested that all the residents I mentioned, Lucy, Dolores, and Rakan, were exposed to this poisoned water, and all of their hallucinations were because of it. Dwayne is seeing all of these scenes because of his feelings of guilt, due to the fact that he played a part in their pain. This section of the story is thought to be inspired by a real event, which
supervised. His work had an international impact. Matthew reveled in the social side of university. He looked to impress his peers. He wasn't going to be that person who stayed inside all day studying. He wanted to be the life and soul of the party. What many didn't know, though, was that behind the smiles and laughter lay a dark secret. That's Matthew Folder. As early as 2007, he'd been setting up hidden cameras in bathrooms at publicly accessible toilets and his parents' home, covertly recording females he both knew and didn't. In total, 27 videos were taken of 8 victims over the period of a few years. This footage would initially be for personal use, but soon made its way onto the dark net in roughly 2009 when Matthew connected with like-minded individuals. Not much is known about his early days on the dark net, other than he would trade that footage in return for different depraved material. Nearly a decade on, police had connected him to online accounts that posted some of the most horrific child abuse videos. When that connection was eventually made in 2017, a 2-month surveillance operation everyone, so feel free to say no. But my offer is as follows. I would be interested in requesting photographs from you of yourself, either topless or in the nude. In exchange for this, I would be willing to pay between £300 to £800. As a bit of a background, i.e. why is this perv asking me for these pictures? I certainly wouldn't go as far as to call myself an artist, but I love to draw, mostly in charcoal, and the images I would ask you to produce would be the sort of thing that most inspires me. Absolutely nobody besides myself would ever see them. Let me know if this is something of interest for you. Thank you for taking your time to read this. Was an email sent out by a person called Liz to various people who listed services such as babysitting and dog walking on Gumtree, a classified ads website. The people who listed were looking to earn a bit of cash on the side. A lot of the time it had been children in their early teens. So when the offer of quick money was there to help someone with an art piece, they jumped at the offer. What they didn't know, though, was that once those images were sent, they'd be sucked into a blackmail scheme. If they didn't continue to send images that got more degrading as time went on, Liz would threaten to leak what material they had to people who knew of the victim. Whoever this Liz character was did their due diligence in order to keep the blackmail scheme going. After targeting quite literally tens of children throughout 2012 and 2013, it was no surprise that police were fully aware of who Liz was. But the police had no way of figuring out Liz's true identity because Liz had used different means to hide any leads going back to them. In other words, they were a ghost. However, it wouldn't be too long before detectives in the United Kingdom connected Liz to a darknet site by the name of Hurt to the Core. Let's rewind. Earlier on in the video, we were discussing Hurt to the Core and some of the popular threads it contained. One of those was titled, Need Ideas for Blackmailed Girl, aged 15. The FBI would figure out that the person behind the thread, in the garden, had been from the UK, and so they alerted their UK counterparts, the National Crime Agency, to give them a heads up about the discovery. Some point after this notification, a 15-year-old girl who fell victim to Liz's Gumtree blackmail scheme came forward to police, and after doing a cross-reference in the database, it was clear to detectives that the girl who just came forward was the 15-year-old girl referenced in the thread on Hurt to the Core. The National Crime Agency had made the connection. In the garden and Liz were the same person. The hunt was on. Well, not exactly. I basically had a needle in a haystack of views.
Required to view these images. I now pass on to David.
Shannon McCall had been a government-approved social care worker looking after vulnerable children, some who had previously been sexually abused. Many complaints had been made about him in the past about his inappropriate behaviour towards children, but ultimately those complaints were swept under the rug. For 3 years, he went on to sexually abuse 7 children while he was taking care of them as a government-approved social care worker. One of the victims had been a young disabled boy, and another, an 18-month-old toddler. All are thought to have been under the age of 12. A pattern in the way Ski greeted the users in the VIP section of the Love Zone. He used the phrase hires, and although the general consensus is that this phrase is used by females, police knew they were dealing with a man because Ski was actively producing fresh child abuse material. He would be raping different children, 7 to be exact. They also knew that Ski was an Australian because he made victims hold a piece of paper with the word Aussie written on it while they were being raped. Police had to act quick, and so Task Force Argos team member Paul Griffiths, a victim identification specialist, punched in the phrase hires on Google. 450,000 results were returned, but to Paul's surprise, within the first few pages, the phrase hires had been used by a man on an Australian forum board about trucks. He was asking for advice about raising the suspension to his VW utility, and had made the mistake of leaving his license plate there. When police searched the license plate up, it was registered to a man by the name of Shannon McCool. Police were now confident enough that they had finally caught Ski, so they made their move. And to no surprise, they captured the right man.
Good morning, everyone. David.
And it's like 141 pages long, and it says like the life of Elliot Rodger.
Okay.
And it talks about killing people.
Okay, yeah, we actually have somebody else. What's your name?
Following the shooting, police once again made their way to Elliot's apartment, where they uncovered the bodies of his roommates Wee-Han Wong and Shin Hong, and their friend George Chin. The horror continued to unfold as law enforcement searched Elliot's room, where they found disturbing pieces of evidence, indicating that he had been planning the attack for an extensive amount of time. This included a small sledgehammer, one 18-inch blade machete, a zombie killer fixed blade knife, a folding knife, lottery tickets, a book entitled The Art of Seduction, various handgun cases, a printout of his 137-page email, personal journals, a hand-drawn picture of a person being stabbed by multiple knives, along with several additional items.
Is able to force her right hand to her neck, to her throat, and it feels so weird. There was something thick and wet on her neck, and suddenly she felt pain. She lifts her hand in the air and she sees blood, like a whole lot of blood. Jennifer's arm went cold. It collapsed. She went cold again. All over her body, there was just wounds, tiny wounds everywhere. You know where she had been left in the field? Someone had discarded her on top of a fire anthill.
Oh my goodness.
She was completely unclothed. There were hundreds and thousands of fire ants biting every single surface of her body that they could find. Jennifer had been tortured, assaulted, her throat had been slit, and left for dead on a fire anthill. So Jennifer gets rushed to the hospital where police officers, doctors, nurses, her mother, everyone is telling her she's safe. Nothing. There's no fire. The false alarm. There was no fire. But just to be sure, they did a double check around the block. They checked all the surrounding buildings. They checked the air just in case maybe there's like a leak of some sort of gas leak. And they decided, nope, this is positively a false alarm. Now, none of them were upset about the false alarm. It happens. It doesn't happen too often, but it does happen. It's never a prank call or anything like that. It's typically a civilian being hypervigilant. And the firefighters would rather hypervigilant civilians looking for things rather than a bunch of people that don't look out for each other. So they pack up their truck. They start driving back to the station. And at 3:47 a.m., they're about 2 minutes away from their station. They hadn't made it back yet, okay? Another incoming call. The caller states, hurry, you have to come quick. There's a 2-story house that's engulfed in flames.
Is it the same address?
No. So they U-turn, turn on their... So they're rushing. They get in their fire trucks, they get the ambulances, they get the rescue vehicles. Yeah, they're literally in charge of all of that. They turn on their sirens and they start rushing to the scene of the fire. They've got the adrenaline pumping in their veins. So early mornings are the hardest times for firefighters, not just due to the lack of sleep and rest, but the fact that fires around 3 a.m. are usually called once they've already been too big. Like once they're already at the point of being uncontrollable. Most people are sleeping at this time. When the fire starts, when it's small, no one really recognizes it. The fire has to be big enough where someone wakes up or someone sees it in the dark. In comparison, fires that happen during the day, there's almost always people nearby to spot it early on. So they're all on edge. They're rushing as fast as humanly possible to the scene. And when they get there, they're standing in front of the building with sweat dripping firefighter for Hose West Fire Station. And that very night, 6 firemen from that exact station would be found dead. And it wasn't just a bad fire. It was an entire burning house of secrets. It was like the house of hell. And it took 6 of their lives. The firefighters would risk their lives that night looking for a man in the fire that maybe didn't even exist. They were sent into the burning house wearing rain jackets. And the more that this hell house burned, the more the secrets would leak out. And by the end of it, it basically ripped the nation apart. So let's talk about the case.
Told to force Eddie to create a operative, Michael and his mother. On the 23rd of March 2016, Michael's mother Maria handed a package with $9,000 cash to another covert operative. Michael and his mother had instructed this hitman to make it look like Eddie had taken his own life. He was told to force Eddie to create a false confession letter for the police to find, and that this letter should contain an admission of guilt that he killed Karen and that Michael had nothing to do with it. 6 days later, the undercover officer told them that the job had been done. Michael told Mattie Thompson to show his mother a photograph of the body as proof that Eddie had actually been killed in the way he specified. The undercover officer then asked Michael if his mother would be able to handle
this video. It also has, by far, the darkest. I'm not kidding when I say that the piece of media I most frequently thought of while playing Bramble was Come and See, the 1985 Soviet anti-war film widely considered to contain some of the most harrowing images ever put on screen. Bramble parallels specific scenes from Come and See: the awful trek through a bog, the empty villages haunted by the dead, a young blonde boy's face contorted by fear and trauma. But just as effectively, the game parallels the surreal nightmare tone of the film. Short glimpses of happiness and whimsy are snatched as a quick and easy
machinery was able, at best, to extract nuggets of corroborative information from torture victims. Often, that information was false, misleading, or incomplete.
As the pressure to swiftly get actionable intel increases, torture's efficacy plummets. Virtually all literature on interrogations concludes that lengthy engagements are far more effective at getting quality intelligence from a prisoner, whether through rapport building or torture techniques. In other words, the high-pressure situations of Call of Duty present a worst-case scenario for interrogation. Vanguard, Nazi officer Richter puts out a cigarette on Lieutenant Kingsley's neck while questioning him. In the same game, the same officer smashes Lieutenant Petrova's face into a table while questioning her. In Call of Duty Advanced,
as subhuman cannibals. For example, placentophagy is the act of eating the placenta and afterbirth components during and after a woman has a child. This behavior is actually pretty common among mammals and can be seen in primates as well. In the 1970s, North American women began eating their placentas as sort of a fringe New Age practice. Today, it is not common, but it is also not entirely rare. However, despite consuming human flesh, I doubt any placenta-eating mothers would describe what they are doing as cannibalism. I would hesitate to make any broad-reaching prescriptions on the basis of this, but it is worth noting, cannibals are almost always other people, which tend to emerge in survival cannibalism situations. First, and probably unsurprisingly, cannibalism is an absolute last resort. People will consume virtually anything before consuming human flesh. The second pattern is that people generally will not consume close relatives and are more inclined to eat members of other races or identifiable outside groups. The third is that people generally do not consume the face, fingers, hands, and genitals. These parts are often associated with some degree of humanity and even personhood. But the last pattern is that when other portions of meat have been exhausted, individuals will readily consume these previously unwanted parts. So that's 3 of 4 functions of cannibalism. But there's one final context. The most heinous examples of cannibalism are likely those that come from a place of crime.
The CEO, Mr. Stop the executives. Nobody is coming in to call the cops for 3 hours. The professor actively feared for his life. And in the end, the CEO, Mr. Yang, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech startup, laughed at him and threw $2,000 on the ground. This should be enough for hospital fees. Hey, by the way, you can call the cops if you want, but I'm worth $200 million. And money talks. So who do you think they're going to listen to? And with that, he and the executives walked out of the meeting room. The professor knew that this was the truth. I mean, the police are not going to listen to him. I think in any country, money talks, and you are talking about a very powerful, influential, wealthy man with probably prosecutors, police, politicians in his pocket. The professor stood up and he looks out the conference room and he just sees the most stuff. They all took turns spitting on his face and forced him to lick up all the saliva that they had just spat. This is a respected university professor. There are dozens, if not 100 employees outside watching this happen, letting it happen. Nobody is coming in to stop the executives. If you hit your head really, really hard on them, they tied his hands behind his back and then stomped on his fingers, crushing them.
Oh my God.
They would mock him. Hey, if you hit your head really, really hard on this desk, you might just die. And if you die, we don't have to torture you anymore, so what do you say? You want to do it? They went through his phone. They took pictures of his credit card, his ID, the contacts on his phone list. They gathered all the numbers and addresses of all of his loved ones. They threatened to hurt them. The executives laughed. They mocked at his injuries, and they grabbed the back of his head with his hair, shoved his face to the ground. Lick his shoe. Lick it. He was forced to lick the CEO's shoes. But even that wasn't enough. They were like, at least maybe she can have kids. Mind you, she can't consent to sexual activity because she can't. They said, I know my daughter can't fall in love with someone like other girls her age, but maybe she can still make babies. So they offered her up as a birthing machine, basically. They were honest with potential suitors and potential grooms and said, she's not going to be a perfect wife. She's not going to be a companion. She's going to need a lot of care, but she can be R-worded and forcibly impregnated, basically. Like, what is going on right now? A man named Dawn became her matchmaker to find her a husband. She's still alive. She has no terminal illness. He finds a client named P, who's interested in buying May. P straight up told Dawn that his only requirement in his new wife is that she can give birth to his children. He literally doesn't care if they get along. So Dawn brings P to May's family home. He meets with the parents, pays them $300 and buys May. There's no price on humans, but from everything we just talked about, $300? P takes, kidnaps May, and brings her home. After a while, he demands a refund. He said May is more work than he thought, and he didn't want to take care of her because she was, and I quote, stupid beyond imagination. Again, I hate this man. I hate this man. But he said he took her to the doctor, who informed him she could never give birth. So he's like, I don't even want to keep R-wording her because she can't have my children. He drags May back to the matchmaker, demands a refund, and says she's just another burden, I want my money back. Dawn, the matchmaker, pays the money back, and instead of bringing May back to her family, which I don't even know if that would have been a good thing at this point because are they just going to sell her again? Dawn tries to sell her again himself, but nobody wants to purchase her as a wife, and that's when he bumps into another matchmaker. But that matchmaker was not a matchmaker for the living. They were a ghost matchmaker, and a murderous one. Side note, not every ghost matchmaker is a killer, but getting no hits. So he's like, oh, you don't know? I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna sell her as a ghost bride. I'm gonna make literally maybe 10 grand. So I'm gonna profit a lot from this. He's like, oh my God, I wanna get into this industry. So they both profited about $4,000 from murdering May. They found a buyer, May. She trusted them and did what she was told. The poison is known to work very, very slowly, which white powder used for heavy-duty cleaning, spooned it to a piece of bread and forcibly fed it to May. She trusted them and did what she was told. The poison is known to work very, very slowly, which, can you imagine how painful that must have been? It lasted hours. And even when it was time to bring her to the quote groom's family, she was still alive. Barely, but still alive. Dawn didn't want to wait any longer, so he leaned over and strangled her to death. She was brought to Yuan, who buried her with his brother, who passed. He had no idea that May was killed for this. He had no idea that the matchmakers were just murderers. It seemed in his own little way he just wanted the best for his brother. He was devastated to learn what happened to May. May's family, the parents also blamed themselves. The family name and the bloodline. This led to a lot of pregnancies being terminated because the gender was not what they hoped for. And it's sexist. These are also not gender reveal parties where people are like, oh man, I really wanted blue balloons because I want to throw baseballs with my son. Instead of a girly girl. It's not like that. In China, back then especially, and probably even now anywhere in this world, it's fucking rough to be a girl. Why would any mom want to bring a girl into this world to see her suffer the same life that she's suffered so far? You get it, it's a lot of layers of complexity. It's not like China's just filled with moms that are obsessed with pink boy mom in their Instagram bio. It's very dark. And it said that during this time, a lot of baby girls were abandoned or left to be adopted. It said adoption rates overseas saw a huge... The man was 65 years old. He had retired, but someone had told him, you know, you can make a lot of money selling dead women's bodies. He's like, that's good. Let me sell dead women's bodies. But inventory ran out. So the way that it started, he would spend most of his time driving around with his accomplices looking for vulnerable women. Now, since he's 65, he would use his age and kind appearance to his advantage and ask these women for help or help these women. Most of the women he targeted either had some sort of disability or had something going on where they were extra vulnerable. He felt like they were easier to target. This man did not see these women as real people. They were just inventory to him. He would kidnap these women, and at first he thought, I don't want to commit murder. You know, that's too much. I could go to jail for a very long time for that. I want to just sell these women. I just want to be a human trafficker. That's it. So simple, so innocent. I'm just going to look for buyers. I'm going to sell these women while they're still alive. So he would contact these super poor families in the area who had sons that were looking for wives. Now, these are families that don't have much, so no woman wants to marry into this family, but these families are willing to pay a ton for physical companionship. Side note, the disabilities also meant that it would be hard for the women or the victims to tell the truth of what was going on, and it would also mean that they were being R-worded. Because if they have a disability to that extent where they cannot communicate what happened, I imagine that they cannot consent. So he would first reach out to these families, and this their needs with these women who clearly cannot consent to sex trafficking. Let's do it. He starts to her over and over again. I literally want to punch these people just one time. That's a lot of work. So he would first reach out to these families, and this was his business model when he first started. But the man was greedy. He was upset that he would have to go through all of this work to kidnap one girl, then he would be able to sell her just one time. That's a lot of work. So he's like, there's got to be a better business plan. So he creates a way to infinitely sell her over and over again. I literally want to punch these people in the face and honestly bury them alive. So he decides to start a sex trafficking ring. He's like, human trafficking, sex trafficking, let's do it. He starts a brothel in his house, if you will, where men will come to, quote, meet their needs with these women who clearly cannot consent, but they're also extra vulnerable. He was actually caught doing this. Women were rescued from his house. They were being held hostage. They were rescued by the police. I mean, it was clear that they were forced into this. But he goes to prison for like a few years, gets out, and goes right back to his human trafficking scheme. And this time he's like, you know what? I've learned my lesson. Dead people don't talk. So he didn't like selling women while they were alive. So he wanted to sell them dead. In some parts of the world, women's bodies are worth more dead than they are alive. It's a statistic that makes you want to gag. Even with dead women's bodies, there are levels, rankings. The best type is what they call a fresh corpse, a fresh one. These are bodies of women that had just died. In fact, negotiations for the sale of these bodies typically happen while the person is still laying in the hospital bed fighting for their lives.
Wow.
And the parents are usually in on it. The starting price is, depending on the supply and demand, $12,000 on average for a super fresh women's corpse, but can go up to $50,000. The second grade is what they call a, quote, wet corpse. These are the bodies of people who have died a few weeks to a few months ago, and they range anywhere between $7,000 to $12,000 on average. Then lastly, you have dried meat. These are corpses that have died years ago, but they still go for a few thousands of dollars. And I kid you not, but the corpses of girls who were more well-off or more educated, they sold for higher, even though they're dead. Okay, this is, you know what this reminds me of? How Marilyn Monroe's body went missing for hours after she died. And this also reminds me of how back in the day when queens would die, usually it was only female attendants that were allowed with her body before she was buried. Because, yeah, because if you let a man in there, some of these men will do some very vile things. I mean, if you want a whole case on that, please let me know. But that's all to say. A dead woman could sell more than a living one. And you can keep guessing why, but I'll tell you soon enough. So the only problem that this guy had was that he only had living women, you know, and it's just names of like several staff money and complains about how fruit is not fresh enough at his facility. And here's what's interesting. Apparently doodles mean something. Like what someone chooses to doodle and at what point they doodle that could have a lot of meaning. During the trial, Scarlett sat there folding a piece of paper, refolding it, opening it, folding it, and drawing a very detailed eye. She would color the pupils and sketch the eyebrows. And it's stated that people who draw eyes want to be seen. Or they feel like they're being watched and they don't like it. It's likely that Scarlett wanted to be seen. But she won't be, because she will be in prison and she will be watched 24/7 by guards. Meanwhile, 7 feet underground, that $17 for rope was way too expensive. Scarlett would keep brainstorming without the rope. She would write down on a piece of paper, okay, give them alcohol with sleeping pills, slit throat, dismember body, place pieces in black trash bags, bury bags 7 feet underground, bones included in the bags. Yeah, that was her initial plan that she wrote down on a piece of paper. And the kill list was ever rotating. Scarlett was in charge of picking the victim, and her mind changed every day on who, quote, deserved it. She would pick some random, small, trivial, arbitrary reason that someone needed to die, and then it was settled. She and Eddie would go about planning or fantasizing about the murder.
How long was it from, like, when did they start?
October to February, so like a month. February 11th. So
like 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, one day in January, Scarlett texts Eddie, and she's complaining. I think Brianna is prettier than me. Eddie responds, but is it a feminine boy? He uses a shortened version of that. Or a insert transphobic slur. He followed it up with, I mean, prettier than you, but it's a boy. Scarlett told Eddie that she was getting nervous and stuff, but we don't know. And they were trying to specifically lure Eric out, all because they wanted to petrol bomb him.
What is that?
It's like a Molotov cocktail, which is essentially a DIY firebomb. It's really dangerous. Typically, it consists of highly flammable liquid inside of a glass bottle. You stick a flammable fabric shoved into the opening, someone lights the fabric on fire, and you have an undetermined random amount of time for the fire to reach the inside. Typically, nothing happens, but we don't know, because there's no oxygen in the bottle. But once someone throws it, the fuel of the fire, it goes flying, splattering everywhere, and it's really dangerous. They wanted to throw a Molotov cocktail at a high school boy named Eric, a fellow student. They just didn't like him. But they can't ask him to come to the woods themselves because he knows they don't like him. So why would he go to the woods with them? So they created this fake Instagram account to lure him out into the woods so that they could Molotov cocktail him. They wanted to record the whole thing and post it on every social media platform because they thought it'd be hilarious. But Eric at the grocery store is very dangerous stuff. Scarlett clicks open the photo. Sodium hydroxide? Lye? The stuff that you use to make soap? It would have to be consumed fast enough though, since it's an acid. You would have to force her to drink it. Unfortunately, I can't find how fast it kills, but I think it kills pretty fast. If you were to drink lye, it would turn your entire insides into literal soap. The lye is basically an acid. It's extremely corrosive. It burns all the way down into the stomach. If you pour flaming gasoline down your throat and then swallow a 6-inch knife afterwards, that's what it would feel like to drink a lot of lye. It's like liquid lava, fire, just going down your throat. You can feel where it is in your body because the minute it touches any part of your insides, your stomach lining, you can feel it. It's going to start dissolving you from the inside out. Scarlett thought the idea was perfect. She could just put it into Brianna's McDonald's milkshake after school. Another text comes in from Scarlett. Eddie opens it up, and this time it's a picture with a pair of scissors and a tissue with blood on it. The message reads, I'm going to eat human flesh. Eddie smiles. Because Scarlett and Eddie, they have a
girlfriend. He'd be like, that's none of your damn business, Sato. Damn it. I think that scenario pisses me off the most. But the problem is, Yamazaki's human, and humans lie. I mean, I've lied to him. Is there any real reason to think that he'll tell me the truth? And even if he does, how will I know? Will I be able to believe him?
You. Just look down on them. That way, even if they do think you're stupid, at least you're even. It's quite calming. There. You see, with this method, I'm able to talk to you with confidence, or at the very least a sense of superiority. But the trick is, you can never let the people you're talking to know that you're looking down on them, or they'll get mad at you. I mean, even you'd be upset if someone called you garbage, or said you're a useless failure of a human being to your face, right? That's why you think it, but you don't say it. People think it's paranoia and social awkwardness. You get nervous when you talk to other people. That's why you stutter and start freaking out. When that happens, the conversation deteriorates, and your increased discomfort leads to paranoia and social awkwardness. It's a vicious cycle. So why do people get nervous in the first place? It's because they don't have enough self-confidence. They feel like other people think they're stupid. They're afraid that everyone is looking down on them and talking behind their backs. Their minds are always filled with thoughts like these. So then, the fundamental issue is that hikikomori must learn to increase their self-confidence when they are conversing with others. So then, how do you gain confidence? Frankly, it's not something that can be achieved by ordinary measures. However, I've developed a revolutionary new method that can cure even the most self-loathing of hikikomori. Awesome, huh? You want to learn more? You want to know how it works?
Sure.
Then listen up. It's like a Copernican revolution where you're the new center of the universe. In other words, if you don't have a sense of self-confidence, just pretend like whoever you're talking to is an even worse person than you are. That's all there is to it, Sato. It's simple. If you find it too difficult to elevate yourself, you just have to put everyone else below you. Just look down on them. That way, even if they do think you're stupid, at least you're even. It's quite calming. So, like I would... Throughout the years, people from all over the world have been liberated from their suffering thanks to their faith in God.
Germany flew back to the US with Eva on Father's Day, June 18, 2023. Eva's Father's Day, it was the most painful Father's Day of his entire life. And the worst part, the more painful part, is that German prisoners probably live better lives than the average free American citizen. Prisoners in Germany live in rooms. They look more like hotel rooms rather than prison cells. They sleep in proper beds, so not concrete bunk beds with mattress pads thrown on top. Guards at German prisons are advised to knock before going into prisoners' rooms. They have privacy. They're not just bars. If prisoners are hungry, they can walk to the communal kitchen and cook their own meals. They get paid for work. They have opportunities to leave the prison and hang out with their family, learn skills, get an education. They can even decorate their little hotel room.
That's where he's at right now?
Yeah.
It takes you to hurt a soldier to really do something about it?
Yeah, so I think that's the problem with most governments is that you have to embarrass them for them to care. And when you attack a soldier, basically on base, you're embarrassing the power of the government. The government was like, okay, yeah, we gotta do something. Things are getting out of control. So they launched a full-scale campaign to crack down on gang violence, and they were gonna make an example out of Tangshan. The government came up and they gathered all the gang members in Tangshan. They picked 50 of the worst offenders. They lined them all up. They were forced to wear these giant posters hanging from their necks with their name and their crime listed in big bold letters. So you would see men walking around with murder just on their chest like a scarlet letter. They were lined up in a busy part of Tangshan and publicly executed. Thousands of Tangshan locals gathered to watch. It was a really happy day for the residents.
Made the revelation of his true nature even more horrifying. Ray's hunting ground wasn't far from his modest flat in Montana House on Princess Street. After spending all day working or studying, Ray would position himself near his window, surveying the streets. Ray had a keen eye for masculine, muscly, tall, strong men, but he preferred them to be intoxicated and alone. When an opportunity arose, Ray would emerge, not only with a smile, but with a predatory glint in his eyes. He wasn't interested in deploying his so-called power of attraction, or seeking any genuine connection. Instead, he would either stalk a possible victim, or lurk around late-night takeaways, waiting to exploit innocent bystanders' vulnerabilities. His sinister and calculated approach saw him portray himself as a savior, a good Samaritan offering a safe haven. For intoxicated individuals desperate to charge a dead phone, or to reconnect with friends, or who didn't want the night to end there, Ray's flat seemed like a lifeline. On the surface, to many, it seemed like a reasonable offer from a meek and overly kind individual. Tragically, this manipulative tactic proved effective on multiple occasions. CCTV footage shows that on one occasion, Ray slips onto the street and catches a very drunk person and heads back to his flat together. He did this in under 60 seconds. Once inside his flat, Ray seamlessly transitioned from the role of a lurking predator to that of a gracious host, offering a seat and refreshments and very rarely causing suspicion. If the victim could navigate through his filthy flat, making sure not to knock off one of his many fridge magnets, Ray would showcase his wide range of alcoholic beverages. Vodka, tequila, rum, gin, whiskey. He had a drink for everyone, whatever their preference. Ray would present a chosen drink laced with a substance like gamma-hydroxybutyrate, otherwise known as GHB. Known for its use as a 1990s anesthetic. On the streets, it is sometimes known as liquid ecstasy, Gina or G. It is readily available on the streets of Manchester and online. Essentially, GHB works in the brain and acts a little bit like alcohol, but if you take too much, you can become very sleepy, like a sedative, sometimes leading to a complete unconscious state. Studies on this drug show that it has a negative effect on one's memory. This shows that Ray has done his research, and this was a key part of the puzzle which allowed him to continue his 10-year spree. As a result, it is said that Ray's victims are still out there, perhaps with a vague suspicion that something very strange happened one night out in Manchester, but perhaps they have no idea at all. Unfortunately, this is where the case burst. Once the spiked drink was digested, the otherwise strong victims were left defenseless. Next, Ray would position a couple of covers and blankets on the floor to create what looks like a bed. Once made, he would negotiate the unconscious body of his victim, place them face down with trousers and pants rolled down to knee height. Next, Ray, fully naked by this point, would set up his white iPhone 4 so that himself and his victims are front and center in preparation for what is to come next. The moment he had been waiting for. With his second black iPhone 6 in hand, Ray would repeatedly and viciously force himself upon the victim over and over again. For many of his victims, Ray did not stop. He would prolong the assault for up to several hours, sometimes with a break, but sometimes without. He would force himself upon the sedated, unconscious victim, all the while filming the ordeal so he may gain further satisfaction at a later date. Taking videos and photographs meant that Ray could continue to violate and gain gratification from taking something from his victims and owning it indefinitely. In the absence of a concrete timeline marked by dates and times, unraveling the dark saga of Ray's prolific assault spree becomes an intricate task. His spree was on an unprecedented scale, with over 200 victims. It's difficult to know it would be until sexuality and everyday transnationalism among South Asian gay and bisexual men in Manchester. He failed his PhD, and he continued his disturbing spree. That would be until 6 AM on the 2nd of June 2017. One man who shall not be named after leaving Ray's flat one cold morning rang 999. With a trembling panic in his voice, he managed to say the words, "Hello, I think some guy just tried to me after he took me to his house, and I didn't want to." Of course, the call handler's priority was the man's immediate safety, but then asked if he met him last night, the man followed up with, "Yeah, I met him last night, I think. I was drinking, and he slipped me something, I don't know, and now in the morning he's on top of me, like, trying to, you know what." Even in that moment, when the man was bravely recounting the events, he could still not explicitly say what Ray was doing to him. From this man's account, it's clear to see how even just the next day, events are foggy from the sedatives. The call continued, with the handler asking for the name of the perpetrator. The man said, "I don't know his name at all, I just know where his house is, and he hasn't left his house since I escaped from it." He continued, stating that when he came round from his unconscious state, he very quickly tried to punch and push Ray away. In a panic, he tried to explain why he had blood on his hands. The man had beaten Ray to a pulp. Within 10 minutes of receiving the police report, officers arrived on the scene. They found one man claiming victimization and another semi-unconscious. Ray was on the floor with excessive volumes of blood all around him. Because Ray was so badly injured, the original male who placed the emergency call was arrested. Ray was carried out of his flat down Princess Road on a stretcher and rushed to Manchester Royal Infirmary. This left the police in a real pickle. Who do they believe? Ray was in hospital in a critical state, and his attacker was literally sitting with blood on his hands. However, it wasn't long before the appalling truth unfolded. Ray was in and out of consciousness, but despite his dire condition, he was hellbent on knowing the whereabouts of his mobile phone. Detective Inspector Matt Gregory was the first officer to visit Ray whilst he was in hospital. Medical staff passed on that Ray was having waves of distress trying to find his mobile phone. Gregory had scanned the medical bay and found his phone under the bed. What was perplexing to the officers was that Ray, desperate to get onto his phone, gave the officer the incorrect pin to unlock it for him. Could this be due to a head injury, or was Ray hiding whatever was on his phone? Undeterred by these apparent games, the officer persisted and eventually received the code and unlocked Ray's mobile phone. In that moment, Ray conjured the ability to move and attempted to strike the mobile phone out of the hand of the officer. The officer became incredibly suspicious, so he went straight to the photograph application, and it was at this point that the cat was out of the bag. The officer was faced immediately with 3 disturbing thumbnails of an explicit naked male. He continued, knowing this information could be pivotal in the investigation. He watched 3 videos, much like many of the other film footage they would later find. A scene where a male, lying face down and clothed, had their trousers and underwear forcibly pulled down to their knees. In a harrowing turn, a naked individual identified as Ray approached the victim on the floor and proceeded to force himself upon them. In an unexpected turn of events, the man who was currently in police custody for grievous bodily harm charges was telling the truth. In the officer's hands was the footage of the male being continuously essayed by Ray. The case was flipped, and the right man was then arrested. The man that police had in custody was released with a trove of trophies, including stored phones, driving licenses, student ID cards, watches, and wallets, all belonging to the men who he had violated. The following information was ascertained through the criminal investigation. Whilst in the secluded paddock near the lake, Abina and Gary attracted the attention of Ray. Ray was armed with his .22 caliber semi-automatic Mossberg rifle. He ambushed the two teenagers at gunpoint and told them to get into Gary's car. He then forced them to drive 37 kilometers to an even more secluded area. They got out of the car and walked into a nearby field. Gary ordered Abina to remove her stockings, and Raymond used these stockings to bind Gary in preparation for the final horrific act. With Gary restrained, Ray began to undress Abina from the waist down. Ray subsequently forced himself upon Abina in a violent and horrific essay. However, there was a moment where Ray lost control and Abina began to run away, but Ray was able to catch up to her. Once she was in his clutches, he began hitting her in the head over and over again. Ray bludgeoned her so badly that her skull was crushed and she died from the extreme trauma to the brain. Ray then walked over to Gary, who was still restrained, and shot him in the head with his .22 caliber rifle. These were Raymond's first known murders. Gary and Abina were reported missing. It wasn't long before that the police commenced their investigation. First, they thought it was a typical runaway situation. Abina's boyfriend, Ian Urquhart, was reported to have cursed the couple and threatened to belt Gary once he found him. However, Gary's car was soon found abandoned. Everyone in the town who knew Gary knew he would never leave his beloved car. When the car was recovered, this raised suspicion that Abina's boyfriend, Ian Urquhart, was responsible for their disappearance. A few days after their disappearance, two 17-year-old boys were out on a shooting trip when they stumbled upon the badly decomposed bodies of Gary and Abina. This led to Ian being arrested, and Raymond Edmonds continued his reign of terror. His modus operandi was clear. He would stalk and spy Melbourne women. These women were mostly in their 20s with young children. He would wait outside their homes, surveilling them. He would take notes of the times their husbands would leave and return. He knew how long he had to enter, commit the crimes, and then leave. He also knew the women would be more cooperative, as they would do almost anything to make sure that Ray would not harm their children. He was always barefooted and had a particularly nasty stink. Many of these cases have limited details, with the victims' names being protected. However, what is a mistake? On the 6-ball team, with no further leads, Ray was able to slip through the net. That was until Ray made his last mistake. On the 16th of March 1985, in a town called Albury in New South Wales, Ray decided to head to a supermarket and pleasure himself in his car. Several customers alerted the attention of shopkeepers to what Ray was doing. In complete shock, they decided to call the police. As the police arrived, Raymond continued what he was doing. He had no shame, even when the police were at the side of his car. Raymond was arrested on the spot. Whilst at the police station, his fingerprints were taken. He wasn't in jail for long, and he was released on bail. But once the fingerprints had arrived at the centralised fingerprint bank in Sydney, they were processed. One detective noticed them and thought they looked very similar to the fingerprints attributed to several cold cases. Cold cases that were attributed to Mr. Stinky. A team of police were assembled, and Ray was arrested at his place of work. Ray was confronted with the fingerprint evidence and began to realise that he was finished. The police had him for numerous essays and the double murder. Ray then turned to a police officer and said, "Get me a priest, I will tell you everything." Raymond got his priest, and then he started talking and admitted to 30 crimes. However, in the state of Victoria, the police were limited in the time they had to question a suspect of a crime. This was a strange rule, but it could be extended. In Ray's case, they had 2 extensions, making the police interview time 18 hours. But this still wasn't enough. Ray had admitted to 30 crimes.
Out in public, there's technically 3 groups of people, right? In the first group, they look calm because they did nothing wrong. They didn't commit a crime. The second group, those are like the sketchy ones. Those are the ones that we think are the worst criminals. Or like they keep glancing around. They look so suspicious. They probably committed a crime. But the scariest group, the people that look calm, so you suspect they have nothing worried. They never committed a crime. They didn't just get done killing someone. But in reality, they did. That's the scariest group. We don't even realize it. We think the second group is the creepiest. We're like, why is that guy just making such weird eye contact? So the story made sense, and it was corroborated later by CCTV. This is what he's telling the police. Like, I brought him to my apartment and I killed him. The police are like, okay, we found the CCTV. It makes sense. You killed him in your apartment. Yeah, okay. But the motive is still unclear. Why did you kill the nice taxi man? He went out of his way to help you. He literally could have. Do you want us to just take a guess? You know what I did see a suspicious guy at the convenience store. Maybe it's this guy. Like, what do you mean? So that was another thing that isn't really. What are you saying right now? Anyway, they're looking for Miss J. Nothing is coming up. Not a single thing had been found. Not even a single clue. They were wasting precious time, resources, trying to figure out where Miss J's body was, and maybe Miss J wasn't even in the river. When they confronted Lee again, he casually just said, "Actually, you know what? I didn't throw her in the river." Now that I think about it, I remember digging a shallow grave on the riverbank, and I buried her next to the river.
Wow, come on.
The investigators are agitated. I mean, he's suddenly changing his story. They don't even know if they should trust this version of events. Lee went on to describe exactly where he buried Miss J's body, and he sat back in the chair and he cocked his head and he said, "This is my last gift to you guys." This guy is clearly enjoying the feeling of power, of toying with the police. He felt like he was the only one that had answers to questions that they needed to know. This is often why narcissistic killers will taunt the police even after being caught. They send them on these wild goose chases. Sometimes it's just to prolong the experience of the police needing them, of being the guy with the answers. He got off on the attention, the power he felt with the only one with this type of information, and he's now acting like he's the good guy. He's throwing them a bone, helping them out. He felt like he was smarter than the police. Also, when killers do this, a lot of experts believe it's to feel like they're in control. Because ultimately, when they're caught, you're no longer in control. You don't even have the freedom to control when you take a shower or when you eat or when you poo. So him toying with the police makes it seem like he's in control of this operation. He's the head boss. This is exactly what he wanted. He's like, I can make these guys do things. Search places that are going to come up empty. They're going to get frustrated and I get this emotional reaction out of them. And it's shitty because what are the police going to do? Just not listen? They have to search the area. He just dropped her off. It was very curt. The way that he described it is very short. And the investigators stated, in terms of shock, either someone remembers everything or they remember nothing. That's how shock works. But Peter remembered everything about the submarine sinking and remembered nothing about Kim. It is inconsistent. Nobody saw it then, though. But in the footage, he was already dead.
Wow.
So with all of this coming out, he's still sticking with his story that it was carbon monoxide. Peter's biographer and those who used to be close to him said that Peter overestimates himself. He believes that he can convince people. I mean, he did it with submarines, he did it with rockets, and now he thinks that he can do it with murder.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Prosecutors heatedly told Peter, like point blank in trial, "I don't believe you. I felt bad. Something made it happen. This is my confession." It's really chilling. He said, "I didn't go around living a wonderful life and suddenly bang, I got evil. Something made it happen. This is my confession. What the f happened?" How can it be a mystery to you guys that good comes in a package with bad? There aren't heroes and bad guys. They're just humans, and under the right circumstances, under the right kind of pressure, under the right mistreatment, you can make people do just about every horrific thing to each other that you can think of. Okay, look, even now he's killed someone and he's trying to be this voice of teaching, this voice of reason and philosophy, and the one that is poetic about life, and it's just really agitating. He continues, "You're looking for an explanation. Why did this happen? Peter said that he was so frustrated at his rockets not succeeding. He felt like he was no longer the sole center of attention, and it started to really mess with him. The way Peter says it is that he was being used. So remember how he started Copenhagen Suborbitals with a co-founder? Well, the co-founder allegedly came up to him and was like, hey, you can help build the rockets, but you can't be at the launches anymore. I don't think that this happened, but for whatever reason, there was drama and Peter was kicked out of Copenhagen Suborbitals. He started his own rocket company literally in the same lot, just like looking at Copenhagen Suborbitals every day he went into the workshop. And his own rocket company was not just doing her job, and she ran into a killer. And he truly is an evil person that felt like he could just do something to someone. And he's kind of like this. He thinks he's a main character villain. He wrote once, nothing is sacred in hell. No morals, no ethics. Only your own disgusting selfish ego. Give in to your anger. Use the knife. Hell is permeated with an evil that penetrates your head. He wrote, you need to choose between heaven and hell. And if you choose hell, a whole new world opens up. In his head, he's like the Hades, the god of hell. In his mind. But in reality, he is just a loser in jail now. He will be forgotten. Kim Wall will forever be remembered. Kim's family and friends created the Kim Wall Memorial Fund.
And that he personally knew. He went into his mother-in-law's house and installed secret cameras into her bathroom. He took photos and videos of his sister-in-law showering, uploaded them to Sammy Boy. He's a church guy. He went to all of his church friends' houses and installed hidden cameras into one of his church friends' homes, watched her shower, uploaded it to Sammy Boy. He was finally caught, but there's more. There's so many incidents like this.
Do we know what his sentence was?
A few years. And I mean, this forum just gives very, 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 very strong bro energy. And I'm not just saying that. A lot of the comments for your head. And you shouldn't have to live in fear all day, my poor sweet boy. Have you thought about setting a trap for your wife? At least that way you'll know for sure she's cheating or not. At least that way you don't have to deal with the anxiety of not knowing for certain. That is when James decides to set up a honey trap. These are services that you can actually purchase to test your partner's loyalty. They exist not just in Singapore, but like all over the world. You can do it in the US. I've seen TikTokers do it. There's one TikToker who made her whole career off of being a honey trap, or they call it like a honey. So this is very different from hiring a private investigator because you have suspicions that your partner is cheating. This is hiring someone to go out of their way, hunt down your significant other online or in person, and flirt with them. See if they're willing to cheat on you. This is a honey trap. Nowadays, you can pay a platform about $100, hire a okay, then Kathy can also be drugged. It's no big deal. My wife, like, we could swap wives if you will, but Kathy would never in a million years. Like, she would never consent to it. So they decided, okay, then Kathy can also be drugged. It's no big deal. And they start developing an MO. At this point, James had already drugged his wife before, but this is when they really start having like a system. They started drugging the woman with something called Dormicum. It is a sedative. It's categorized as a benzodiazepine, and it's unique for being very fast acting. If injected, it takes about 5 minutes to kick in. If it's taken orally, it only takes about 15 minutes. And it dissolves in water. It's odorless, colorless, tasteless. It's a terrifying date drug. And if you remember the Burning Sun case, this is a very similar type of drug. And even more so by mixing it into alcohol. A doctor who has knowledge on this said that when this drug is mixed in with alcohol, increasing the dosage without waiting to see the actual effect, coupled with the alcohol intake, there's a very high risk of oversedation, which could lead to suppression of breathing, which could in turn lead to inadequate oxygen in the blood. In severe cases, this can lead to brain damage. A sedated person is unconscious and therefore unable to avoid any visible danger and could potentially even ingest their own vomit into their lungs and die. It could be fatal, but they're like, no, this is. It could be fatal, but they're like, no, this is perfect because you don't remember a single thing when you wake up. You don't even have like a feeling. It's just a blank space. Someone cut it out of your memory. Kevin invites James over, a woman about one of their biggest fears in life. It's to be essayed. And to facilitate the essay of your wife, that is one of the most vengeful, spiteful, violent things I've heard in a while. There's a comment I read on Reddit about this case. Well, about a different case, but I think it sums up this one really well. It says, this is about possessiveness. It's not about being a husband. It's about being an owner. He hates his wife being looked at by other guys in situations that he can't control because in his mind, she is his property. He wants his wife to have intimate relations with another guy in a situation he set up and controls because he sees his wife as property that he decides to lend out on his terms. A partner bar on either side of their torso and one supporting their stomach, so they can't move their arms, legs, stomach. They can't scoot backwards. They can't scooch forwards. They're literally just stuck there. Butts up in the air, fully exposed, skin touching air.
So
Your whole look, having your wife vouch for you, but nothing changes the facts. Everyone knows what he did. He left a trail of evidence at the crime scene. He thought leaving the water would keep him safe by erasing all the evidence, but it didn't. The police found several fingerprints in the restroom, all leading to Cho. Side note, in South Korea, when you get your ID card, they take a whole palm print. So it's not like the US where not everybody is in the system. Every single person in South Korea, even without a criminal record, is in the system. And the palm print is interesting. So even if you touch something with just the inside of your palm and not your fingers, they can still track it to you. The police ran the prints and it led to a man named Cho Do-sun. They found CCTV footage from buildings near the church. The man in the footage matched the man in the system. When police went to his house, happens, she blames herself first. One day I scolded her and I felt really sorry about it. So I looked at her diary and I thought that she was going to write like a normal child. My dad scolded me, so I'm mad. But instead she wrote, even if I were my dad, I would have scolded myself too. Clearly I deserved it. And Na-young's dad's heart just broke into two. I mean, for one, she's so quick to think that things are her fault. And two, she's growing up way too quickly. Kids her age are supposed to be angry when their parents yell at them. They're supposed to not be understanding and not supposed to be seeing everybody's point of view. They're supposed to be children. Na-young's dad said, until last year, she was a normal elementary school student. But now it seems like she has the mentality of a college student. And every 2 weeks, Na-young's dad feels like he has to cut open his own chest and rip out his heart. Because every 2 weeks, they have to travel to Seoul. She has her counseling treatments, but also they have to go see a specialized doctor who was working on creating her an artificial anus. Now, side note, he was doing this free of charge. The doctor had heard about the case on the radio and offered up his services. The artificial rectum would hopefully mean that she would not need the colostomy bag anymore. I mean, even that is not easy. The operation should typically only take 4 hours for most people, but Na-young would need to have multiple surgeries, and the first one lasted over 10 hours. When the doctors opened her up, they realized that her organs were basically tangled. There was a ton of inflammation and scarring inside of her little body. One side of her pelvis had hardened like stone. It was a lot. And even when they were successful at implanting the artificial rectum, she would still need copious amounts of therapy to try and get her own tissues to have that regular bowel movement again. And until then, she would still need her colostomy bag. And the family, they don't have a lot of money, especially after taking off time to take care of Na-young. They're barely making ends meet. They don't own a car, so every 2 weeks, Na-young's dad has to watch Na-young wake up and walk up and down the subway stairs, clutching her giant colostomy bag that hits her knees. And she never complains. She's healing so slowly, but there's healing. Last time Na-young's family shared one of her drawings with the public, it was of Cho in the cell eating a bowl of cockroaches and a hammer on his head. Now she's drawing SpongeBob with sunglasses, and SpongeBob is smiling, and another one is like a pretty princess with long flowy hair. And they asked her, why the glasses? And Na-young said, oh, I thought if I put glasses on, he would look cooler, so I tried SpongeBob with glasses. And the princess, that's me. And Na-young would smile, and the scar on her cheek would go up. But even going to Seoul to get counseling and medical treatments, it's a huge stress on Na-young. Not just the physical act of getting on the subway and making this very strenuous trek, but for a lot of reasons. Nobody in school, except some of her closest teachers and friends, knew that she is Na-young.
From what I can tell, everyone has been incredibly diligent about keeping her identity private because that's what she wishes. But it also poses some difficulty. Nayoung needs to leave school early and show up for these random medical treatments. And because everyone in the area knows that a girl around her age is Nayoung around this area, sometimes it makes them question, is she Nayoung? She wrote in a journal, today I had to go home early so I couldn't stay till the end of 6th period. I just went home. I think my friends will think that I'm weird. What am I going to tell them on Monday? That's what I worry about the most. I wish I didn't have to be sick. I regret it a lot. The only people that should have regrets are the people trusted to carry out justice because clearly they did not. But not everyone in this case is evil. All the schools in Ansan, they came together to hold assemblies telling the students to stop talking about who Nayoung might be. Parents were instructed to double down. They would bring home their children and they say, we don't know who Nayoung is, okay? But how sad would it be if she's your classmate and she heard you talking about who she may or may not be? Nayoung's closest friends, they knew what happened to her, and they all quietly protected her. These are 8-year-olds. They did a better job than the justice system at protecting Nayoung. Nayoung would miss class once. Another classmate asked her, why do you skip school so often? Nayoung didn't know what to say, so she started hesitating, and one of her friends stood up. That's why you need to eat all your side dishes and vegetables. This one's a picky eater. She always gets stomach aches and needs to go to the hospital. One of her other friends chimed in, yeah, you need to eat more. Nayoung would forever be grateful because she just felt so protected by them. But they can't protect her from certain things. Nayoung's family could only get adult-sized colostomy bags from the hospital. It would reach down to her knees, and it was clearish, so you could see the level of fecal matter in there. You could also see when fecal matter was coming out of her stoma. And Nayoung would come home early from school, sometimes because it would fall out, or it would fall off, or sometimes it would overflow onto the ground and fecal matter would spill everywhere, and Nayoung would have to come home early from school. Thankfully, a medical company reached out and promised to send her colostomy bags for as long as she would need, for whatever size she would need, child-sized colostomy bags. But she still had to wash it out. She still had to throw in it. They're called strike casing. The bullet was a 5.56mm caliber bullet. There are over 100 different types of guns that can take that bullet, but, and a big but. This bullet casing had a couple scratches in it. They're called striations. So when a bullet gets fired, the bullet doesn't just shoot straight out of the gun. It actually spins. And the bullet itself rotates with the casing inside of the gun for like the tiniest fraction of a second. And when it rotates, the outside of the bullet scrapes against the inside of the bullet chamber as it spins, and it bursts out, leaving these microscopic marks on the bullet. They're like teeny tiny little scratches. Each gun has
different, right?
Yes, has a unique pattern of scratches. It's not to say like every single gun, but like each model of gun. And it's not on purpose. It's like the firearm version of a fingerprint. Now, this bullet had one gun's fingerprint all over it. And all the police had to do was figure out which gun shot it. But till then, they had to try and figure out a way to please the increasingly desperate, terrified, and heartbroken public. Can you blame them? They felt like the police were not doing enough. The public was scared. They put up signs and banners around the university. They were dissatisfied with the current progress. They marched, protested at 9. And the scratch patterns through the system of registered guns in the... But back to the gun casing that had microscopic scratches. Major Kanyo, he personally investigated the bullet casing, and he ran the scratch patterns through the system of registered guns in the country, and they got a hit. They got a match. The bullet casing found near Allen's body belonged to M16 rifle with the serial number 773159. The M16 is a standard issue police rifle in the Philippines. Serial number 773159 belonged to Mr. Louis Corcoran. Deputy Chief George went out the first day with his partner Aurelio and 3 other low-ranked officers. Do you remember their names? Zoilo. Who do you think might have committed that crime? So side note for my viewers, if the police ever ask you, if you have any guesses off the top of your head who you think did it, do not answer, do not take a guess, ask for a lawyer, because guess what? They think you did it. They will never ask you that unless they think you're the one.
So what happens if I say a name? Like, does that get me in trouble?
It's not the name that gets you in trouble, but it's the way that you start rambling, because you can't just say a name without explanation. So you're like,
so it's like you look kind of guilty by like pointing finger at so-and-so.
And then you could accidentally lie, trying to make that person look even more guilty. And when you get caught in one lie, they're going to try to get you in another and another, and then all these lies are going to create a mountain of evidence that's going to be thrown at you during the trial. Well, speaking of the general's son, I did hear that the victim and Kit, the general's son, got into a vicious fight months before the victim turned up dead on the side of the road. Unfortunately, our country has a problem with high-status people getting... He killed Allison, and he remembered every last joyous second of it. All of it. He had contemplated for 5 whole days on whether or not he wanted to kill Allison. Ultimately, he didn't want to, but it was necessary. Takahiro was on Twitter with the sole purpose of finding someone that he could scam out of money. He thought about the typical ways to scam, pretend to have some sort of business that someone can invest in, another opportunity. But all of that seemed like so much work. You had to forge papers, you had to create like a company logo. So the plan was, you know what, I'm just gonna find a vulnerable population of women, scam them out of their money by pretending to be interested in them, pretending to be their boyfriend. Takahiro went online specifically looking for girls with Twitter accounts where they expressed very deep negative emotions, dark thoughts about wanting to exit. He meets Allison, and he starts messaging her on Twitter, and he pretends to be this great listening ear that I just want to help you. I feel like I can relate to your feelings. I went through the same things as you. But in reality, he thought this was his ticket out. Get her to believe that he was interested in her, then ask her for her money. I mean, he just had this obsession of wanting to move into his own place. He was so sick of living with his parents, he wanted his own studio apartment with a loft. It had to have a loft. With Allison's 2-day dismemberment process, he just had one big question. I mean, is he going to keep the box of bones? Is he going to keep the severed head in his tiny little loft forever? He starts Googling how to dump bodies, but he realized that the highest risk of bodies being discovered, he's studying all these other killers. And it's usually when killers are on their way to dump the body that they get caught, or they're actively digging a hole with a shovel and the police show up. I mean, how's he going to talk his way out of why he needs a human-sized hole in the ground? But Takehiro's biggest fear was, he was very nervous that a dog would come sniffing in the mountains and dig up the buried body that he worked so hard to bury. The best choice to get the body out of his apartment, he decided, was to rent a storage unit and keep the body there. But he never got around to it because there were things higher on his priority list. Like, he seemed, I wouldn't say charismatic, but it's almost, you know when you meet someone and you have so many things in common with them, you're like, how did we not know each other before this? We're like twins. Like, how do we have the same life experiences to the dot? It's kind of crazy. I'm like looking into a mirror right now.
But that's not true though, right?
No, Takahiro would mirror every single one of his victims.
Oh, wow.
He would just relate to every single thing he said and fake stories that were the basic principles of what they are talking about, just in a different way. But now, Charlie's best friend Allison has not been picking up her phone and Charlie's been worried sick. Allison's mom is blowing up his phone and he gets a text message from Takehiro's apartment. Fiona was a 17-year-old junior in high school. She took a 24-hour train just to meet up with Takahiro. She met him on Twitter and she was so excited to have someone to talk to. She paid for Takehiro's meals that day, paid for all the cab rides, all their activities. Fiona would sheepishly talk to him about all of her problems, like how she felt so insecure about her appearance. And he would bluntly reassure her, we're not ugly by any means. Meeting with Takahiro was actually making Fiona feel so much better. Near the end of their date, she was going on about how, maybe we can go to an arcade and get some dessert. I think I feel really good. She would end up in his bathtub. Gia was a 17-year-old student that struggled with feeling good about herself. Her classmates thought she was one of the most considerate ones in their entire grade. Like if there was a task that no other kid wanted to do, Gia would do it for everyone. She was Lord's apartment. Takahiro would later be seen carrying a bag of her organs to a convenience store dumpster. He said he got it down to 2 hours.
That is chilling.
The process was almost always the same. He would meet people on Twitter, then try to arrange an in-person meeting where he would state he was going to help himself exit. He would meet with them at the train station. They would never approach him. Once they spotted him, they would call him, and over the phone, he was going to give them instructions on how to follow him home. Okay, now 10 steps to the left. He gave them directions on how to follow him out the station. So if anybody looked at them, it looks like these two strangers are just on the phone with different people and headed in the same direction coincidentally. They'll continue this until they make it back to his loft unit, where everything is prepped and ready. Rope, saws, air freshener, cat litter, pee-pee pads, everything is set up for the perfect night. It's almost like a ritual of sorts. Usually the minute that they step into his apartment, he's already so excited that he can hardly contain himself. But he's like, no, I can't rush this process. So he offers a seat to all of his victims and he talks to them. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 30 minutes. He doesn't even listen to a single thing that they're saying. He just keeps topping off their whiskey glass that's mixed with whiskey and crushed up sleeping pills and tranquilizers, and he just waits. He sips on his tranquilizer-less whiskey, and this is the worst part for him. This is the part where he has to pretend like he cares. He has to sit there and act like he's interested in their lives, and he goes through the same problems. He doesn't even remember a single one of their names, just their Twitter handles. He doesn't even know half their ages. He forgot. He's sure they mentioned it. You feel like nobody understands you and you're all alone. Same. Me too. Anxiety does suck, doesn't it? I have so much anxiety as well. Yep. Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's a lack of love and compassion in this world. Everyone's just out for themselves. Yeah. No, it's rough. Most of the victims would pass out from the drugs that he slipped into their drinks, and then his sick ceremony would commence. Sometimes he would fall asleep with them and then wake up to see them still knocked out because he drugged them. He would either essay them right then and there, or he would tie them up first and then essay them. He would tie them up in a way that if they woke up during the attack, he could easily pull on one end and they would be forced into a standing, then eventually a floating position in the middle of his apartment. Sometimes he would have them half suspended while he essayed them. Most times he was there for the performance watching. He really liked watching them convulse while they were floating and swaying from side to side. That's what he was there for. But with each victim, he did start adding some small changes. With Gia, he cut open her blouse with scissors, and during the 30-minute ceremony, quote ceremony, he stared at her chest for a, quote, considerable amount of time while she was swaying in the middle of his apartment. But these ceremonies, they would be over so quick, and at this point, he was doing one a week. He was killing someone once a week, and it wasn't enough. The other days when he was looking for a victim, he said that he was very busy watching violent essay illegal videos that he would find on the internet. Because after his first murder, Takahiro said he was obsessed with essay and resistance. He was addicted, and he wanted to experience it over and over again. So he would go back to Twitter and scout for the perfect victim. And this time, he was going to try something different. As his latest victim was suspended, he noticed his attraction was developing. So he started taking pictures of her private parts as she was still floating in his apartment. And when she was cold to the touch, when he confirmed that she was dead, he laid her down and engaged in necrophilia. Naru's phone rang. Hi, Naru, is this Naru? Have you seen your sister Ivy? Naru's stomach dropped. This was a call from the psychiatric group home where his sister was staying at. He left work as soon as he could. I mean, just a few days ago, it looked like his sister Ivy was doing well. The group home was an improvement for her. So what do you mean, have I seen my sister? She's supposed to be at the group home. She's working through the grief of their mother that passed away 4 months ago. She was finally making some progress. Naru rushes over to the group home and he's confused. I mean, they're supposed to be monitoring her heavily and making sure that she's communicating when she's not mentally stable. So what do you mean you're calling to say that she's missing? He hoped that it was just a big misunderstanding and maybe they checked the wrong room. He made it to the psychiatric center and Ivy would be sitting in her room eating a croquette. That's what he's thinking. She was not. The room was empty, the bed was made, and her desk was perfectly in order. Everything was in its place except for one singular note left next to her computer that was still plugged in. I'm sorry, everyone. My brother, I'm sorry. Thank you for everything. Naru's hand shook as he held onto the note and he used his other hand to call the police. My sister's missing. Please, it's urgent. She's probably going to hurt herself. But this isn't the police's top priority. They've gotten 8 calls like this in the past 2 months, just like this one. They even mentioned Naru. Girls run away all the time. She'll be back. Naru didn't even know who else to talk to. They're not close with the rest of their family. Both of their parents are gone. It's just the two of them most days, Naru and Ivy. Moments. And as strange or as twisted as it sounds, Yumi just wanted someone to relate to. And maybe since he claimed that he had helped so many people leave and she felt like she could trust him, maybe he could just understand what she was going through to begin with. But that dinner was weird. He didn't seem like he cared in any sense. He was just so excited about the fact of suspending someone. That's it. Not only that, after the dinner, Yumi discovered something really bizarre. There was another account trying to talk to Yumi, Shinitai, who was encouraging her to go see Suspension Pro for her, quote, needs. Suspension Pro wanted to help her successfully complete the action, whereas Shinitai said on their Twitter account that they were looking to leave with other people. But reading their messages, their cadence and everything, Yumi felt like they're the same person. Like she knew, no, she was certain they're the same person. Yumi immediately messages Naru, Ivy's brother. I met with the same man that your sister was talking to. Yumi and Naru get into touch, and Yumi was determined to do whatever she can to help him and his sister, and she told him the guy had really weird instructions he would give, like leave a note for your family, tell them not to come find you, throw your phone in the ocean, meet me at the train station, don't say hi, follow me at a distance. I didn't want to do any of that. It's just everything was so weird. He was really creepy. He also kept asking me how much money I make and how much money I had saved up, and he kept bragging about how he's helped so many other people. She was super weirded out by the conversation. During dinner, she told Naru that she just paid for the meal and got out of there, made an excuse and left. But he kept messaging her, please let's meet up again. And Yumi would. Halloween night, 5 police officers were cramped in a small hallway in front of Unit 205. They're silently shuffling their way into the atrociously smelling hall, and they're glancing at each other. Thought that the evidence was way too much, and this was pointless, and it was a waste of his time. He was straight up asked what kind of women he looked for on Twitter, and he said, women who were depressed. I mean, it's easier to seduce women who are troubled and make them do my bidding. Takahiro would take the stand and answer questions at the prosecutors. Well, he only knew their Twitter accounts, so how could he feel regret for killing them? As for the death of Charlie, Takahiro said he actually felt proud that he was able to overpower Charlie and kill him, his only male victim. But Takahiro's mom would state, my son is too timid to even kill an insect. Which, side note, Takahiro mentions he hates bugs because when he was going through the dismantling phase, he briefly thought about maybe he could get rid of the bodies by either buying like 700 liters of acid to dissolve the bodies, but he thought that could actually dissolve the tub itself, so he decided against it. Then he thought maybe he could purchase maggots to eat the bodies, but he just really hated bugs. He was like, I'm so grossed out by bugs, I don't want them in the apartment. Meanwhile, the boxes of bones are fine, but his mom said he's too timid to even hurt a bug. Perhaps that capital punishment in Japan is carried out via suspension. Some netizens stated that this is poetic justice, that he will endure the same fate that he forced his victims to. But others are concerned that perhaps Takahiro might enjoy it in a sense, considering his fascination with it. Plus, a lot of netizens point out there's an interesting phenomenon called rigor erectus. Due to the method of putting pressure on parts of the brain and spinal cord, many men who are exposed by hanging develop a physiological reaction in their private parts. Netizens wonder, as a man with a sadist obsession with asphyxiation, would it be so shocking to believe that he might like the way he goes out?
And began to hack through her neck to remove her head, followed by her hands. Vetus wanted to remove the head and hands, as these would be easy ways to identify who she was. Once they were finished cutting up the body, the two men...
A man that did not work there currently walked in with a trolley of 11 gallons of gasoline, walked in through the front door, doused the entire entrance area and even several employees, like several human beings of the animation studio, with gasoline and ignited everything on fire. The building ended up exploding. It was reported that he was screaming, die, as he was doing all of this. He also set himself on fire by accident while he was lighting everything up and ended up trying to flee, but he was actually caught by the police outside. 36 people would end up dying. 34 people would end up injured. Oh my God. It was really hard for people to flee from inside the building because the fire originated near the entrance, so they were effectively trapped. But another thing to note is that the fire caused like this mini explosion, which filled most of the floors of the building with toxic fumes and smoke within 30 seconds. So even if you wanted to find a window to jump out of or some sort of escape route, the time that you would have to do that is next to nothing. has been identified to this day. It's been categorized more as a blast. So in Tokyo, there was this big gambling building that people had gathered to play mahjong, and around 1 a.m., the whole thing exploded and burned for like 5 hours. People were jumping out of windows covered in blood. Crowds were forming below the building, just watching helplessly as people risked injuries and jumped from this burning building. Like it was scary. It said that the whole street smelled like melted plastic, and it made you want to gag, and it made you just devastated for what was going on. It was incredibly tragic. The explosion was said to have been a result of arson. A suspect has never been caught, and if you're like, wait, why haven't I heard of this? This is actually not that well known. Because just 10 days later, September 11th happened in the US, and that completely dominated the international news cycle. So it's just kind of been a forgotten piece of news, I guess. And throughout the years, Japan seems to have an arson problem. And I say problem because, any one life lost to arson is too many lives lost. But if we are to criticize any country, I do want to put a disclaimer. I'm American, I live in America. And it's very clear that we have a problem in this country with mass murders. And the gun problem here is far, far worse. So I don't want anyone to hear the next part and be like, see, how do 26 people die from a fire on the 4th floor? There were questions being raised about building safety, building code. The Japanese government started a full-blown investigation into it. And they saw that, though the building was equipped with the legally necessary devices, like fire extinguishers, guide lights, automatic alarm systems, the building didn't have sprinklers. So the law in any multi-tenant building that is larger than 3,000 square feet is required to have sprinklers. But this building was smaller than 3,000 square feet. So there were legally no sprinklers installed. They were not breaking any codes, violations, or laws. But then there was another law. Building standard laws state that large buildings with more than 6 floors, this building has 8 floors, more than 6 floors are required to have 2 staircases that lead to the ground floor. This building didn't have that.
Torture method.
The love method. Once you get in, you know everything, how the cat model works. There are a few ways that these cat torturers will get their hands on new cats to kill. One is to catch stray cats, but that is difficult. 2, kidnap outdoor cats. So they have owners, they just reside outdoors most of the time. Or literally kidnap a cat from someone's house. Or 3, adopt a cat from a shelter. By far the easiest method. A lot of the cat abusers ironically actually spend quite a bit of money at these cat shelters because you have to pay every time you adopt a cat. They spend a lot of money adopting cats to kill. But adopted cats are not the highest in demand. Stray cats actually fetch the biggest penny. There's a whole menu for this, the cat menu of delicacies. Stray cats cost more than house cats because they fight back harder. This is what they say. They've been hardened by the harsh conditions outside and they don't die as quickly. They're a lot more vocal and they scratch and they will fight for their lives till the very last second.
Oh my god.
Recently was pregnant. Humans naturally have a soft spot for cute animals. I think it's why it's so scary to meet someone who doesn't. I mean, yeah, okay, you can have a disliking for animals or find them too troublesome to take care of, but that's one thing. To find them pleasurable to torture, it feels like it goes against the hardwiring of human brains. You citizens that he does go on to kill. Warning, it's about to get very graphic. According to one undercover animal activist, they were able to get some insight on some of the torture tactics used by the Blender Man, Wang. He would cut 12 live kittens in half in one video at the waist. He would dissect pregnant cats while they were still alive and force feed the mother cat all of her baby kittens. He would cut open cats and then pour sulfuric acid into their bodies while they were still alive. And he has been doing this for over a decade. It's estimated that he has taken the lives of at least tens of thousands of cats. And just like Jack Spicy, he has a respectable job. He works for a bank and he has a wife and daughter. But in the cat torture chat rooms, he's like God. He's like
part to the capitalist theme is mass culture. Patrick doesn't seem to have any real interests. The only discernible traits he seemingly has is listening to music. Even when he's talking about the music, it feels like he's reading off of a Wikipedia article about the music rather than how he feels about the music. It feels like an artificial interest he has in order to fit in with other people. This isn't unique to Patrick. Everyone is obsessed with fitting in with the group. It gets to the point where they all fit in so well that they constantly confuse each other. They share the same hairstyle, the same suits, and the same glasses. It gets so ridiculous that by the end of the movie, we can't tell if the lawyer actually saw Paul Allen or if he just confused him with another Wall Street businessman when he kills his victims. But what's the point in all the violence? I believe that the movie is telling us something very deep about the nature of masculinity and capitalism. The movie tells us that if a person feels like a failure, both as a man and at the capitalist game, then violence is sure to ensue. We can see Patrick's failure as a man in the infamous business card scene. Right after Patrick gets humiliated in front of his colleagues, he goes up to a homeless man named Al. He makes fun of him for not having a job, telling him that he stinks and demeans him in numerous ways. Murdering and making fun of Al is a way for Patrick to re-establish his dominance and masculinity. Patrick's failure at capitalism is shown when he's murdering Paul Allen. One of the first things that we find out about Paul Allen is that he can get reservations at Dorsia. Dorsia is the most sought-after restaurant in the entire city. When Patrick tries to get reservations at Dorsia, he simply gets laughed at.
Yes, I know it's a little late, but is it possible to reserve a table for 2 at 8 or 8:30 perhaps?
It's then interesting to see that the first thing he says after killing Paul Allen is, so why does Patrick resort to violence instead of any other emotion that's less destructive to his own life and others? It's because anger is manly. As a kid, it's not uncommon to hear phrases like boys will be boys or told to man up, effectively telling the kid to resort to violence in order to solve his problems. Anger arises when you feel like someone has trampled on your territory or hurt you in a way. Violence is a way to impose your will on others, to correct the harm that's been inflicted onto you. When Patrick kills people, it's done out of anger, and anger at not having the best business card or getting his reservations at Dorsia. It's important to recognize that violence isn't accepted in social circles. Slapping a coworker is a fast-track way to getting fired or shunned by the group. Patrick is thus forced to hide his feelings of anger, keeping it internal, just like the rest of his feelings. This only furthers the alienation that he feels from other people, letting the emotions only grow and fester inside of his own head. The violence that stems from his feelings of inadequacy is definitely a deliberate choice made by the director and author. The story is written by a gay man named Bret Easton Ellis, who's made sure to highlight the irony of gayness in a hyper-masculine world. The thing about Patrick is that we get to delve into his inner thoughts. Patrick only cares about himself, looks down on others, and is obsessed with how others perceive him, kind of like every other human being on planet Earth. The difference is that Patrick takes it a step further, constantly thinking about his next murder. He doesn't care
for manipulation or control. Let's go back to Bob. Right, so Bob decides he's going to use cold empathy. You dated for 6 months, and in that time he's come up with a list of what makes you happy, sad, or fearful. So he decides to use this information to manipulate your emotions for his own benefit. For example, Bob knows that you are terrified of being alone and feeling isolated, and it's a vulnerability that became evident during your relationship. Now, aware of this fear, he begins to craft messages or scenarios that play on this anxiety. He starts sending texts, leaving voicemails, basically that suggest that he is feeling isolated
isolated too. He feels alone without you. He implies that you're both sharing the same pain, a commonality, and that the only way to heal is by being together. He also decides to add one last subtle touch. He hints at the idea that others can't understand you like he does. He then goes on to reinforce this notion that your special connection is the antidote to his shared fear of isolation. And this actually works incredibly well, like persona of transformation. This one is insane, like legitimately crazy, and that's kind of the reason I saved it for last. Most of the time, for most people, the 4 other traps previous to this, they've sprung get you. They suck you back into their orbit. But in those rare cases where you have someone who has the fortitude to ignore all that, continue ignoring like they should, this is where the persona of transformation comes into play. Now, in order to properly explain this, I need you to accept an ideal. A true narcissist, a true one, doesn't really possess what you would call a personality, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, they accumulate and imitate behaviors that they've observed throughout their life, which allows them to assemble a patchwork of traits that they then use to charm and connect with others. This trap is where they fall back onto that basic premise, that basic idea. They decide they're going to rebrand themselves. And really, the persona of transformation happens over 4 distinct phases. You have the public transformation phase, the targeted vulnerability phase, the indirect communication phase, and then the direct communication phase. Let's first look at the public transformation phase. All right, so basically the narcissist decides they're going to start a public campaign of self-improvement. And this could include anything from going to therapy sessions to engaging in community service. Now, the key here is that they make sure you hear about it through mutual friends or social media. They might even start a blog, vlog, or social media account dedicated to their journey towards becoming a better person. Then we have targeted vulnerability. They're going to ensure that the transformation that they're showcasing aligns closely with the changes you had hoped to see in them during the relationship. All those complaints, all those long nights where we were yelling at them for not being present and being selfish, they took that to note, and they're going to use it against you. So for example, if you long for them to be more empathetic, they might volunteer at a shelter or start advocating for mental health awareness. They'll present themselves as newly compassionate and understanding. Now, all throughout this time, they are not contacting you. They're giving you your space. Months have gone by, and all you are seeing on your end are all these seemingly altruistic acts. And that's when the indirect communication starts. Instead of reaching out directly to you, they use these public displays and mutual connections to ensure that stories of their transformation find their way to you, knowing it will tug at your heartstrings and stir up confusion. Now, this tactic is incredibly effective because it plays on the hope and love that led you to engage with them initially, but it's a manipulation masterclass. They leverage public perception and your inherent desire to see the best in others to their advantage. And that's when they strike, and we enter into the direct communication phase. Essentially, they reach out to you. It's light, nothing forceful. Months have gone by. You're kind of over them, so you finally give in. You finally decide to start talking to them again. Now, the crazy part about all this is it isn't just the transformation itself, but the depth of the calculation behind it. It's designed to exploit your specific emotional vulnerabilities and hopes. And it's a reminder that the narcissist will go to any lengths to get what they want. Now, one of the things that I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about, let me put it this way. Narcissists or using narcissism on YouTube is like a big buzzword now. But one of the things I don't see people talking about a lot is the fact that these are very abusive relationships. I mean, it's literally right there in the cycle.
K, contents of the hearings themselves seem to not matter all that much, except when they suddenly do. In other words, nothing makes sense, nothing is consistent, and yet everyone apart from K is pretending that it does. And while the trial is fiction, it is clear from reading Kafka's letters, including the letter to his father, that this was just how the world appeared to him. Herman would bombard his son with contradictory demands from a very young age. He would ask him to take his work more seriously, and then in the same breath mock that very work. He would demand gratitude, and yet at the same time actively drive Kafka away. Every opinion that Herman held was law, but it could also change on a dime depending on what mood he was in. In effect, Kafka's household was a domain where truth no longer mattered. The brilliant philosopher Hannah Arendt used to use the term defactualize to describe a situation where facts not only no longer mattered, but were indistinguishable from what was fiction or lies. Herman fenced Kafka in with so many contradictions and bewildering statements that he felt there was no choice but to bow to whatever his father said. He learned not to trust his own mind or his own senses, as his perspective on the world had been proved unreliable in the eyes of the only authority that mattered. As Kafka put it, it was almost impossible to act upon any thought completely or continually. He was living in a world without facts. His own personal 1984. Today, we might use the term gaslighting to describe this sort of dynamic, but arguably that is just a small part of a much wider phenomenon. While gaslighting tends to describe the devaluing of someone's perspective in a one-to-one relationship, this is often a part of general social life as well. Friedrich Nietzsche observed that systems could become so enmeshed with the fabric of a community that they become unquestionable dogma. He saw Christian ethics as just one example of this. For him, social interaction is at least partly a struggle for control over which values the community has. And when one group has more power than another, they will not just dominate them physically, but psychologically as well. In effect, they will change the philosophy and accepted truths of the community until their domination is not just achieved, but deemed good and just. Then anyone that stands against them are not just resistors or rebels, they are actively evil. This is one of the reasons why Nietzsche prized solitude so highly. He thought it was the only way to rip yourself from this influence and finally think and question freely. In effect, Nietzsche and Kafka share the same fear of other people. They are both concerned that their particular views and perspectives will be devalued and scattered for the sake of venerating whoever has power in the moment. And they are concerned with the threat posed by confusion to the sovereignty of their own minds. They're evil. This saves a lot of cognitive efforts, but it's ultimately still a simplification. One of the great pieces of wisdom we find in many religions is that there is no such thing as a perfect person, but also no such thing as a wholly evil person either. We often recognize this from a first-person perspective. We see the good and bad in the people we have connections to. This is often what makes it so hard to leave relationships that are really awful, because some aspects of them are not awful, some aspects of them are great, and that blinds us to the bad parts, because we are so used to either seeing caricatures of horrible relationships with no redeeming qualities or happy marriages of 75 years. Part of Kafka's brilliance, but also his suffering, is that he is painfully aware of both the good and evil in his relationship with Herman. On the one hand, this is some admirable honesty, but if anything, it makes Kafka's dilemma all the more painful. It is the glimmers of warmth and care in his father that keep his hope alive. They never became close within Kafka's lifetime, but he seemed to always hope that one day Herman would soften up. It would be easy for us to recognize that a person is not good for us if time spent with them was always bad, but it is the good mixed in that makes it so hard to let go. From the outside, it is clear that Herman has been awful for Kafka and has been a major destructive force in his life. And Kafka can see this too, but he can also see just enough light that keeps him attached. It's a real caution about viewing relationships in caricatured terms. In practice, the people that harm us are not outright villains, and the people that do good for us are not saints. And if we expect them to look like this, then we are going into a social life on dangerously false premises. But to socialization, suffering and joy are on offer in equal and extreme measure. Each of us is a bit like our own Kafka protagonist. We are thrown into the world and into communities that we know nothing about and are expected to sink or swim. Every second we are in public, we are playing a game where we only partly know the rules and where the winnings are as high as love and the losses are as low as misery and death. And we don't even have the option of not playing, since permanent isolation is its own form of nightmare. I think that one of the reasons Kafka's novels have endured for generations and will continue to do so for centuries is because he lends a sympathetic and articulate voice to some of our deepest anxieties.
Police investigator who will be there asking all the questions. And finally, the doctor will arrive with the truth serum. And then you enter the Twilight Zone. the doctor starts pushing the first dose into your IV and right into your bloodstream. It's pretty much a sci-fi serum that you think about when you hear the phrase truth serum. Like, that's what it sounds like. A lot of the drugs used in the truth serum are just anesthetics. Or they're basically drugs that put you to sleep, that force you into a state of unconsciousness. If you're having surgery, you'll get some of this. Now, too much truth serum, you go completely under. You're knocked out. You're not talking to anybody. You can't listen to anybody. You're gone. Now, if you get too much of even that, then you're dead. But too little truth serum, your brain is still way too conscious, and you can think about the questions being asked. You can think about how you're going to filter your thoughts. The twilight zone is the name for the sweet spot in the middle. It's sort of purgatory. Each dose depends on the size, metabolism, and a whole bunch of other factors relative to each person, but there's always a twilight zone for each person, where they can answer full open-ended questions, but they lose the ability to filter their thoughts. They lose the ability to think about, wait, is this going to help me if I say this, or is this going to hurt me? They're almost delirious. They just say whatever's on their mind. Michael Stevens, also known as Vsauce on YouTube, did a Mindfield episode where he was injected with truth serum in a low-stakes form of narcoanalysis testing, and he described what it felt like throughout the entire procedure. He said with each dose, he fell deeper and deeper into this twilight zone. He said, I'm feeling warm all over, just all over, so warm. I feel like in order to feel like this, I would have to have 6 alcoholic beverages. I feel kind of drunk. At a certain point, I feel like I'm gonna go unconscious. Full immersion in the twilight zone is like a hypnotic trance. You lose all critical thinking, and basically the concept of time doesn't even exist. Your doctor will continue to monitor you as the officer or police investigator starts asking you questions, and they start off really easy just to see if you're there. What's your full government name? Who's the current president of the United States? When Michael Stevens reached this point in the True Serum experiment, he said, I don't remember anything after them asking me who the president was. But that's the Alex, Abby had no idea that her ex-husband was a criminal. He had a penchant for fraud. He would trick people, sleep with them, and steal from them, and then rinse and repeat. His usual method was, he would meet these people online, and it didn't matter if they were women or men. He would meet with them on dating websites. He would tell them that he was a gold dealer, and that he made so much money off of his investments in gold. Now, if they look at his social media page, it's filled with penthouses, presidential suites and hotels, $100,000 watches, supercars. I mean, the guy is clearly living it up. He would tell them that he turned gold investments into gold. Like, you could make a ton of money from it. So he would take these people to these random small gold shops, like in the middle of the street, talk them into buying large amounts of gold, like thousands of dollars of gold, sometimes even tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you'd sit there and you'd be like, the gold market is down right now. In a few months, it's gonna explode. I'm telling you, I know the market, this is gonna double, triple in like 2 months. You're gonna profit like crazy. Like, there's never been an opportunity like this. They would go home with their pockets full of gold. They would have like a skip in their step. They're so excited, you know, they think that they're gonna be rich. Alex would later seduce them in their house, sleep with them, and when their guard was down, it's alleged that he would run off with all the gold that they just bought.
Wow.
Yeah, but he
I guess that's kind of smart because you can track gold.
Yeah.
There's no records. You can just sell the gold somewhere and cash the money.
And he did well. He made allegedly about $800,000 USD from that. But Alex was not the only one keeping secrets. The father, Cao Kwong, this is when the reports of him being allegedly rapist and the police force came out. But other than that, the 65-year-old guy was in massive amounts of debt. Shinichiro was the invisible kid in class. They call him ghost students. So if he walks into class, nobody would notice. Nobody would be like, oh, Shinichiro's here. Or they wouldn't even glance his way. It's almost like he has no presence. If he skipped school because he was sick, nobody would ask him, hey, why weren't you here yesterday? They wouldn't even notice. He just kind of floated around and existed. People would know if he was gone, that they were missing a student because they know the number of students per classroom, but nobody could place who it was. They'd be really thinking, they're like, man, I know we're missing a student because it's normally 32 students, but now it's 31 students, but I, for the life of me, can't figure out who is missing. That was Shinichiro. He was a no-face kid, a ghost player in the classroom. Then the natural assumption would be that if anybody showed Shinichiro attention and admiration, he would like them back. He's missing. That was Shinichiro. He likes his grandma. I mean, that's what logically makes sense, right? There was a little boy named Jun Hasa. Shinichiro usually employed as a medical practitioner or caregiver that intentionally kills people under their care. So the angel of death typically starts off by believing they're doing a favor for the patient by killing them, because now they no longer have to feel pain or suffering. They act like they think that. I don't think deep down they think that, okay? But usually this escalates to them just killing people with like common colds. And like reasonably healthy and easily treatable patients, they'll just kill them. Even the angel of death type can be divided into 3 subgroups. You've got the mercy killer. These are the ones that like to live in this self-praising delusional land where they think that they're helping the sick patients. But it's like, no, they have the flu. You didn't need to kill them, right? But they like to convince themselves. Then you have the hero of death types, where the killer will endanger someone's life to save them. Usually the victim doesn't even end up surviving, but everyone around them looks at them like, wow, you really gave it your all. You really cared. And then lastly, you just have the sadistic ones, the ones who exert power over helpless victims. And it seems like Lucy fits best in this latter category. I mean, her text messages make me also kind of lean towards the wannabe hero, but she just didn't do enough as a healthcare professional. And I think that she knew that. Like even Dr. J was like, she looks like she's acting busy. An expert said she committed her crimes quietly. She wasn't playing some heroine. She didn't go out of her way to provoke any attention, which is interesting. Some killers enjoy killing. They like playing God. They get a kick and a pleasure out of it. She causes harm and purely just gets pleasure out of it.
Yeah, that's what I think too. As I'm listening is, I feel like she has zero care for these babies. She doesn't even see them as humans, or she doesn't care about them. I think her goal is not even killing. Her goal is to see other people suffer. So the parents and everyone else suffering. And the kids are the collateral of her trying to see other people in pain. So she goes for the twins. She goes for the moms again and again and again.
Yes, okay, the twins thing, I was thinking like, I thought it was so interesting that there were a lot of twins in today's case. I thought originally maybe the doctors could sum it up as some sort of genetic condition. Zarati, she was always seen driving around in a BMW. She actually becomes enemy number 1 for the rest of the group. It would only be natural for them to slowly want to kill the flies. She needs an enemy to keep the rest of her group behind her because she's not going to do it with her stellar personality. They need a purpose, something to talk about on a daily basis, someone that they're up against. Because if there's no common enemy, then the one in charge, Helen, naturally becomes enemy number 1 for the rest of the group. Extra $1 billion in wealth. And netizen suspect number 3, Frank D'Angelo. Frank is a character straight out of a movie because he did actually star in a few gangster-themed movies that Barry Sherman funded. His parents are Italian, and at one point he owned a beer company. He hosted a late-night talk show, tried to get into politics, and starred in movies that Barry funded. He's 20 years younger than Barry, and basically the complete opposite of Barry, but somehow the friendship worked. To give you some context, Frank D'Angelo says things like, I suck at golf, but I do look spectacular on the golf course. The first meeting was in Barry's office where Frank proudly placed a container of apple juice on Barry's desk and told him to try it. He was an apple juice sales rep, and I don't know if the juice was that good or if Barry was just looking for a new friendship. They got along instantly. Frank would actually become one of the closest members to Barry's inner circle, which is very lucrative because Frank would have access to the bank of Barry. When Frank's juice company went bankrupt, he showed Barry a poorly written business proposal to start a beer brewing factory, which he doesn't have any experience. He just really likes beer. Yeah, Barry the billionaire helped his friend fund this new company. He paid for Frank to tour Europe to learn new techniques and buy equipment. When Frank wanted to sponsor an ice hockey game with his beer company, Barry funded it. So he had all of his ads on like some of the biggest ice hockey games in Canada. They barely saw any returns. Customers were complaining that despite the high dollar advertisement, which is rumored to have been around $15 million spent on ice hockey endorsements alone, the craft beer just tasted like regular beer that you could get at the store for a few bucks. Then in 2007, Frank decided to go into the industry. He hosted a late night talk show, released an album, wrote, directed, and starred in several street gang themed movies. And obviously, the financial backer to all of his projects was his best friend Barry Sherman. There are no exact figures, but there are estimates that have been thrown around that Barry had spent like $250 million on Frank D'Angelo, $250 million during the course of their friendship. And it seems like at least one of the Sherman kids, Jonathan, was getting sick of it. Friendship. And it seems like at least one of the Sherman kids, Jonathan, was getting sick of it. It's interesting because Barry seems to have been very generous with all of his friends, but the most generous with Frank. And a lot of people suspect it's because Barry's friends were all academics like himself. They all kind of had their own things going on, and they all grew up or ran in the same circles. Frank was not that at all. He had everything Barry didn't have. He was indulgent, reckless, wild. When he was young, Frank had joined a band, like out of nowhere, and he started touring across North America with no money, spending all this money to go to all these different cities where nobody knew him, making no money, no return. He had to live on hot water where he would pour ketchup inside, stir it into a soup, and then put some crackers in. That was his meal, like for a long time, which is not necessarily a bad story, but I think it gives you an idea of his impulsivity. Barry literally could never do that because of the line of work that he's in, and he has a whole family. So maybe he's funding Frank's dreams to kind of vicariously live through him. But did Frank kill Barry in anger because he knew that Barry was going to wean him off or cut him off for a brief second? And that to me kind of reminds me of someone when, you know, like if someone lies and you know that that's a lie, they kind of glance at you to see if you caught them, to try and just like analyze you maybe. It's like a split second, he just glances at the camera. And it's just so strange. I try to shield her from these things. So she would sit there and listen to them thank Allah for giving them a daughter that worked so hard for the family. She just, I don't know, she said it was a very complicated feeling. And it broke her heart to keep this secret. And her one goal was, I want to give my parents everything, but one day I'm going to build a real career. I'm going to do something outside of work and I can move on from this so that I don't have to feel like I'm living a double life. So when a friend introduced her to a taxi driver who said that he could get her an acting job, CD is through the moon. I mean, she was skeptical, yeah, but she can't afford to pass up an opportunity like this. The taxi driver is not the one hiring. He said, you know, I gave this ride to this, I think he was Japanese, a Japanese man named James. He said that he's got this huge YouTube channel, works for a production company, and they're going to make YouTube pranks. So this is like in 2017 where YouTube was a Japanese man. He's a North Korean. So CD's like, okay, absolutely. She calls James's number and raging, like all of that.
Wow.
So it kind of made sense. Everyone's like, oh yeah, everyone's putting money into YouTube pranks right now. So this Japanese guy named James is like, hey, taxi driver, here's my card. If you ever find future actresses who want to be part of my YouTube videos, just have them call me. So CD's like, okay, absolutely. She calls James's number and she meets up with him. Now, you probably already guessed it. James is no Japanese man. He's a North Korean spy. They met for the first time January of 2017, a little over a month before Kim Jong-nam's death. On the day of the meeting, CD took a short, selfie video of her and James, which becomes vital evidence later. This was not anything new for CD. She dreamed of making it in the industry. She dreamed of acting and quitting work, and she documented her entire journey. Like, this was the very first step. She hoped that someone would see these videos and maybe cast her as like a minor character in a minor role, and then eventually that would lead to something bigger and bigger, and then she would have a job that her parents would be proud about. That was her new dream. James did not speak any Indonesian, so they had to use Google Translate to communicate, but it was pretty clear. She was going to get paid about $100 per prank. James introduced her to his cameraman, who would also be there during all of these pranks, and he was going to film everything. James would stay hidden, and CD would be the one facilitating the pranks to these random strangers. James also introduced her to the YouTube channel boss. His name was Mr. Chang. So whereas James was very shy and reserved, Mr. Chang was outgoing, friendly, even a little flirtatious with CD. He knew Indonesian, Japanese, Korean. I mean, CD was very impressed by this man. She thought, no wonder he's the brains behind this whole thing. He seems like an entrepreneur. He seems like a go-getter. Mr. Chang is just another one of the North Korean spies. There were 8 North Korean spies on this alleged mission. Every man in this operation is a North Korean spy, but CD had no freaking clue. Neither did Dawn. So Dawn is the other actress. They don't know each other. CD and Dawn had never met prior to this. They're not even from the same country. They don't even speak the same language. Dawn was also from a small rural farming village, but she was from Vietnam. Lotion before the prank. Keep this in mind, okay? So they would smear her hand with lotion and they would say, okay, go up to that stranger and wipe the lotion on their face. She would do it, and it almost never escalated to the point of someone hurting her or getting mad at her. Almost everyone just seemed confused and silently angry. Then they would escalate. They would say, hey, put this baby oil on your hands and play peekaboo with that random stranger. So she would run up to a random man, and they would always pick the person that they wanted her to approach. She would run up to the random man, put her hands, cover his eyes, and then when he turned around, she would say, sorry, and then run off. There was always a cameraman that was hiding in the corner filming the whole thing. And or maybe you're saying bye to a loved one. So he sits there and he meets up with a young woman, CD. CD is patiently waiting for him. She had gotten a text for this airport location, and she thought that she was here just to film another YouTube prank video. I mean, this is what she's been doing for the past month, getting paid to go meet at an undetermined, very public location, and he would point at a couple of people, she would run up and put some baby oil on their face, get paid a couple $100. She had already ordered her coffee. She was sitting down waiting for him. He didn't even bother ordering anything. He just walked right up to her and explained the game plan. Today, we've got a new prank. Okay, it's kind of like the lotion prank, but a little bit different. Here's the idea. We're gonna put a blend to the peekaboo prank and the baby oil prank. So I'm gonna cover your hands with oil and maybe some lotion later. You're gonna walk up to people that we point at and cover their eyes. Easy peasy, right? Okay, sounds good. Do you have a target in mind already? Now, he usually did. Mr. Chang almost always did. He said that he would pick out the person who looked most likely to give a strong reaction but not call the police. That's what he told CD. He said it's all about the YouTube views. It's all about the YouTube engagement. That meant he would go after normal, non-scary, non-intimidating looking adults. Oh, and here he comes. Don't make it obvious, but behind you, 5 o'clock, gray suit jacket, black backpack. CD reached behind her and pretended to fiddle with her bag strap. She glanced up, and sure enough, there was this kind of portly-looking man that was walking briskly through the airport. He was stopping to look at the list of departure gates. She turned back to Mr. Chang. Okay, got it. And the lotion? No, we're gonna do oil this time. Here. He takes the bottle out of his bag and pours a little bit on CD's hands. She's like, oh god, it's slimy. Well, yeah, don't touch your face or your clothes with it. It's gonna stain. So go up to him, cover his eyes, and run away when he turns around. Right now? In a second. I need to set up the camera. He's over there somewhere, the cameraman. But there's another actress this time too. She's gonna do the same thing, but she's gonna come up from the front and cover his mouth. He's gonna think that he's getting kidnapped. It's gonna be so good for the video. I've got another team at another cafe location to get all the angles with another cameraman. Oh, and you can wash your hands afterwards. There's bathrooms by the doors. CD looks at her coffee cup that she's not gonna be able to finish because she's got oil all over her hands now. What a shame. And Mr. Chang's other team consisted of 2 men who are currently at a cafe on the other side of the airport, and they were in their places ready for action. On the other side of Terminal 2, Mr. Y was talking alongside Dawn and a couple other North Korean spies, keeping a lookout. Right before 9 a.m., all actors and crew take their places. The girls are hidden behind columns on opposite sides of the check-in desk. And minutes later, when Mr. Chol walks through the doors, CD, Dawn, and all of the North Korean spies track him with their eyes. The girls wait for their signals. Mr. Chang gives the signal. CD runs out from behind the pillar and towards Kim Jong-nam. We're gonna call him Nan. He turned the other way, but he didn't see her coming. He just heard her steps, and in less than 3 seconds, he felt a pair of small hands covering and smearing oil onto his eyes and face. He's like, what the hell? Mr. Y gave the signal that he saw CD rush out. Less than a second after CD, Dawn approaches Nam from the front, and she places her hands on top of his face, almost like on top of his mouth and nose.
Why do they need 2 girls? Is it
there's a reason. So after CD covers his eyes and she walks away saying sorry, Mr. Y gives the signal, and Doan comes out from her side of the pillar, which is now in front of Kim Jong-nam. She walks up to his face and kind of places her hand on his face, like covering his mouth and his nose. And in less than 3 seconds, he felt 2 pairs of hands just all over his face, and he has no idea what the hell is going on.
What's his reaction?
His reaction is like, what the fork is wrong with these girls?
So he's not alarmed.
I don't think he's alarmed to the sense like, I'm being attacked. I think it was more of like who do these little girls think they are, like messing with me right now? Like maybe he thought, I don't know if he went as far to think it's a YouTube video, but I would imagine it's kind of how we would react, like, are we getting pranked right now? Like, this is really weird.
Yeah, okay.
They didn't seem like these crazy assassins. He's not thinking, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill me. It's just like, who are these little girls? Like, what are they doing to my face? So he grabs Doan's arms because she wasn't able to leave fast enough. Ceedee was able to run off, and he's like, who are you? She's like, sorry. She wiggles out of his grip and runs away. Ceedee is long gone at this point. Line for the nearest bathroom to wash the oil off their hands. This again is all caught on CCTV. What the girls didn't know was how close to death that they were that day. Instead of baby oil or lotion this time, because you were asking why are there 2 girls involved. The chemical on their hands were 2 different components of a chemical called VX, Venomous Agent X. This sounds like that of a Marvel movie, but it's real. VX is an odorless, tasteless, amber-colored liquid that has the same density of water, but it's oily. If you were to see a bottle of it, you would think that it's apple juice, but in oil form. Maybe you would think it's like dirty frying oil. If you inhale it, if it touches your skin, if it goes into your nervous system in any way possible, in a matter of minutes, it breaks the connection between your brain and your muscles. What does that mean? Suddenly your body feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds and you cannot move a single muscle. Your arms and your legs go limp, and you can't even move your diaphragm. So your diaphragm is what makes you breathe. The diaphragm sits just below the lungs, and it contracts in and out, which pushes air in and out of your lungs. But now, with that paralysis, your diaphragm isn't moving, and you can't force it open, and you can't force it closed, you're suffocating, and you can't move. That's how it kills you.
Wow.
It's not fun. It's painful. The UN classified VX as a weapon of mass destruction, and stockpiling more than 3.53 ounces, that's a very little amount, of it per year has been internationally outlawed since 1993. This treaty has been signed by almost every single country in this entire planet in the time they peed. Maybe a day or 2 ago, to pee. Their bladder could rupture inside of their bodies, and that doesn't sound too dangerous to some people, but it's deadly. That's why they tell you to pee before you start driving, because if you get into a traumatic car accident with a full bladder, and in that accident your bladder ruptures, the urine leaks into your insides, that's all toxic waste. You're gonna die very quickly of an infection. They say that they never even noticed. You don't even know where your kidneys are. You don't feel your kidneys. You never think about your kidneys. But then when you get a kidney stone, you will never forget where your kidneys are. They said it felt like someone was stabbing you in the kidney with a red hot knife and then twisting it around back and forth. Someone even touching your back makes you want to throw up and gag. Another person stated, I couldn't move because of the pain. I thought it was gas, but then when I went to the toilet, I literally lunged forward on the toilet. I was in so much pain, I could not move, I could not stand up, I could not stop shaking from the pain. I was as white as a sheet. I started throwing up and sweating like I was running a marathon. They're trying to pass a kidney stone through their urine.
Oh my goodness.
The pain was so severe, I couldn't even make a noise. I just had silent tears running down my cheeks. Another person just simply put it, I had 2 kidney stones. I've also been ejected from a moving vehicle going 75 miles per hour. I've been shot at before, and I've experienced severe drug withdrawals. I would take any of the others again over any other kidney stone ever. I'm not kidding. Your entire groin hurts like hell, and when it finally passes out in the urine, it will tear the lining of the urethra. The pain is a 9 out of 10 on the pain scale, and you cannot escape it. It is absolutely relentless. If you commit libel and slander against a billion-dollar company that has access to some of the most top attorneys in the nation, you could be looking at years of a lengthy court battle that's purposely dragged out so that you lose everything you have to fund this losing fight. Because sometimes lawsuits are about who dries out first, who runs out of cash first. And if you're someone with a river flowing through your house with an endless stream of water, and you're going up against case scenario in China, endless stream of water, and you're going up against someone who's got a tiny glass filled with a few sips, who's going to win the battle? But losing everything to your name is not even the worst case scenario. In China, defamation can land you in prison for up to 3 years. And with Dr. Zhang's case, interestingly enough, he wasn't just risking being sued for libel by Sanlu, meaning Sanlu could sue him for spreading false news or lies about him just because he thinks all of his patients' parents feed them Sanlu. That's not enough. Dr. Zhang could be sued for spreading false information that leads to a national food emergency. If he spreads a rumor that Sanlu is contaminated and is causing kids to have kidney stones, and it turns out to be false, but parents don't believe it because they're in full-on panic mode, there's a baby formula crisis, he could be held responsible for that.
1. The brutality of nihilism. From Nietzsche to Kierkegaard to Sartre to Dostoevsky, philosophers have warned against the dark spectre of nihilism. Often described as a distressing state where life seems pointless, nihilism has been used to prophesy the fall of civilizations, make sense of people taking their own lives, and explain the downfall of whole religions. But here, Tolstoy describes a component of nihilism that is often ignored, how it can come knocking at your door unannounced, just when you ought to feel so happy. At the time he is writing, Tolstoy is at the height of his fame. He has published War and Peace and Anna Karenina and cemented himself as one of the greatest novelists of all time. Not only that, but he is a respected intellectual, as well as a member of the aristocracy. He boasts a large estate, riches that will keep him comfortable for the rest of his life, and a reputation that won't be forgotten until the names Shakespeare and Virgil are also wiped from the history books. In short, he has not only everything he ever wanted, but everything he could want. And not just in the realm of material success, he also had a wife and children that he loved with all his heart. But gradually, all of this stops bringing him joy. Initially, he cannot quite explain why, but one by one they begin to strike him as pointless. He looks back on all of his great novels as meaningless trivialities, not achieving much of anything, and ultimately unimportant in the grand scheme of things. He becomes actively cognizant of his own mortality in a way that he never was before. And so when he looks at his family, all he can see are future particles of ash, carefully assembled to fool him into thinking that they are worth something. Like the Buddha before him, he never was. According to Schopenhauer, one of the things that our minds do very, very well is promise us happiness and satisfaction. They are constantly whispering in our ear that if we only do this or that, then we will finally be content with our lot in life. Perhaps they will tell us to become more attractive or to achieve great riches and fame. And if we do manage to achieve this, then our minds will leave us alone for a while. But then, just like the sun rises each morning, it will creep back into our consciousness and request something else. In some ways, this isn't a bad thing. It gives us enough to do from cradle to grave to stop us going mad or losing hope, even though it also makes the prospects of permanent satisfaction seem pretty much impossible. But Tolstoy is in a very particular position. He has, in effect, another form of distraction from the problem, but this time by throwing ourselves at one of the only things that tends to strike us as intrinsically desirable, pleasure itself. So someone taking this road might become addicted to adrenaline, or find themselves striving after higher and higher states of physical intoxication. According to Tolstoy, this was how most people with the means to do so attempted to escape nihilism, and we have good reason to suspect that this too is a doomed path. Ironically, Epicurus himself warned about this approach to life. For him, it was imperative that we not get in the habit of seeking greater and greater states of pleasure, because we will soon become trapped on a hedonic treadmill. Once we get used to a given state of enjoyment, that in itself will no longer be sufficient. It will just feel like another day at the office. Just like we would become accustomed to higher and higher doses of certain drugs, and so require more and more to feel their effects. Epicurus would say this type of crude hedonism will eventually come back to bite us. Not only will it stop giving us active joy, but we will start to compare the rest of our lives to these heightened, intoxicated states, and so the rest of existence will feel drab by comparison. I particularly like this aspect of Tolstoy. Something like, as a belief in God declined, people lost their sense of meaning and purpose. This is one reason why Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky explicitly recommend going back to religion as a means of combating existential despair. But, of course, there is clearly a problem here. Even if we assume that they are right and a belief in God would solve our existential worries, how do we even go about doing that? It is very difficult to secure a belief in the long term if you don't genuinely think it is rational to hold it. This is why Plato thought that justification was an essential component of knowledge. It is what held it firm in the face of challenge, and kept our belief consistent enough that it could be a guide to life. At the time of having his crisis, Tolstoy had been a loose atheist for many years. He had been raised in the Orthodox Church, but he just could not bring himself to believe in the sacramental reality of their practices. Baptism and the Eucharist and the doctrine of the resurrection struck him as absurd, and no matter what he did, he just could not get himself to accept these teachings. And he genuinely did try. He tried to accept them on faith, but he saw this inability to believe as a real problem, because when he asked who could truly bear existential despair, it was not the intellectuals or the learned clergy, it was rather the devout faith of the Russian peasantry. They endured more hardship than Tolstoy ever had, so how had they coped? Well, on Tolstoy's analysis, it was the strength of their faith, but not just an intellectual acceptance of their religion, but a real lived faith, one that directed much of their actions. So Tolstoy seems to be in a bit of a bind here. On the one hand, he sees faith as the only way out of his troubles, but at the same time, he thinks he cannot achieve it without betraying his reason. And it wouldn't even matter if he was willing to make this trade, because beliefs that, deep down, we think are unjustified are notoriously unstable. But this is where Tolstoy asks a brilliant question that we often gloss over. Why exactly does religion seem to help existential despair? We often take it for granted because empirically it just seems to be true. But what is the causative mechanism here? Is there a particular belief common to all or most faiths that allows them to achieve this? And if so, can we replicate it without having outright theism? In Tolstoy's opinion, the answer is incredibly complicated and actually changes from essay to essay, but overall it leans towards loosely yes. In his brilliant essay examining the essence of religion, he asks what it is that religion sets out to answer. And for him, it all boils down to clarifying our relationship with the infinite. That is, with concepts like God or eternity or heaven or immortality. Back in the first section, we suggested that while humans are finite beings, we can still desire infinity. We can want not just life, but eternal life, not just goodness, but a being of infinite goodness. For Tolstoy, we see a universe that is so much bigger than us and we want to make sense of it. This is the task of faith. It runs parallel to ordinary empirical inquiry, and while it is amenable to reason, in some way it precedes it, because it supplies our first premises about what ought to be the case, not just what is, something that mere empiricism is famously poorly placed to do. It's difficult to say a lot here, because Tolstoy does not work out this relationship between faith and empirical inquiry in strict analytic detail. But ultimately, he wanted faith to do two things: make sense of our relationship to this mysterious infinity or whole in a psychologically satisfactory manner, and do this without directly contradicting our rationality. So for him, the pure essence of religion consists of a few key ideas: that there is some creative order to the universe, that there is a right and wrong way to behave towards our fellow man, and that our lives matter, not just now, but after death as well. The first of these needs is traditionally filled by a creator, the second by religious ethics, and the final one by the promise of immortality. And Tolstoy leans towards these answers as well, but I find his overall point very interesting, because at least in theory, we don't need these particular answers, just satisfactory ones to the three challenges. It seems like the key part of Tolstoy's worldview, doing all of the heavy lifting here, is the concept of normativity. This is a fancy philosophical word that essentially just means imbued with value or inherently desirable. That is, it carries the implication that there are things that should and should not be the case. We see this sort of thing come up most commonly in ethics, but it is a key part of existentialism as well. The myth of Sisyphus famously opens with the question, why should I continue to live? And that is a should question. Camus is asking for a justification to carry on living, something with normative force. Hell, even the idea of rationality itself contains normative components. It separates the ways we ought to reason from the ways we ought not to. Hence the brilliant observation of C.S. Peirce that logic is a normative science. And it seems like an open question whether we need a deity for this. While Plato and the Stoics were both theists in a loose sense of the word, all the work in their worldviews was being done by the idea of a universal logic or universal reason to the movements of the universe. This is one reason the Stoics were such big fans of acting in accordance with nature. For them, nature was not just a description of how the world was, but was a much richer concept which included how the world ought to be. For the Stoics, nature was not just powerful and awe-inspiring, it was just. This idea of a reasonable universe is also the method through which theistic thinkers tend to get at the inherent normativity of the world. A good example of this is the philosopher Boethius. It is this normativity that Tolstoy wants to latch onto, and in elucidating this, he brings the philosophical problem of meaning into sharper focus. He also clarifies what we would need to do to have objective meaning without God. We would need to get at this normativity through other means. But it is not all smooth sailing, because while Tolstoy opens the door for meaning without God, he doesn't tell us how to walk through it, and even he didn't walk through it. His solution to nihilism is still fundamentally theistic, even if it is critical of the particulars of Christianity. But I want to follow this thought through a little bit further by exploring some parallel.
For loving Coca-Cola drank way more than anybody else. Well, it would turn out all 8 of those Coca-Colas had been tampered with. They all contained a significant dose of the heavy metal called thallium. Thallium is odorless, it's colorless, it's tasteless, and even though there are very small trace amounts that naturally occur inside of our bodies, if there's even a little bit more than that inside of our bloodstream, it becomes lethal. And so when Peggy was admitted to the hospital the second time, around the same time that Dwayne and Travis were also admitted, that neurologist who was looking at Peggy, what he noticed about her condition was that her hair was starting to fall out. And that's when it clicked for him. He had this flashback to his medical training where he was taught about thallium poisoning, and one of the symptoms was hair loss. The other symptom was extreme pain in the extremities. And so the neurologist and his colleagues went and got a thallium test kit, and they tested Dwayne and Travis and Peggy, and they all came back positive for thallium poisoning, but the level of thallium inside of them was astronomical. The boys are lucky to have survived. They had 20,000 times the amount that naturally occurs inside of them. They don't leave Florida within 2 weeks, and so George went to phase 2 of his plan. George had actually spent time in a federal prison in the 1970s for cooking meth, and one of the byproducts of making meth is thallium. So George used his old meth cooking skills, and he whipped up some thallium, and he put lethal doses of thallium in 8 different Coca-Cola bottles, and then after mixing them all up so you couldn't tell there was any chemical inside of them, he used his bottle topping machine to put tops back on top of each of them. George made his own beer, and so that's why he had a topping machine at his house. And so with his 8 deadly drinks all prepared looking like brand new Coca-Colas, George waited until Peggy and Pi and her family were out of their house, and then he snuck over and he walked into their kitchen and he placed these Coca-Colas right down on the kitchen counter and he slid them into a storage nook, and then he left the house, and that was it. And over the next several weeks, he watched with absolute pleasure as the family got sick and then Peggy died. While George never actually admitted that he had poisoned his neighbors, he did do some things that really tipped off Susan that he had to be the guy. Like for example, that Mensa mystery murder weekend, the murder method that George had come up with was poisoning. And remember, at that point, Susan has been sent undercover to find out if George and Diana are responsible for poisoning their neighbors. And now George is sitting up there talking about the perfect crime he's come up with, and it's poisoning. And so that was why she had followed up with him really specifically on, wow, what else do you know about poisoning, and how'd you learn about poisoning, and what kind of poisons do you know about? And over the following months, even though Susan never got George to actually admit to her when she was undercover recording him that he was the poisoner, she did completely earn his trust. And she did this by always making sure she was very submissive around him and always made sure to stroke his ego and remind him how smart he was. I mean, George was used to being in a relationship with Diana, who's extremely overbearing. Balturas, they were willing to rent their house to Susan. And this is important because the house had not actually been empty. A lot of their things were still in the house, including George's things. And so he just assumed Susan would never go through his things. things. But as soon as Susan was in that house and she watched George and Diana drive off, she immediately called in backup. The police swarmed the house, they searched it top to bottom, and in the garage they found George's chemistry equipment, and nestled underneath it was a bottle that contained Valium. George would be found guilty of first-degree murder as well as attempted murder on the rest of Peggy's family, and he would be sentenced to death. As of this episode, he is still alive and he is still on death row. As for his wife Diana, who many people believe must have had something to do with the poisoning or must have at least known it was happening, was never actually charged with anything, and so she would eventually divorce George and move on with her life and remarry. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you have never actually worse than the day before, it was obvious that he was the whole family had no idea what to do. Little did they know, there was actually a very specific reason he was acting the way he was. A few months before January 9th, Sherman had not slept at all. He was looking straight up at the ceiling. He looked worse than the day before. It was obvious that he was not back to normal. And so Ruby called the rest of the family and had them come over to figure out what they were going to do. But when Sherman found out his family was coming to his house, he told Ruby they can't come inside. He was afraid they and others were conspiring to bury him alive. The only complaining of severe abdominal pains. And so he and his wife Ruby and his daughter, they went to the hospital, and the doctor, after examining him and running some tests, determined that most likely his pain was coming from his gallbladder. But the only way to be sure would be to do some exploratory surgery and literally look inside of Sherman's gut and look at his gallbladder and see if that was the problem. And so the doctor asked Sherman, are you prepared to do an exploratory surgery, or would you like to just kind of wait it out and see what happens with his pain? And so Sherman talked it over with his wife and his family, and they made the decision that the pain was just too much, and so they would go forward with the surgery. And so on the morning of January 19th, so again, this is the day that Sherman basically loses his mind, he goes into the hospital completely normal. He goes in with his wife, he goes in with his daughter, and he makes his way over to the surgery wing of the hospital. He says bye to his family, and he's put on a stretcher bed, and he's wheeled in and prepped for surgery, and then brought into the general anesthesia for this operation. The anesthesiologist could administer the 2-drug cocktail that would knock him out for the surgery. Sherman was scheduled to get something known as general anesthesia for this operation, where basically he would be completely out, he wouldn't feel anything, they'd do the surgery, and then he would wake up in recovery. And so once this mask was on Sherman's face, the anesthesiologist began pumping him full of the drugs that would make him be knocked out for the surgery. However, the anesthesiologist only administered one of the 2 drugs necessary for general anesthesia. He administered the paralyzing drug, but he did not administer the actual anesthetic that would knock him out, and most importantly, would get rid of all of his pain. And so as this mask is on his face and Sherman believes he's being given the proper dosage of drugs, the nurse who was nearby told Sherman to go ahead and start counting backwards in his head from 10, knowing full well that Sherman would pass out before he reached 0. And Sherman knew this too. He had been in surgery over here and fixed this. And so the anesthesiologist comes running over from the side of the room. He gets up next to Sherman and begins pumping him full of painkillers. And as he's doing this, he has this moment of clarity. He remembers he didn't give him the anesthetic. And so as these new painkillers that have just been introduced begin to take their effect, Sherman's eyes go from being terrified to glazed over, and he does pass off to sleep. And so now he's out and he can't feel anything. But now the anesthesiologist and the medical team realize they have a very big problem. This patient just experienced 16 minutes of surgery and felt all of it. And at the end of it, when he wakes up, he's going to remember it, and he's probably going to file a lawsuit against the hospital. And so a decision was made. It's unclear if the anesthesiologist acted alone or if the entire team was in on this. But regardless, the anesthesiologist administered an additional drug after giving all these painkillers. This additional drug was called midazolam, but it's better known as the amnesia drug. And like its nickname implies, anyone who gets it will forget what has just happened to them. And so the idea was by giving him this amnesia drug, he won't remember the trauma he had suffered through during the surgery, and so wouldn't file a lawsuit. And so after he was given this drug, the medical team, they went back to doing the surgery, they completed it, and they got him back out to recovery. And then when Sherman woke up in recovery, he did not remember what had happened to him inside of the operating room, at least not consciously. Those horrible 16 minutes had been implanted on Sherman's subconscious. Basically, his body recognized that he had experienced extreme trauma. However, the amnesia drug wiped away the memory of how he received that trauma. So there's this big disconnect in his memory. And so when Sherman came to in the recovery room, he immediately sensed something was horribly, horribly wrong. He was scared, he was anxious, he had this incredible sense of dread, but he had no memory to tie these feelings to. And so as Sherman is sitting in recovery, he must have tried to kind of hide the way he was feeling because he didn't even remotely understand it. He had been completely happy and normal going into the surgery, and now a couple of hours later, he's a complete mess. And so he leaves the hospital that day on January 19th. He goes back to his house and he sits on the couch with his wife, and as he's sitting there, suddenly these horrible feelings he's having, they become too much, and he basically has a panic attack, and he starts screaming out, and he's terrified of something, but he doesn't know what it is. And then over the next couple of days, he began having these flashbacks where he would access the actual 16 minutes of torture he went through, but when he would see someone cutting into him and opening his chest up and sucking things out of it, he didn't think that happened to me, and that's why I feel this way. Instead, he thought it was just this horrible nightmare that he couldn't escape from. And so his family did eventually start getting doctors and psychologists and all these people involved to figure out what was wrong with him, but before they could figure it out, the whole situation had just become too terrible for Sherman. And so on February 2nd, just 2 weeks after he came out of that surgery, he would take his own life. His family was unbelievably heartbroken. It didn't seem real that this had happened, and so they would continue. And answered, and she heard the sound of her friend on the other line, but her friend's voice sounded strange. It was strained and very uncomfortable, and she was asking Zavana if she was paying attention to the news right now. Did she have the radio on or the TV? And Zavana was like, no, why? And the friend would tell her that all over the news right now, there was this huge, terrible traffic accident that had happened in their town, and unfortunately, Zavana's son, Zoran, who she was waiting for to come home, was apparently involved in this accident. Zavana let out a strangled cry when she heard this, and then just dropped what she was using to make food and turned and ran out the door. And when she did, her neighbor who was outside saw her emerge and yelled out to her, hey, is everything okay? And Zavana, as she literally just continued running towards the road, she basically blurted out to the neighbor that her son was hurt and she was going to the hospital. And this neighbor watched as Zavana just ran down the road, turned the corner, and disappeared. Zavana did not have a car of her own, and so literally she was going to run to the hospital to make sure her son was okay. A little while later, that same neighbor who had just watched Zavana disappear around the corner heard a knock on their door. And so the neighbor went to the door, they opened it up, and they were totally shocked at who they saw standing outside. It was Zavana's son, Zoran, who did not appear to be hurt in any way. But before the neighbor could ask any questions about this, Zoran, who looked visibly confused, said to the neighbor, hey, have you seen my mom? We were supposed to meet and have dinner together, and it's just totally unlike her to disappear without telling me where she was going. The neighbor just stared at Zoran for a second, having no idea what was going on here, and then the neighbor was like, well, wait a minute, Zoran, were you in a car accident? And Zoran's like, no, what are you talking about? And then the neighbor kind of filled Zoran in about how they had seen his mother run outside, and she had mentioned how her son had been in this car accident, and she literally ran to the hospital. Zoran was just as mystified by this to the hospital at all that day. And so by the end of that night, when Zoran reported to the police and reported his mother missing, 9 days later, on May 16th, when still Zavana was missing and the police had no idea what happened to her, there were no new leads, nothing. from one of his police sources, and the source would tell him that Zavana had actually just been found, even though this was not public information, and unfortunately, Zavana was dead. Her body, which had been beaten and strangled and stabbed, had been found wrapped up in plastic and dumped in this illegal dumping area not far from the town's football stadium. The source told Vlado that when her body, the officer was calling to say the arrest had been made, they had caught their serial killer, and then he told the editor the name of the person they arrested. And when the editor heard the name, he dropped the phone in shock. The serial killer was Vlado. It would turn out that Vlado appeared very professional and calm on the outside, but inside, he was full of rage, specifically at his mother, who he viewed as this terrible, cruel person. And after she died in 2002, Vlado became obsessed with this idea of getting revenge on his deceased mother. And the way he decided he would do that would be random women who just kind of looked and seemed an awful lot like his mother, i.e. they were poor, older, and cleaning ladies. His 3 victims, Mitra in 2005, Lupita in 2007, and Zavana in 2008, had all personally known Vlado's mother, and so Vlado had actually used that connection to gain each of his victims' trust, and then once he had their trust, he would lure them away to strangle, stab, and beat them to death. In Vlado's explosive newspaper story, he lied about a whole bunch of things just to throw the police off. Like, for example, he made up that he spoke to a witness who claimed to have seen Zavana get into a car with 2 men right before she vanished. Vlado did not see that. That was just a total lie designed to confuse the police. Vlado had also been the one to plant that story on the radio about Zavana's son, Zoran, being in this terrible accident. That had caused Zavana to run out of her house and be vulnerable to be scooped up and killed, which is exactly what Vlado wanted. He had called the radio station and told them about this accident, and because he had previously worked for that radio station, they believed him without doing any fact-checking and broadcast the story. And so really that whole radio broadcast was just a very intentional trap by Vlado to kill Zavana. But what ultimately got Vlado caught was in the article he wrote, he left in some really specific details that the police had not revealed to the public. And so basically by including these in the story, it meant Vlado had an inside scoop into what was really going on. Like, for example, Vlado said that all 3 of these women who had been killed by the serial killer had been strangled to death by telephone cords that were left at the scene. But again, the police had not revealed that to the public, and so when they read the story, they actually became very suspicious of Vlado and thought he could be involved in these murders. And so when Vlado felt like the police were trailing him just to intimidate him, in reality, the police were trailing Vlado because they thought he could be the murderer, and eventually when they got a DNA sample from Vlado, it was confirmed that their suspicions were right. He was the killer. After Vlado's arrest, he was immediately charged with 2 of the 3 murders.
Will always look cool. I guess we
are, but nobody had put them together correctly because the cause of what was happening to George was so weird, no one would have ever thought of it on their own. On the night that George first began coughing in the kitchen, he was not cooking dinner like everybody assumed. He was actually cooking teeth, like human teeth. The metal shop manager told Dr. Weaver on the phone about the scam that George was involved in that had to do with little bits of gold and silver. And the manager explained to Dr. Weaver that George was going to all of these local dentist offices and he was collecting all of their discarded teeth. What George wanted was teeth that had fillings in them because some of the fillings, especially for older patients, were made from gold and silver. George would then literally cook the teeth until he was able to extract the gold and silver. Now, if he had just been cooking teeth with gold fillings, he'd probably still be alive. But because George also was cooking the teeth with silver in them, during that process of cooking the silver teeth, mercury gas was released and George would inhale the gas. And mercury gas is deadly. And so the gas went into George, it ravaged his lungs, and it also created these massive mood swings and mental disturbances, which explained why he became so nasty and mean when he got to the ER. Also, ingesting high levels of silver, which George was doing as well, can turn your skin blue. So in the end, George did not die from pneumonia, he died from mercury poisoning. So that's going to do it. If you enjoyed today's medical mystery stories, be sure to tune in to our
On many occasions, he impersonated members of organizations who wore such uniforms. Jason once claimed that he impersonated an air cadet to steal charity funds. He also dressed as a ticket inspector to hand out bogus fines on the London Underground. Jason even claimed to have infiltrated police stations in Suffolk and Kentish Town to steal radios. He apprehended criminals with a homemade warrant card. It is amazing what a uniform can do. But these were his claims, and it is not clear whether these are delusions or reality. In the year 2000, a couple, but then there were Edward's observations. Darren talked to himself a lot, and sometimes seemed lost in thought. He said that Darren had many strange habits and struggled to hold eye contact, always looking down at the ground. Edward thought that he was a quote, nutcase, and said that he would never allow him near his kids because of how much Darren freaked him out. In addition to this, Darren and Maria moved to a rough part of Austin, Texas, known for its crime, and something that Edward did not approve of.
He called down to John and Alonzo to bring Jackie and Tom up onto the deck. And so Alonzo and John do just that. They march Tom and Jackie up the steps, they bring them out to the deck of the ship, and then Skylar forces them to sign the sale documentation for the boat, as well as had them sign additional paperwork that gave Skylar access to their bank accounts. And while they were signing these documents, Jackie actually misspelled her last name on one of the signature blocks. She left the S off of her last name. That's not something she would have done by accident. It's pretty clear she did that on purpose to signal to the future that she signed this under duress. After all these documents were signed, the 3 men led their 2 captives to the back of the boat. And then once they were standing at the back of the boat, Skylar tells Alonzo in earshot of Jackie and Tom to, hey, go to the front of the boat and get the anchor. And so Tom and Jackie, they know that whatever's going to happen to them next, it's not good. And so Jackie begins pleading with them to let them live.
You see, it's very simple to pretend to be someone nowadays, to make 2 shitty people look stupid, and that I have done. That's what happens when you ruin someone's life. They can fuck yours up easy. You took everything from me when you started dating that fat little bitch. Are you
showed up to the girls' slumber party and dropped Taylor off that evening?
But just keep this in mind later, because according to psychologists, pathological lying begins at a very young age, and it can stem from some sort of trauma. By high school, Taylor happened. What's the doctor going to find when he comes in and looks at you? Because he can tell. They can tell in about a second if you just gave birth or not. Okay then. Taylor, we found a woman on the side of the road and the baby was removed from her body. And then you showed up with the baby and you've had a hysterectomy. There's no way you could have been pregnant, even though you've been telling people for a while that you've been pregnant. Which, side note, the officer did not make a mistake. Reagan was found in her home, but sometimes officers will lie about certain details because if you were involved, you'll correct them. If you weren't involved, you don't know if they messed up a detail or not.
Wow, okay.
Taylor takes the bait and
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When it comes to talking about someone, okay, there's 2 ways people go about it. When they're around, it's all smiles. Oh, Roy, he's a gentle, kind soul. I mean, he's a bit introverted, that's all. Very shy. Or 2, when you don't think anyone is listening. Roy's a loser. Lazy, too, yeah. That's what the neighbor said about Roy. We have no way of knowing which version is true, but we do know that on paper, Roy and his cousin Shaju, they have a lot in common. They're both shy and introverted. They mainly keep to themselves. I mean, make of that what you will, right? They both grew up in well-off families. Their parents were the financially stable ones. Neither of them had this intense, crazy pressure to work, and they would both make a single decision that would destroy their families. It would set off a chain of events that would kill their closest family members, one by one, until 6 of them are dead. Both of them would marry their cousins. Roy's cousin, Shaju, I mean, he must have known to some degree about the deaths in the pink house. Everyone in town is whispering about how cursed the house is. There's no way that he missed it. How could he not? It's literally his cousin's side of the family that are dying in there. It's like his aunt, it's his uncle, they're dying. It was always a thought that crossed his mind, though. Maybe the family's cursed. But if he's just my cousin, that means I'm not cursed, though, right? Like, whatever dark entities are cursing that family, technically the pink house, they're the Thomases.
I know what kind of man you are.
Contains during the timestamps during. Most of the time, a reviewing officer will need to sit there and provide a written account in graphic detail of what the video contains during the timestamps during each video. A lot of law enforcement officials state bluntly they would rather deal with dead, decomposing bodies that smell incredibly horrendous than sit in front of a computer and watch these types of videos. There are dedicated task forces for these jobs. They have to receive regular counseling, heavy psychiatric evaluations. Even before they're tasked with logging such evidence, they typically go through these extensive training periods to develop the coping mechanisms, literally just to get their mind ready to watch these videos, to deal with the potential psychological trauma of what happens when they see something like this. The turnaround rate for someone in the task force like this usually is maxed out 1 or 2 years, maybe 3. Some don't even make it past a month. Sometimes they'll leave and they'll be asked to come back because they were really good at identifying markers.
Identifying markers?
So in the video, you're not just looking at the crime. That's one element. You have to log exactly what happens in detailed format so it can be presented in court. But you're also looking for sweaters, music in the background, some sort of symbol that could indicate what state it was filmed in, what country it was, because she deserves to die. So he said that he plans on documenting his plans to send his favorite celebrity an HIV bomb, because she deserves to die. So he's going to find a worker that has AIDS, pay for her blood. Obviously, he's not going to sleep with her. He states that. Then inject the blood into hypodermic needles, send her a package looking like it's from a PR firm from New York City that's inviting her to an AIDS gala. That's perfect. In research for funding for AIDS, she's going to open up the invitation and boom, straight into her thumbs, 2 needles will inject her with HIV AIDS blood. He states, I really like this AIDS thing. It's sort of poetic. Technically, if you really want to get into it, it's much easier than having to go fly over there and stalk her or shoot her or stab her. He said he would make the package seem like a formal invitation. He pretends to have his thumbs poked at one point and he starts screaming bloody murder because that's his master plan. This way, I mean, she can't not poked at one point and he starts screaming bloody murder because that's his master plan. This way, I mean, she can't not think about him. He will be the biggest part of her life. He will be the one person in her life that she'll never stop thinking about. She'll never forget him.
Georgia.
Yeah.
He was here.
Yeah. But that doesn't tell them too much. I mean, the authorities, they reach out to people who would have known Ricardo when he was a kid, and they want to know because sometimes those with obsessive personalities to the point that they become violent towards their obsessions, there might be signs when they're young. There might be little clues. Everyone who knew Ricardo was very confused on how to answer the question. I mean, he was close with his family. There was nothing to indicate that something was wrong. I mean, unless you consider being very shy of crime. He's just one of those kids that didn't make a lot of friends. He liked to keep his circle small. He's an introvert. Very big introvert, actually. I mean, even now, he probably only had like 1 guy friend, 2 guy friends.
When was this happening?
96.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ralph being one of his best friends. But you know what? Now that they're all thinking about it, he did have this thing where he was terrified of talking to girls. Like, terrified. But everybody just thought, he's super shy. He was extremely intelligent, though, so he just maybe not interested in dating. He did have this fantasy, though, that he would become this world-renowned artist, and that would occupy his mind since childhood. But he didn't become one, right? Well, he never applied to any schools. He was too terrified of rejection, so he just wouldn't apply. He did have this small thing, though, where he would sometimes get fixated on certain movies or certain actresses. Like one time he was watching Thelma and Louise, and he knew every line to that movie. Same with Beetlejuice. His favorite was this actress named Gina Davis. It's almost like he watched anything that she was in. I mean, I wanted to love Björk, and she's ruined it all by dating that music producer, which is why she needs to be harmed. Ricardo tells his little video diaries that there has been a change in his plans. He says, I'm going to do it somewhat different now. The AIDS thing, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to do that. Why? Because I don't have AIDS, that I know of. And to obtain it from a worker is going to be very, very, very difficult, very complicated. So, it'd be very tricky. Ricardo switches his plan to using hydrochloric acid instead.
Still in the needle, or?
No, a spray. He wants to acid attack her in a bomb.
Oh my gosh.
So what am I left with? Right now, I have 2 options.
Himself, all with very, very disappointing results. He says, I'm not too happy with it. I don't think it was enough. I touched it with my hands. I touched the surface of it and nothing happened. Nothing happened on the pizza either. It's just soggy. Which is how he moves to sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is the most commonly used acid for acid attacks. It is highly corrosive and you can find it in household products like drain cleaners. It just melts things away. On humans, it'll cause at least severe burns and then it can get even into the territory of deep tissue damage, leading to permanent disfigurement, blindness, long-term psychological trauma. And this is doing it for him. He compares the 2 acids on pieces of salami. The hydrochloric acid, it turns a tiny piece of the salami into a deeper red color, almost as if someone got a sunburn. But the sulfuric acid basically kills the salami with dark splotches of burnt meat all over. It's going to be the sulfuric acid. He starts manufacturing his own spray mechanism. Basically, this is his getup. He's going to have hollow out a book. He's going to send letters to Björk's management and say, hey, I want Björk to read this script of this movie that my massive Hollywood company is producing. Maybe she wants to be a part of it. He's going to ship over this book, and inside of it is going to be a hole. When you look at it from the outside, it looks like a book. But when she opens the cover to read it, there's going to be a mechanism that gets triggered, and it's going to splash sulfuric acid all over her face, chest, hair, everywhere. The biggest problem, though, with the acid is that once you wipe it off, like if you were to wipe off sulfuric acid instantly, the damage lessens by tenfold. It's still probably going to leave scars, but it's not going to be as bad. If you're able to wash it off almost immediately, it's not going to be permanent. He says it takes time for this, at least a minute to do some serious damage, I would estimate. I don't know, perhaps at least a minute, 60 seconds. Now that's the problem. Let's say I got the book. I opened it and I all over my face. The first thing I would do is run to the bathroom. If you splash a lot of water on you and then you just wash it off, it's going to do minimal damage in comparison to what it would be if it were to stay on your face for at least a few minutes, couple minutes. Oh, that'd be beautiful, man. So this is what I was thinking. As soon as you open the book and wait for like 2 seconds, let the acid go, let her scream, and then say there's gonna be a voice trigger, like a little stereo system, a cassette that starts playing. This is a bomb, and it'll blow up and destroy the house. The first thing she's gonna do is grab her son and get the fuck out of the house, get her child or whoever's in that house, get the hell out. She's gonna worry about her face afterwards. I'm counting on that. Of course, I'm not gonna have an explosive in there.
But just the fact that of, countdown, 20 seconds.
Everyone's safety depends principally on the fact that nobody wishes to kill them. We've come to depend on what we have called the goodwill of civilization. But Agatha Christie says murder is easy. It's unfortunate that we live in a world of monsters that wish nothing more in their hearts than to strip you of every possible joy in your life. So thus I introduce myself, to strip you of every possible joy in your life. I intend no lesson to be taught. I have little insight, no ideas, no solutions that can make any difference. I just want to make you cry. I really doubt any success in this attempt. This was, but just my low-risk mission. I am, though, ready to embark on my last attempt. Your death was not my intention. What you will give me is your pain, in exchange for my family's despair of my death. My death is really less related to my obsession with you. It's my unwillingness to partake in this world for various reasons. My mission, though, is related to you, because it is my last joy. Honestly, your only mistake was having caught my eye. I really should not blame you for not being what I wanted you to be. You being a mother, there's nothing more than I could take from you than your son's innocence. I would jump at the chance of disemboweling your son, slowly hammering his kneecaps into a bloody pulp in your presence, tear into his flesh, to consume his flesh, to become one with his flesh, to enter new worlds with your pain becomes my sacred key. Well, I am a realist, though. I will just bury a bullet in his head. It's easier. I'm not crazy, I just pretend to be. I want her to stay and suffer. There's no point in me destroying life because what? It's over then. No more pain. There's no more satisfaction I can get from that. Alive, maimed, all destroyed emotionally, okay? It's so much more, a much sweeter revenge, you know? The French say that revenge is a dish best served cold. You know what? Oh man, it's a dopamine rush every time I think about it. Every time it's because of the revenge factor. It's an alleviation of the pain. So it's a joy or alleviation of pain. That's basically the purpose of life, to get dopamine rushes and avoidance of pain. So I want to do this. It's not because I have to. It's not because, all the voices are telling me to, or God told me to, or my dog told me to, or demons have spoken to me. I want to. I'm in complete control of the situation. No one else. My mind. Me. Myself.
I don't know what he said.
Me either. But remember, Mexico offers the Safe Haven for Infants Act, which means individuals can bring their baby up to 90 days old to be dropped off at any safe haven location in the state. No questions asked, no criminal investigation. It is not child neglect. It is not child abandonment. In New Mexico, you may go to a hospital, law enforcement agency, or fire station, and you will not be chased down. You will not be asked, is this your baby? You will not be saying, oh, are you forgetting your baby? Let me repeat the first one for you really quick. A hospital. Alexa gave birth to her baby boy in a hospital, yet she still chose to throw him in the trash. Alexa gave birth to her baby boy in a hospital as a legal adult, yet she still chose to throw him in the trash. It does seem like after this murder, after the head being in this family bathtub for 3 whole weeks, that's how long it was in there, there was a shift in the energy in the house. The family was
You're saying they didn't catch them for 3 weeks?
3 weeks. I mean, they were starting to show signs that something was not right. Even as a psychiatrist, I guess it's something that you can't hide well. A lot of therapists stated, disorderly home, disorderly mind. Neighbors started noticing within those 3 weeks that trash started piling up outside the house. Boxes were just thrown in the front lawn. Like imagine opening up a package, throwing out your box onto the front lawn. You don't even break it down, don't even recycle it, just throw it out. The interior of the house became some sort of hoarder's paradise. There were boxes stacked up to the ceiling. It hasn't been explicitly revealed yet how the police were able to track Hitoshi's murder to the Tamura family. But I can't imagine that it was that difficult. I don't think Runa had the greatest undercover disguise.
Yeah.
And once they searched that whole family home, every single person in there was arrested. This sympathy and attention, and maybe even get their help in murdering Hitoshi. Maybe her parents had a completely different story in their head. Some netizens were saying that this just makes more sense, because if Hitoshi was stalking her, blackmailing her like the family claims, there must have been other women that he had done this to. Like, you don't just randomly wake up and you're like, I'm gonna blackmail someone with a video of their assault. It's usually a pattern of behavior. This is how they make money. This is what they get off on, right? Or maybe there had to be some sort of evidence, paper trail, digital communications left behind. But there is so far, at least known to the public, nothing. Theory number 3. Runa has dissociative personality disorder and had a mental breakdown. I personally don't like this theory, and the only reason it exists is not because people are trying to stigmatize mental health, but because Runa literally stated in an interview that an alternate personality of hers caused her to kill. Yeah. So whether or not these are words to try and push the blame off of herself, it's unclear. But the part that gets me about this is, let's say she did have some sort of personality disorder. Her dad is a psychiatrist. Even if he wasn't, parents would stop their children from doing something like this. They wouldn't help them. And that's where we get into theory number 4, the pleasure kill theory. A lot of netizens believe Runa and Dr. Tamura wanted to kill for pleasure. Wanted to experience it, the thrill, the rush, the adrenaline, as dad and daughter. The reason is, so much of the case just doesn't make sense. So first of all, why did Runa clean the blood at the crime scene? After killing someone, I hope this is not like a relatable feeling for anyone listening, but I would imagine if we really had to put ourselves in that situation, the first instinct is to want to get out of there. Separate yourself as much as possible from that crime scene. But instead, Runa stuck around to clean the blood. She was already wearing a raincoat and gloves. She didn't need to clean the blood off of her own body, unless she herself maybe ended up bleeding somehow that night. I just don't understand why she would spend extra time, potentially hours at the crime scene, cleaning up the blood. It's one thing, like I said, if she planned on taking all of the evidence with her, including Hitoshi's body, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe she doesn't want anyone to know that a crime took place here. But if you're leaving a full decapitated body in the tub, the jig is up. Another big question mark is, why did she decapitate him and take his head? So at first I was thinking, maybe she wanted to make the body hard to ID. Fingerprints are easier. And again, it's not like she buried his body in the woods where it would decompose for a while. It felt like there was a more twisted reason for her taking his head. And the alleged video of her playing with his eyeballs could further bolster that part of the theory. A psychiatrist said, the head has been a symbol of victory and trophy since the ancient times. To take someone's head after killing them is a different behavior. It's much, much different from having a grudge against someone over love or money and getting revenge on them. This is a tendency towards extreme sadism. So if she took the head for pleasure, the psychiatrist is saying, I don't think that she killed for revenge then. And side note, netizens are bringing up her doll trinket making hobby. They wonder if a 29-year-old being that into dolls has something to do with some sort of sick fascination with the human body. And that could also play into why she was playing around with the eyeballs, and it leads into the two of them wanted to do this. They wanted a pleasure kill. A fascination with the human body. And that thing netizens bring up is, how was Runa able to skillfully behead Hitoshi if she had no prior experience? As far as we know, she hasn't killed anyone before. But the way that she beheaded him, cleaned up the crime scene in such a short amount of time, just 3 hours inside of a motel room, not even in the middle of an isolated cabin, in a motel room. A lot of netizens said it felt a lot more consistent with someone who had killed before. They also wondered if host club. And additionally, the host clubs do the same thing for women. So they provide princess treatment. So you know how the hostesses stroke the male's ego? Well, when you walk in, I was thinking, Magic Mike. I'm thinking it's like Vegas. Shirtless, ripped men that's like humping the floor, sit on this chair, let me rub on you. No. You walk in, they hand you a moist towelette. You sit down, they give you a blanket if you're wearing a skirt so you can preserve your modesty. And they sit and they ask about your mundane day. And maybe if it's your second time coming and the last time you came was 2 months ago, they'll be like, how's Steve doing? You're like, how do you know my dog's name? You mentioned it 5 months ago when you stopped by.
Wow.
I'm sure they've got journals or something because this is crazy. Their attention to detail, their memory, it's wild. They pour your drinks, they laugh at your jokes, they ask you questions about your life, and they seem genuinely interested in everything that you have to say. If you have to use the restroom, all the hosts in the room stand up. It's so chivalrous. It's like the dream first date. Your host, the one that you're sitting next to, will walk you to the restroom door, wait outside just in case, I don't know, you get accidentally flushed down the toilet bowl. It's just so nice. And they don't dress like super ripped and they actually dress pretty feminine. They wear makeup. They have long, brightly colored, like almost anime style hair. When was the last time you went on a date and a guy was like doing all of that, right? So that's why host clubs, they took off. I have something really niche but crazy useful to add to your holiday. Lack thereof. So it may vary across different cultures, but there's a lot of information that you can gain about a person through their eye contact or their lack thereof. So it may vary across different cultures, but in the United States, it is the norm to make regular eye contact with the person that you're speaking with to show them that you're interested in what they're saying. If someone is never quite meeting your eye when they're talking to you, you might find them to be distrustful. You might at least think that they're maybe a little bit socially awkward. You're gonna think something. Or if someone holds your gaze for too long, if the eye contact is too long, too frequent, it's a different kind of unsettling. It's such a subtle thing that humans subconsciously pick up on. There is no rule book. It's just a matter of seconds. When someone holds eye contact for too little or too long, our brains register, oh my God, something is weird. So then is there a correct amount of time to hold someone's eye contact? Actually, apparently there is. Research has revealed that the average preferred duration for eye contact is about 3.3 seconds. Now, you have about like a 0.5 to a full second grace period. So as long as you're anywhere between like the 2 to 4 seconds of eye contact, you'll be fine.
That is very true. Now you think about it, like more doesn't mean better.
No,
like,
and it's so, we don't even have like a set timer in our bodies. We just kind of know.
Yeah. You just look away. Yeah.
He would say absolutely. And I think the most delicate part is that he would have to get the patient to open up. But then a lot of them would feel like they're in trouble, or they did something wrong, or they didn't want to share the details of whatever happened. And sometimes he would have to do this by not even asking or listening to their stories, but by watching them, observing them. He would give these kids a meal or a snack, and then he would just take notes. How a kid eats can tell you so much. Maybe they reject your offer. Meanwhile, you hear their little tummies grumbling. That means maybe they don't trust you, or maybe they have a hard time trusting most adults. Maybe most adults in their life have betrayed them in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps they inhale the cookies and immediately they're like, can I get more? Maybe they're hungry and they're dealing with food scarcity at home. Experts on TikTok being like, this is why you go to an amusement park on the very first date, because the adrenaline, the energy, the rush, it can be translated into feelings of attachment and love very easily. It's an easy way to bond. No. And even on a large scale, like I can see how shared experiences, they help people come together. Like he was not a big fan of superstitions nor rumors. He prided himself in obviously being a man of science, right? He's like, haunted? People have died everywhere. Unfortunately, just about every single inch of this earth would be haunted then. Cursed? Nobody can curse a building where people try to save lives. It just wouldn't work. Because the hospital halls, they hear more prayers than the churches. That's the saying, right?
Sound like something Claudia would ever do. The classmates start freaking out as they're reading because it gets worse. Claudia mentions that she would even poison beverages at dorm parties. Meaning, who else on campus has she poisoned? Like my closest friends, another student at Sarah Lawrence. I would poison Talia at least once a day and make sure her entire fridge was poisoned. I put mercury on her toothbrush. I began sleeping over in her room more and more frequently to accomplish this goal. I put arsenic and mercury in her underwear.
This is sent out.
And first, are you making this by your own free will?
Yes.
Anybody pay you?
No.
Anybody threaten you?
No.
Anybody coerce you?
No.
Okay. And you said you want to make this because of what?
Because I just want to make it. I just want to talk about it and tell the truth.
Why?
Because it's destroying me not to.
The man on the other end, something that hurts so much more than pepper spray, statistically twice as more painful. Bear spray, which makes sense. One medicine said pepper spray is meant to stop, maybe cause decent irritation to a human being, while the other one is meant to stop a freaking bear. To give you context, an average human weighs 150 pounds and can sprint what? An average of 12 miles per hour? The average bear weighs anywhere from 600 to 1,000 pounds and can charge on average 30 miles per hour. If bear mace is supposed to knock a half-ton grizzly bear on his butt, I'm gonna get that how a human tenfold. Predators would accidentally spray themselves with both pepper spray and bear spray. Trust me, bear spray is so much worse. It's lips, tongue, soft palate, that lasts not even a full second. Before the excruciating, intense, impossible to deal with pains, you want to rip your face off. The stinging of the eyes, the watering, the pressure in the throat. One medicine said anything associated with mucous membranes, it feels like you're being singed with fire. Eyes, nostrils, sinuses, lips, tongue, soft palate, tonsils, all the way down your throat, even your heart. All of a sudden, it feels like it's a blaze, like somebody threw ground up glass shards into your eyes. But the worst part is when you instinctively take a big gulp of air from the shock of the pain, and it feels like the bear spray gets into your throat, and the hacking and coughing is going to start to the point where you feel like you're about to throw up your insides. One person said, the pain and torture was so bad, I was so desperate for any sort of instant relief. I didn't have time to fill up the bathtub or even hop in the shower. I dumped my head into the first log of water I could find. My toilet. It's that painful. Another medicine stated that a gunshot to their thigh was less painful than getting a face full of bear mace. They said even if you think you're over the pain, after a few hours, if you think the symptoms have subsided, you're very wrong. Hours after, a singular tiny droplet of sweat drips into your eye and the pain starts all over again, and this can last for days. After impact, you might be dealing with redness, burning of the skin, temporary blindness. You will be in no state to do anything, let alone even just lay there being in pain is unbearable. 4 hours a week, double the average work week, and then some. Most people don't even sleep 12 hours a day. Truly, it's very hard for someone to do one activity for 12 hours per day. I imagine it can't be enjoyable in any sense. 12 hours a day, though, is just how long both girls, Junko and Yuna, are essayed during their captivity. 12 hours every single day for over a month. Japan, 1988. Junko is not allowed to wear clothes. The first few days Junko was taken into captivity, she was held hostage and gang essayed by 4 main perpetrators. There's 4 teenagers that are mainly responsible for this. The bicycle. Yuna is gone, and he won't see her alive ever again. The runaway family had come to take her back, kidnapped her from church. If you were to simplify the concept of keeping control over captives, it would boil off into 2 types of control: physical control and psychological control. The physical control are restraints, locked rooms, constant surveillance, just ripping them of any shred of autonomy or freedom of movement. And then the psychological control, and in a lot of cases, that just comes down to humiliation. Japan, 1988. Junko could not run from her captors. Japan, 1988. Junko could not run from her captors. Literally, she could not run. They cut her Achilles tendon and lit her ankles on fire. You know that part right above the back of your ankle where you flex your toes up and it's slightly bony part that sticks out from the back? Junko's captors cut that part. They cut the tendon in there and they lit her ankles on fire. They did this due in part for the torture aspect. It's known to be unbearably painful when your Achilles tendon is ripped or shredded or even just torn. It's a very activity as well. They made sure that she knew that she had zero control over her life. They had the ultimate power, and that came through some really perverse methods of humiliation. They would force Junko into the freezer, a giant standalone freezer. They would throw her body in there, close it, and just leave her in there for hours. They would throw her outside on the balcony to sleep in the middle of the night, where temperatures can get as low as 23 degrees Fahrenheit. If she's lucky, sometimes they can go down to negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit. Which, by that point, Junko likely isn't even going to think about escaping. She's not focusing on that. She's focusing on getting out of the freezer. She's focusing on getting off the balcony. That's why her attention and energy are inevitably going to be. Most experts say that psychological control is more restraining than the actual physical restraints. In Junko's case, her captors had her mainly a diet of live cockroaches, centipedes, and her intake of liquids were mainly her captors' urine and feces, as well as biological fluids. Later, during her autopsy, coroners would find what they described as a translated but, quote, unthinkable amount of semen, so much so that they did not believe it was possible for her to even be able to digest it without severe issues. Once tested, it was discovered later that some of the biological fluids belonged to animal life. Animal semen. Some netizens suspect they would take degrading photos of her body, post them onto texting apps. They would force her to connect with creepy old men online that wanted to pay for intimate relations and do really disgusting actions in bed with 15-year-olds, even after being kidnapped from church. You know, would be sex trafficked 4 to 8 separate times per day. And these sessions would last hours. And when she wasn't being essentially essayed, they would grab her by the hair, throw her onto the ground, and they would scream at her. The runaway family kept telling you that they were really upset that she told her dad what happened. They called her selfish. They said you only think about yourself. We let you stay at our place, we fed you, and this is what you do. And for that they claimed that she deserved to be punished. While the runaway family would lounge on the bed or the little sofa in the motel room to watch TV, drink, and eat good food, you know, Amy crawled up on the floor in a fetal position when she wasn't being sex trafficked. Sometimes one of the younger girls would turn around just to pick on her. And you don't stop staring, you're gonna scoop out your eyeballs. Deep inside of you, and so constant that you don't even want to move an inch, let alone breathe. You want to exhale air as slowly as possible. One netizen said, I fractured a rib once. Anything other than a small breath felt like a knife to the side. Rolling over in bed, knife to the side. Bending down to tie your shoes, 2 knives to the side. Reaching to get something, knife to the side. People with fractured ribs say they were terrified of sneezing because of the pain it was going to cause, but the runaway family would force you to watch with fractured ribs for their entertainment. She would be delirious from the pain and barely conscious from everything that was going on, and they would, in that state where she's not even there, they would force her to memorize multiplication charts, and if they would quiz her on math and she answered incorrectly, they would beat her more.
It sounds like this group is more like having fun with mentally torturing her, like enjoying the process.
Yeah, I would say that Junko's captors are just purely more sadistic. This feels like sadistic bullies placed inside of her. 1 in each ear, that makes 2. 1 in her mouth, that's 3. 2 in both of her private regions, and that's 5. Her captors would wait for the fireworks to go off inside of her, and they would let them explode. I don't have the medical knowledge to tell you exactly what injury she would sustain from that kind of torture, nor is there enough readily available research on that I can pull from, but especially when it comes to her private regions, Junko had already been so viciously abused that it's hard to state which torturous action caused which injury. Her captors also shoved sewing needles into her chest. They stabbed hundreds into her chest to the point where later on the autopsy showed there were no gaps in between the needles. They just kept shoving more and more, and then they would take turns punching her in the chest. They would leave the needles in there. South Korea, 2014. Unite just don't want to discriminate, just don't think we're the same.
You know, these evil people, they've been getting around their life, manipulating others, getting their own ways in life. Now they meet another similar character. They can't do that to each other, so they just despite and hate each other for that.
It also reminds me of, it feels like they're both looking in the mirror and they hate it. Like they're facing reality. Like they hate each other so much, but they're identical.
Right. They probably put themselves on a pedestal, and then now they look at someone else that's like, yes.
Yeah, but it's like, no, that's exactly who you are, but they just don't want to face that reality. The reporter false hope that he was their savior. A Japanese psychologist said a lot of cults will use the second coming, or they'll use UFOs and aliens as a really useful tactic to brainwash people because it's very easy to manipulate people with it because these threats are very unknown. There's not a distinct date. There's not a distinct, academic study that was done on something like this. So it makes the victim more confused, and you can kind of create whatever narrative you want. Then there's the theory that hero himself pushes, which is that the woman wanted to say because they liked it. The first phase, kill for the thrill. And there's just no way that we can even try to grasp that, like try to wrap our heads around something like that. They live their lives so that they can take lives. That's it. The first phase is the aura phase. This is when the killer starts to create this aura around him. This almost border, distance themselves from social relationships and people. They start pulling away from family and friends. They retreat into their own little fantasy world, where they start having, in most cases, very violent thoughts. And there's nobody around them for them to confide in, to tell them, hey, you think this is weird? No one. They're alone. Lewis was never allowed to have friends, so that wasn't really a thing. He was never close with his family. And after his continuous assault by family, friends, and priests, he's already fantasizing about turning tables and returning the pain that he felt to a random innocent boy. That is his fantasy. The second phase is the trolling phase. That's what it's called. And it usually consists of the killer kind of toying with the idea of killing a little bit more. Instead of just having fantasies, they start thinking of, well, what would the process look like? And who would it be? And how would I really go about it? They're not sitting there taking notes and like coming up with a whole plan. Not yet. That's a different phase. But they're kind of being a little bit more realistic. How am I going to implement this into my life? Lewis was the oldest of 7 kids, and one day, like a drill sergeant, he's lining up his little siblings. He's yelling, get in line, males and female siblings. Okay, they're really young. Lewis himself is only 15 years old. He forces them to line up, strip down all their clothes, and from there he goes one by one, slowly caressing them. He describes it as, and I quote, a light smooth touch, just like tracing his hands on them. He claims that's all he did. Other sources claim he would take it a step further and force his siblings to sleep unclothed in the same bed as him, and when they were asleep, he would touch them. But we are unsure. Now we enter into the third phase. This is kind of the flirting phase. There's a slight difference between the trolling phase and the flirting phase. I don't think the flirting phase is a great way to label it. I'm not going to people. It's when a serial killer is in this hyper-focused mode of trying to find the perfect victim, trying to kind of flirt with the victim, gain their trust, toy with the idea of how and where to kill that particular victim. So they're narrowing it down to a group of people that they want to target. More concrete plans are being made in this phase. They're literally flirting with the idea of killing, which is terrifying to think about.
Who came out with these 7 steps?
A bunch of profilers. Yeah. But you know what's interesting? A lot of different serial killer profilers have different methods. Yeah, there's like a couple of things that they all go by. I saw that some people don't use these 7 stages, some people do, so it really depends, right? Now, Lewis is in his 20s, and you would never in a million years think that this man is flirting with the idea of becoming a serial killer. He's working at a bakery. He's baking loaves of bread. He goes to church every single Sunday. He even attended AA meetings to address his relationship with alcohol. Middle-aged women would come down to the bakery, buy a loaf of bread, and shove pictures of their daughter in Lewis's face. And I mean, yeah, they knew that he was an alcoholic, but a lot of men in this town were. At least Lewis is working on it. He acknowledged it, and he looks kind of cute. He wears those 80s style big eyeglasses. And I'm not saying that to compliment him. I'm saying, this is the older lady's perspective. He's baking cakes for a living. He goes to church on the weekends. He does occasionally get very angry with the bakery owners, so his bosses, and he would occasionally punch them in the face a couple of times. But other than that, he was a complete catch. A lot of these moms, I'm sure they didn't see him punch his bosses. The moms, they would already have 2 loaves of bread at home, but they were just stopping by to buy another loaf, begging Lewis, hey, my daughter is single. Lewis would politely decline, and he said, maybe later. Got a lot on my mind right now. Lewis had started assaulting little boys in the park. Now, he would hide in the bushes with his machete, and if he saw a little kid walk by alone, he would jump out and yell, don't say anything or I'll kill you. One of his earlier victims, William Trujillo, he said that Lewis forced him out of his clothes and did everything to him, everything including torture, biting him painfully all over. But he said the worst part was that he was so silent doing everything. Like completely silent. It was terrifying and disturbing. And his stench, William said, do you know what farm workers smell like after a day of work? That's what he smelled like. William was tortured and held captive in that park for 12 hours. And even in his earlier crimes, it's clear Lewis likes the mental torture aspect of all of this. Because William remembers finally gaining the courage to talk, and he asked, sir, when will you be letting me go home? And there was silence. And finally Lewis spoke and said, when the bells ring. The church bells ring at 5 in the morning. He had already been there for like 10 hours. William had to wait for what feels like an eternity, and he didn't even know if the man was telling the truth or he was lying to him. And right at 5, the church bells go off. Lewis slowly releases his grip and says, go ahead. And William books it. He runs off. The fourth phase that serial killers typically take is the capturing phase. And Lewis was capturing a ton of children. About 200 children were captured by Lewis, brutally assaulted, and ultimately released. So these 200 children are not even his murder victims. So just think about the sheer amount of victims that he has in his lifetime.
Wow.
Now, quick disclaimer, I don't feel like we need to, because everyone here are reasonable, intelligent people, but Lewis is a male killer who targeted boys. And if that makes anyone think that there is a link between being gay or bisexual and being a serial killer, there should be some, critical thinking comprehension classes out there that should probably urgently be looked into. So this has nothing to do with sexuality. I just see a lot of people kind of point out the link between the extreme Catholicism that he was raised in, where homosexuality was like a cardinal sin, and then him being assaulted as a kid and then developing these attractions towards a certain gender. I don't know. I feel like a killer is a killer, and we can kind of argue these things, but at one point is it just now Lewis would go to the park with candy, drinks, toys, whatever he thought he could entice little boys with, and he would wait for these boys to walk by. Sometimes he would use candy to be like, come here, you want some candy? Literally. That's what he would give them candy. He would then string them along to a secluded area of the park, tie them up, and torture them. A lot of experts believe that he was experimenting with torture since his essays as a kid involved a lot of physical pain. So he started cutting victims with razors, shallow cuts all over their bodies. Then he tried deeper cuts, but he didn't really like that, so he just did shallow cuts. So this would go on for 12 hours at a time. He very quickly learned he had to be mindful that his torture tactics didn't kill the victims because he wanted his victims alive, because that's the whole fun of it. He brought candles into the park. He would light them on fire to burn his victims, just like he had been burned as a kid. He would bite the victims all over their bodies, beat them, and I'm talking, he would pummel his victims, a full-grown adult targeting 5-year-olds, and he would assault them. Lewis was disorganized, yet organized. He was very disorganized in almost all other aspects of the crime, but when it came to the torture, he was very methodical. The torture almost always happened in the same order every single time. It's like he had created the perfect cycle to maximize his sick pleasure. And when he was done, he would let them go, rush home to write their names down in this little blue book of his. And this is the part that just really makes this case an anomaly. But for 12 years, Lewis was in his face, toying with the idea of murdering for 12 years, essaying hundreds of kids, torturing them, hundreds of them. And I say anomaly not just because he was in his face for 12 years, but also the fact that he wasn't put behind bars before he committed his first murder, when he is out there committing some of the most atrocious crimes that we researched, is just crazy. I don't know how else to put it. I also do really want to disclaim, we really wish that we could share more of who the victims were, what they were like, but unfortunately there just aren't that many stories of Lewis's victims out there. I was provided some contact by researchers, and they stated when a boy went missing in Colombia at the time, the most likely reason was either being a victim of a gang, cartel, or a paramilitary group, or maybe they left home due to extreme domestic violence from the parents. Most parents did not file missing persons reports because a lot of them were just straight up scared. If we went to the police and most police forces are run by cartels, and the cartel took our kid, we reported to the police who the cartel controls, then our child would be in even more danger. Would they think that our child snitched or we're causing too much trouble to keep the child alive? As for Lewis's assault victims, even if they came home and told their parents what had happened, parents felt like going to the authorities was just not an option. Not only was justice rarely ever served for cases like this, their child is now going to be subject to life-threatening social shame. And all for what? To not get justice and just victimize their kid even further? A lot of Lewis's victims are still not identified to this day. And now that's both his assault victims and later his murder victims. After 12 years, he would escalate into phase 5, murder. Mind you, he already has 200 victims in his little blue notebook. This is before killing. Before he started killing, he's got 200 victims. And his first kill was almost on a whim. He said that he was drunk, he left a bar and decided, you know what, today is the day. He went, bought a pack of cigarettes, a cord, a knife, and a cheap bottle of brandy. He stumbled into the park, waited for a boy to be lured in. He kept holding out change in his hand to see if any boy that passed, he'd be like, hey, do you want some money? This is an area where a lot of children go out and they try to work because they need to bring food home for the family. Of course they want money. Typically they would ask, what kind of job are you offering? Do you want me to shine your shoes? Do you want me to sell candy on your behalf, run errands? Lewis would tell the boy, no, you just take a walk with me. Lewis grabbed his hand and led him to the wooded area of the park. And this park connects to a huge, mountainous area that surrounds the city. And once it was secluded enough, Lewis tied the boy up, like the 200 victims before him. He bit him everywhere, and then assaulted him. But he said he just felt this anger. He said it was the strongest impulse of his entire life, and it was the impulse to punch this boy. So he sat on this boy and quite literally beat this boy to death with his bare hands, like the boy he wanted out. And then he walked off covered in blood. Nobody stopped him, whether nobody saw him or they minded their own business, I don't know. But he went home, took a shower, grabbed his little notebook to write down another name, but this time in a new section. Phase 6 is a phase that sets serial killers and murderers apart, which is serial killers typically take trophies. So unlike killers who kill for life insurance, luck, greed, revenge, they usually want to get rid of anything that ties them to the crime. Serial killers, they want that connection open. They want to go back and reminisce about that moment. They want to relive it. Lewis had his little blue notebook, but later he would rummage through the victim's pockets. He's typically looking for some sort of student ID, and if he found it, he would sit there and cut out just the pictures of the boy. So he would never bring home the full student ID, just the picture part. If he didn't find the student ID, he would just take their underwear. Later they would all be found folded up in his drawer right next to his own underwear. He'd also sit there in his house clipping any newspaper headlines about his crimes. I mean, he really loved his trophies. And then the last phase is the depression phase. Once Lewis was done with his first kill, like most serial killers, he fell into a state of depression. For some serial killers, this includes the feeling of guilt. Lewis said he was so disappointed in himself, which is honestly such a weird way to describe it. Like, I get disappointed in myself all the time, but for small mistakes. He's disappointed in himself because he killed someone. I don't know, it feels like such a light word to use, but he said he was so disappointed in himself, he walked himself into church, wept in front of the statue of Jesus, and he just cried. If I'm being honest with you, I don't think that this man really felt guilty.
So what exactly does that mean when you say you feel depressed and cried and go to church? What is that?
I think it's a procedural memory. So he was raised devout Catholic family, and anything that he did wrong or he perceived as wrong, he was forced to confess. He was forced to cry. That's how you get rid of your sins. So if there was a part of him that still had any of that faith that he needed to be saved, this was purely for that, I believe. It was narcissistic. It's I want to be saved, I want to go to heaven, so I need to confess my sins. I don't think that was genuine remorse because it's hard to imagine he feels even a little bit guilty, but still went on to kill 220 more times.
So he did that and then he continued and it was like a back and forth, back and forth.
Every time after a kill, at least for the first, I don't know, dozens, he said that he would go to church and just cry because he was so remorseful. I truly don't believe he was remorseful at all. You know, I think that these outbursts of emotions are just procedural memory, that part of his brain that's lining up again. Or I think that it's just some sort of narcissistic tendency to make this whole fantasy feel even more real and complicated. This is purely speculation. A lot of serial killers have some sort of personality disorder that makes them unable to feel human emotions or empathy. I mean, they feel human emotions such as anger, but they don't feel empathy. So a lot of them will mirror people. And I wonder if this is him mirroring what he thinks is expected after something like this. Because I genuinely don't think that he's sorry at all.
Yeah.
When he was 23 years old, he did end up going to a psychiatrist. And this is why I think that he's a little bit dramatic.
Wait, he's only 23 right now?
Yeah.
You say it's been 12 years?
Yeah.
Oh, he started when he was, wow. Okay.
And he'll go on for like another, geez, like 2 decades. This part, I don't know how else to describe it, so I'm just going to try to describe it the way that I think people understand the message the best. I'm not trying to like trivialize it, but I feel like he is kind of dramatic in the sense that he wants these main character moments. I think that's part of his weeping at church after the kills. Because listen to this, he goes to a psychiatrist in his 20s, and he gets diagnosed with reactive depression, which typically indicates that someone has significant distress that is oftentimes out of proportion to the severity or the intensity of the external stressor. So this type of depression is triggered by something that happens in their life. It's reactive. They have a big life event, and now this person does not feel like they can handle the stressors of life, so they feel depressed. So if someone steps on another person's foot by accident and this person has reactive depression, a normal reaction would be feel physical pain and potentially a little annoyance. In Lewis's case, his mind would send him off the bunker. Reactive depression is usually temporary, meaning once the situation that the patient lives in, this external situation, improves, the reactive depression also improves. Or if the external circumstances persist, the patient does not develop a way to cope, then it develops into chronic depression. And this is not to say that reactive depression isn't very painful and very real and potentially life-threatening, because it can develop into chronic depression, which can end someone's life. But reactive depression is typically not classified as a high-risk diagnosis. But of course, it's case by case, and it could very quickly evolve into something that's more high risk. Lewis gets told that he has reactive depression. He claimed he wanted to end it right then and there, but then he never would. You know, and he just like kept telling people in interviews later on that it just made him really depressed to have reactive depression. Because later his reactive depression, some psychologists say that did evolve into clinical depression or chronic depression, right? So he's claiming he's very depressed. He would go down to his therapist, feel even more depressed because his therapist is like, you're depressed. Then he would go to AA meetings, feel extra down because he's an alcoholic, and then that night he would go to a bar, get drunk, and then try to kill someone afterwards. And he just kept using the excuse that he was sad and depressed. Like I say this with such not really much sympathy because I feel like so many of us are sad and depressed, and none of us go out there and commit heinous acts of violence. So I don't even know if that's really what he claims he's doing this because he's all sad. He's sad, and then he kills, and then he goes to church because he's so sorry. Do you get what I'm saying? Like none of this is making any sense. And then he said he would feel sad after a kill, and he would start thinking back to the last time he felt any sort of happiness, and that was while he was committing his crimes. He said that he would start flipping through his little blue notebook and pleasuring himself with the memory of his crimes. And he realized in order to feel happy again, he would have to kill again. And these kills would only get more gruesome. So he would punch the victims all over. He specifically would target their hands. Which this part, I mean, if you've been around younger ones, you know how their hands are so small. It feels like a natural universal feeling to see a child's hand and want to protect them. Lewis would specifically target these hands. He would punch them until he shattered the bones in the hands. He would punch and slice them on their bottoms as well. He would try to lightly stab into their kidneys. He said that he chose to stab near the kidneys specifically because he realized that there's not a lot of, he thought, major arteries in that area. So victims would typically not bleed to death before he was done with them because he wanted them alive for a very, very long time. The final acts of torture included him slitting their throats while actively assaulting them. And then when he was done, he would decapitate them. He would cut off their private parts and place their private parts into their mouths of the decapitated heads. This was almost his signature. And I'm not saying that as a figure of speech. Serial killers typically have something called an MO. Now an MO is how they operate. This is how they find victims, trap victims, kill victims, and then dispose of their bodies. A signature, these are word profilers use, I'm not calling it a signature, is something that is almost unchangeable for each serial killer. It's an action or something that is done during the kill that indicates this is why they're committing these crimes in the first place. This might be the ultimate action. It's not the kill itself. This could be where we need to look into. It's a signature for a reason. So MOs, they typically evolve, they change. Serial killers adapt, they find new techniques. A signature usually stays the same. It reflects a deeper psychological reasoning behind these kills. And him placing the victim's private parts into their own mouths was a bit of a signature for Lewis.
So that's not MO.
No, later his MO would evolve, and he would add a lot more steps to this process before his victims were dead. He would take a screwdriver to gouge out their eyes and their ears. Sometimes he would use a knife or tool to detach the fingers from their hands. He would use tools to detach their right feet from their legs. Then after the torture, he would cut open their stomach while they were still alive, open and remove all of their intestines, and place them next to their face on the ground. The victims would be alive to see their intestines laying in the grass next to them, which is something that is technically medically possible. If someone's vital organs like their heart and lungs remain untouched, and the laceration caused on the stomach do not hit any major blood vessels, it's said that someone who's disemboweled can actually remain alive for several hours in immense shock and pain. Then once he was done with that, he would finally decapitate them and move on to commit his signature. And this whole process would take hours, if not half a day to a full day. Lewis was also a chain smoker, and he would take smoking breaks in between the acts of torture. It's stated that sometimes he smoked an entire pack of cigarettes during his kills. Back then, cigarettes in Colombia were exclusively sold in packs of 20, and on average, it takes 6 minutes to smoke a cigarette. So that's at least 2 hours of him just pausing to smoke 2 hours of extra torture that the victims would have to endure. Lewis tried not to kill too late at night, mainly because he said he was scared of the dark. But sometimes it was unavoidable, and that was fine for him. There was another thing that Lewis was starting to get scared of, and it was the idea of getting caught. He had been an active serial killer in the area for years now, potentially even a decade at this point. And only just recently, people started noticing. People started hearing whispers around town. Mothers would be pulling their kids closer to them while they were running errands. And then there was that incident. He had just finished murdering another victim when someone had apparently seen him attacking the kid in the woods. He hears the police coming. The victim wasn't dead yet. He quickly finishes, does what he does, flees as fast as possible, and breaks his leg in the escape. The witness did not see what Lewis looked like, so he had a close call, but he would get off without charge. And the only thing that angered him was that now because he broke his leg, he had a limp on his right foot. And that right foot would never be the same. And he hated seeing people with perfectly healthy right feet.
So that's why he chopped. Wow.
A lot of people speculate that he started gouging out the victim's eyeballs because his eyesight was deteriorating. He was having problems with his eyes. Now, this added a little bit of anxiety to Lewis's life, and there was the situation of the 8 boys with the missing thumbs. He went from assaulting boys, torturing them, letting them go, and then into killing boys. But during his kill phase, he actually let 8 of his victims go. And that would haunt him forever. And it's not because he messed up. It's not because he thought, oh, let me just let these kids go because they said something that I liked, they did something that I liked. He felt sympathy. It wasn't that. He thought it would be more fun. He was experimenting. So he chopped off each of their thumbs, cut the cords off of them, and let them free. After hours and hours of torture, he said, I'm going to count to a random number in my head. If you make it back to your family alive before I catch you, then you get to live. At this point, the boys are already running. He never even chased them. He just set them free. Now, there are theories about why he would do this, and it's not because he had remorse for these 8 boys, but the general theory is that what he was trying to see, if it was going to give him some sort of sick satisfaction to know that these boys would never live a single day without thinking about him, and they would live the rest of their lives in utter terror. And that itself is a very strong form of torture. He did this to 8 little boys. So 8 little boys in Colombia were traumatized by him and forever mutilated with missing thumbs.
Why the thumb?
I guess he was trying to start another signature for this part.
Is it because like he can see which one
Maybe.
is his victims?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see, I guess, yeah.
Wow.
And that could be very, very true because he only operated in like 10 to 15 towns. Pretty small towns too. But now these 8 boys were keeping him up at night. They had seen his face for hours, they had heard his voice for hours, they knew what he looked like, they knew what he smelled like, everything. Like, what if they went to police? He was annoyed with himself and he vowed never to let another one go ever again. And he made adjustments to his MO as insurance policies. He always wore shoes that were one size too big, and he made sure that no boy could get away now. There would be no 9th boy without a thumb, alive to tell the tale. But he was also tweaking his method to make it more efficient. Efficient in terms of how to make the torture last longer for him so that he can get the pleasure, but not waste his energy on other things. So he came up with this method where before the torture and before the attack, he would chain up his victims with some sort of rubber cord and would force them to walk around in circles while he held out a machete near their necks. They were made to walk in circles until their legs shook. This part of the process took hours in some cases.
Wait, what does that mean? They're like shook?
They're walking in circles non-stop for hours until their legs are shaking because they're so tired.
Oh.
The whole time he's yelling at them about how he's going to kill them, they're all dead, and he's going to bite their privates off. He's detailing every single act of visual torture that he's about to commit on them, and this was 2 birds, 1 stone for him. It was pleasurable for him to see his victims shaking fear, but it was also to tire them out so they had no chance of fighting back. They were generally so out of energy. Not that they even had a strong chance of escaping before this, because it's a full-grown man against 7-year-olds, but this was his insurance policy. Lewis did satanic rituals with the bodies. There's not much credible information on what the rituals consisted of, but we do know that he used a Ouija board with the dead bodies, and he's very excited to make a deal with the devil each time he killed. This is why I think that the whole church thing is nonsense. Like, I think it's nonsense. I don't think he's religious. I don't think he's remorseful. He said the first time he sold his soul to the devil, it was a feeling he would never forget. He said, it turned out that when I made a pact with the devil, a voice moved the curtain, my hair stood up on the ends, and I entered into a psychotic state where I heard a voice tell me that it loved me. I said I wanted power, and it said it wanted to serve me. It said, I want to serve you, sir. I sold my soul to the devil, and that's how it went.
I knew it was him.
A lot of people knew what he looked like, but they couldn't really pinpoint him.
Oh, okay.
And he jumped from towns. So it's not like he was saying in one town and Mark is like, oh, we're going to find this guy. You know, it's like, now we don't know where he went, and the townspeople are telling me, oh, he was like a beggar. We don't know anything, we don't know anything. This is kind of what he looks like. No, he looked like this. And people are like, that's a different beggar. It was just so many different sources. People are like, yeah, go look for people without homes. He's a beggar on the street. They're like, actually, he's a monk. You gotta go to temples, and that's where you're gonna find him. Or people are saying, no, you're not gonna find him at all. He works with dark magic, and he's a witch. It was clear to Detective Mark that the killer assumed a new identity with every town that they went to, and maybe even with every person that they met. Who's to say that they only had one identity each time they went to a new town? I mean, that's the interesting thing, though, that Detective Mark realized were the types of personas he would take on. Priest, a generally respected position. You are in a position of authority, but then the next town over, you'd be a beggar, a generally looked down upon position. Not my personal feeling, the harsh reality of society. You're in a position of vulnerability. You're likely ignored, discarded. People don't want to look at you. They don't want to make eye contact with you. The local crazy man was another persona he took on. Generally, again, another looked down person in society. And then a practitioner of witchcraft. This one is a mixed position. Either people will look at you with respect, fear, or they will look down on you. I mean, I guess depending on their own personal beliefs. One would imagine that this type of guy wants to be in a position to be revered and respected. That's what serial killers want, right? To have that immediate authority over people. But no, he chose all sorts of random personas. And Mark's team initially were very confused about it, but Mark wasn't. He knew what the killer was doing. All these personas have a few things in common. Yes.
Beggar and the priest. People don't want to talk to them. Is that right?
They are held at a distance by general society. As much as you might respect a priest or practitioner of witchcraft, you might not want to ask about their lives.
Yeah.
You might not ask questions. You might not want to be too close to them. They might be judgmental. They're a little scary. Beggars, you also don't really want to hang out with them, right? Typically, society does. I'm not saying that you don't, right? Same with the local crazy man. They're always held at some sort of distance by society. You don't really ask them, hey, what are you doing here today? Where are you from? Who are you seeing? It's a position in society where a little mystery is expected. And, you know, these are positions where I don't think a lot of people would question if they're talking to kids. The priest, of course, is talking to children. It's a beggar. He's probably trying to hustle that kid. That's a madman. He's got nobody else that listens to. He's talking to the kids. The practitioner of witchcraft, I mean, we never know what they got brewing, right? Also, it was later discovered that when he wasn't using these random personas to go around and murder children, he was fronting as a non-profit employee gathering donations that he would pocket. Yeah. And at this point, a serial killer had gone from 10 to 15 towns following the same ritual to kill hundreds of little boys. And I'm not the head of the police force, but I don't think it takes a professional to realize, hey, something's going on. But they didn't really put a lot of resources into this. It took the constant pleading of Detective Mark Durham for the higher ups to even consider categorizing these murders as the work of a serial killer. Detective Mark had nothing but a bunch of guesses and leads. I mean, there was no way to narrow it down. It seemed like nobody else was criminally underfunded. And the organizational power at the time in Colombia were the cartels. They had considerable interest to keep the police powerless. Each town's police force had a plethora of murder cases on their hands. They didn't have the resources for outside help, serial killer profilers. They didn't even have enough to really fund any evidence or DNA being tested. They just had at least 100 similar murder cases around 8 different towns, so many bodies, and the detectives are walking in circles. They had more than 1,000 names on their suspect list, and not enough resources to narrow that list down or to even start investigating any of them until the night of the cornstalk. The cornstalks caught on fire. The serial killer had been in a cornfield, assaulting and killing another victim when he lit a cigarette and put it out on the ground. It wasn't fully out. The cornstalks around him burst into flames. When the police arrive at the scene, they put the fire out and they see the body of the victim and they know that this is the same serial killer. The MO, the signature, everything is there. And this is clearly a recent crime. And they got a few pieces of evidence: a pair of shoes and a pair of eyeglasses.
Did he rush away?
Yes. How much information do you think you can get from 2 pieces of evidence like that? Besides the obvious, what their shoe size is and their eye prescription.
Shoes and eyeglasses.
Like, if the police officer had your shoes, your eyeglasses, what do you think that they can tell about you? Other than, you know, the generic, his shoe size is this. Let's start with the glasses. Obviously, the suspect wore glasses for poor eyesight. They did have prescriptions in there, but what else can they gather? The style of the glasses suggests that the individual had a liking for older, more classic styles. These styles were probably more popular 10 years ago, so they're thinking he was probably in his prime 10 years ago. So that means he's either in his 20s, or typically for men, they consider the 30s the prime. Not about 10 years ago, so he's in his 40s more likely. Because you know, you typically have a peak, they call it in your lifetime, and you almost hang on to your style when you feel like you're at your peak because you're almost clinging on to that youth, that feeling that you had by clinging on to these styles and designs. So now they believe that the suspect is anywhere between 40 to 45 years old. They can actually tell a lot more with the shoes. Just like the glasses, the shoes can point towards a more accurate picture of the suspect's style, their attire, potentially even profession, because you know most people don't generally wear work boots unless it's for work-related things. I know a lot of random people that own steel-toed boots for fun, and it's a very specific person that wears very specific types of shoes. So those are given, but they can actually tell more than that with pairs of shoes. Firstly, Lewis was fooling no one. The detectives immediately knew that the killer was wearing a size shoe with the shoe to throw them off. His feet imprints were right there. They were much smaller than the shoe. The divot said his feet made inside, so they took his actual shoe size and they started measuring premise. Shoe size can more or less estimate height. He was about 5'3" to 5'4", which narrows down the search more, because the average man in Colombia is about 5'6". So now we have height and shoe size. Shoes actually tell profilers a lot about someone. So my mom and I have the same exact pair of sneakers and we wear the same exact shoe size. But I can tell when I accidentally slip on my mom. It's not because they look different or they're more worn or less worn, but the sneakers are molded to my feet, and so have the soles. And you would be surprised at how much your feet can tell about you. When people distribute their weight differently, they can tell what your posture is like. They can tell profilers what you look like, how much you weigh potentially, what kind of styles you would wear, and they can even tell you have like anxious personalities at some point, because anxious people tend to kind of like rock back and forth, and there could be signs of that on their shoe soles. It's very interesting. They analyzed the shoes and they realized that the soles at the bottom of the shoes, they're uneven. The left
Wow,
sole
yes.
looks more worn, which meant this person must walk with a slight irregular rotation of the foot and puts a lot more weight on his left leg. And it's a lot more. So if it was slight, they could wonder if maybe their body proportions lean just more to the left, or if it's become a habitual thing. But because it was such a difference in the soles of the shoes, they're thinking this person must have a noticeable limp.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And with that, they can kind of guesstimate how he walks. These days, because this is not happening in this days, but in 2023, there's actually podiatrists who work with the police forces. And let's say you have killer shoes. They can tell you what the gait is like, they can tell you how they walk, and judging from CCTV, they can match the gait with the shoes. Gait meaning how you walk. Because the wear of the shoes can determine how you walk, and they're really good at analyzing how you walk. So even if the killer's face is not on camera, they can say these shoes belong to this person based on the way that they walk. Yeah.
That's very cool.
So they know that he has a noticeable limp. The suspect also fled the scene fast. In such a hurry that he left his glasses in his shoes, meaning that he must have been surprised by the fire. But in what situation would he have been surprised by the flames and have his shoes and his glasses off? Shoes are maybe a bit more explainable, but his glasses, they guessed accurately that the suspect was taking a nap. He's the type to smoke cigarettes while torturing his victims. He should also be the type to lay down next to a dead victim's body and go to sleep. There was no further explanation on why his glasses would have been off in the first place. Then the fire started while he's napping. He had to flee so quickly that he left his shoes in his glasses, which would likely mean that he's got second-degree burns to his body. And this is when the police put together that the killer has a bad right foot and had been dismembering the right feet of his victims. They also checked his prescription. He has pretty bad eyesight, and he was now attempting to gauge out the victim's eyeballs. And the killer's signature, he places the victim's private parts into their own mouths. Likely, the killer had been a victim of some sort of abuse or trauma growing up. So now they had a lot more to work with. They thought the killer has to be on the offender list because that just doesn't make sense. Like you're committing these level of crimes, there's no way. But that registered offender list consists of more than 5,200 names. So that's more than 1,000. Their suspect list was originally 1,000. They eliminate all the names that had been charged with assaulting girls because the victims are all boys. There's 1,600 names left. Then they took out anyone younger than 40. That's now 95 names. Then they eliminated anyone that was shorter or taller than 5'3", 5'4". And now they had a list of 25 names. And they believed one of these 25 people were going to seek medical attention soon for their burns. They were right.
Well, they got so good all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, yeah. They were right. Lewis had burns all over his body. He forced himself to run on foot for 6 hours despite his burns, which I don't say that sympathetically. I'm saying that to emphasize this. I really did not want to get caught. When he stops running, he realizes I've got second to third degree burns all over my body. Second degree burns, they look a little bit blistered. Third degree burns, they look like charred wood, or they look really white, like cooked white meat. And it's not as painful in the immediate time. It'll later probably feel like hell, but the nerve endings are completely destroyed initially for third degree burns.
Where was he burned?
All over his leg and like kind of the left side of his body. Yes. You know, Lewis, like all of his serial killers that we talked about, he had a very strong self-preservation mindset. He knew that he couldn't go to the hospital for his burns, but he had to get something. He went to a vet clinic, and lied, said that he had gotten into an accident in his fireplace, gave this very elaborate story, offered to pay for treatment. They did not ask questions. They treated his burns. December of that year, every single newspaper had the same explosive headline plastered all over it. The Beast of Columbia caught. The killer's face and name were front page on every major publication in town. And the shameless killer had the audacity to deny all the crimes that led to him. He had an injury on his right leg that caused him to limp. The shoe quite literally fit, and he was exactly 5 inches tall. He had a history of abusing minors. He loves cheap brandy, and he's sitting there and he's like, I'm not the Beast of Columbia. And they're like, you are despicable, dude. The Beast who had on average killed 2 to 3 kids a month for almost a decade, and now he's sitting there looking cops in the eye saying, that wasn't me. What? While the Beast was in custody, Detective Mark received a phone call. 4 more bodies were found, and they were recent. They were killed in the same way, same MO, same signature as the Beast of Columbia. The person sitting in prison about to be tried for the serial killings was not their Beast. Don't get me wrong, he was and he should be behind bars, but this was not Louis Garavito. They took him off the list and went back now to a list of 24 names. Detective Mark went to talk to each of the 24 families of the suspects. One of the sisters of the suspects did notice something strange recently. She said, you know what? My brother did stop by a few days ago. He told me to hold on to his little bag and I'll look into it. And I looked into it. They looked into this newspaper clippings of the crimes.
That's how they caught him?
Yeah. Louis Garavito. Mark looks into this guy. At 15, he was arrested for the first time for trying to assault SA, a 7-year-old at a train station. He was caught and let go. He'd actually been brought in years before for murder, torture, assault, and beheading of a kid, but they said that they didn't have any other evidence, so they just let him go. And you would think that since he had already been brought in for such a similar crime, that once these serial killer investigations started taking place, people would be like, oh my goodness, that's the guy, right? They did it. He was not. Outside of the crimes, he managed to live a normal, appearing life. He had few girlfriends, never had children of his own, but his girlfriends who lived with him had children from previous relationships. They never noticed anything odd about him, they said. They said he was really good with kids, actually. And even after breaking out, sometimes he would still send money. He was very nice, they said. As Detective Mark is investigating, a call is made to his unit. A boy had been discovered in town, completely shaken up, and he said that a man tried to assault him. He rushes over, puts the boy into his patrol car, and they start driving around looking for this man because they're like, this is gonna be the Beast of Columbia. And they see something straight out of a horror movie. As they're driving, they see a man walking in the middle of the road, and their patrol car is loud. As they're driving up towards this man, whose back is facing them, this man does not move, does not run faster, he just keeps walking at a steady, slow pace, blocking the way, not even looking back to see who or what is behind him. And the kid is like, that's him, that's him. They pull up, and they ask the man for his name, and he very calmly says, oh, my name is Bonifacio? Yeah, that's my name. Okay, it's a very specific name, Bonifacio. Worse than the ones before, worse than the assaulters. The psychologist stated they believe the situation at the new base probably drove her to a breaking point. Not because she was just being bullied, but what it meant and like what it symbolized. After the assault, he had suffered for 2 months at her old base, and she entered the military leave, right? She's probably hoping and praying and betting on the fact that she just has to hold out until the transfer. She just has to hold on until this moment, and she can start fresh. It'll be a new place, and it'll go back to normal. And she can start this journey of healing. The psychologist said, as a survivor of sexual assault, this opportunity was the same as starting over. She was probably holding on to the hope that she could start over and put this all behind her one day. This might have been why she didn't take her life earlier. However, she moved to a new base and realized, no, life is not better. And she felt like she would truly never be able to get a fresh start. This is when she really broke down. She came to her new start and she was treated even worse than her previous post, and she was berated, exposed, treated terribly because everyone knew she was sexually assaulted. Her new start made it impossible. And the only way out in her eyes at the time was death. That's what the psychologist said. With the Adam's death, there were now more questions, honestly. Like, questions I think people would later be hard pressed. Student 3 said that she was minding her own business. And kind of similar to the last story, but 2 of the girls in her grade came up to her and asked to borrow $1. She's like, okay, these random girls asking for $1. I'm just gonna give them. The next day, they asked for another $1. Okay, maybe they're hungry, they got their lunch or something, she gives them another $1. And soon, they're not borrowing dollars, they're demanding money. They walk over and instead of taking $1, it's like, hey, give me $1. And it wasn't just $1 anymore, it was suddenly $10, $30, $50, $100. When she asked them, wait, why do I need to give you this money? Like, I'm so confused. You haven't paid me back. When are you even using this money for? Why are you taking my money? They would say, because your existence is an inconvenience to me. So pay up. And maybe if it had stopped there, at financial bullying, maybe the trauma wouldn't be as life-altering, but eventually she ran out of allowance money to give up. They started becoming physical with her. They started slapping her and beating her. They would drag her to one of the girls' houses. So bully A's house. And they would use her as a punching bag for hours. They would just make her sit in the corner of the room, and these bullies would sit and giggle, gaggle, gossip. And then the minute they felt a little bit of anger rising in their system, they would walk over and just torture her for fun of it. Later in interviews, people were confused about this. You know, they asked her, why did you go to the girls' houses? Couldn't you have just called for help or left? I mean, surely they didn't drag you all the way. Like, someone would have noticed if they're dragging you by the hair, right? They also asked how the bully's parents ever realized that they were keeping a girl in the room just to bully her. Sometimes the bullying was for days. The bullies were very resourceful. They threatened student 3 that if she didn't follow them back to girl A's house, they would go and find her little brother and physically assault him instead. This was the threat that they constantly hung over her head. That's also why she never told the authorities, school administrators, or even her parents. She knew that the bullies would probably get off light anyway, and her brother would be the new target. So I think this is where the system is wrong. You know, I think if you're in a situation like that, you can tell the administrators and something does take action to the point where they cannot hurt you or your loved ones, then of course people are going to say something. As for girl, bully A's parents, she lied to them. She's like, Mama, this is my friend, and she just ran away from home. Her mom is super abusive, and she's even contemplating suicide. I just want to be there for her as a friend. Is it okay if she stays over for a few days? The mom would be like, wow, daughter, you're such a good friend. And since bully A's parents would both work really long hours, they would all be at bully A's house and using student 3 as a punching bag. The abuse went from punching and slapping to grabbing a fork and stabbing it all over her body, like head to toe. The 2 bullies would grab whatever item was nearby, and they would throw it at her face. One time they threw a plastic pipe at her face, and it permanently damaged her cornea, and she has slight vision problems ever since. The longest time she ever stayed at her police house was for 3 days, and they basically starved her the entire time. During this interview, student 3 was asked, why didn't you try to leave at one point, you know? Especially when your eyes damaged, you didn't try to run away away from the house, and she said there was no point. One time she did, they knew where she lived, they would either get her brother, or once they came over and they trashed her entire house, making it difficult for her family. They would flip furniture, ransack the whole place, all because she refused to come to Girl A's house. Like, there was no part of student that was safe. She was constantly covered in bruises and welts and just desperately trying to hide this from the adults. For 6 months, while the abuse lasted, she couldn't even fall asleep. Just like student 2, every time she closed her eyes, she would have these intense nightmares. So for 6 months, she felt like a sleepless zombie, just going through the motions of life and abuse. She feels so powerless, and she starts doing actions that she believes her perpetrators would do because she believes they're the ones with power. Because later she's gonna start skinning animals. Everything is so clean, but in a strange, yes, it's strange, it's sterile. It's like, I don't know if human cities are made to be this clean. It just doesn't naturally happen. It's the place that you go to have children. You send them to school, and then you have to birth their teenagers, loops and loops until you die. And that year, there was only one recorded murder for the full 365 days in the city of Irvine. It is consistently ranked one of the safest cities in the United States. Nothing ever happens in Irvine. That's why Carla, fake name, moved to Irvine in the first place. For some piece of Wyatt. Look what you did to me! Look at me! How did you do this? You're all blood! conquer 100 people, 120 own guns. So I'm assuming that's stating that the people who own guns own multiple guns. Immediately, this case gets everyone's attention for that reason because of how rare gunshot wounds are. But it's quickly explained that she had passed on an airsoft gun instead of a traditional firearm. So airsoft guns, these are guns that use air pressure only to shoot out pellets. So instead of like gunpowder, air pressure. They're way less dangerous than regular guns. So think somewhere in the line of BB guns, pellet guns, airsoft guns. They're less dangerous, but that close, they can still be very fatal.
Wow.
It suggested that she was shot up close, so they wanted to make sure that the gun worked and actually killed her. Now, this is going to be pretty easy for them. They would buy them meals, and she requested this one specifically. Yeah, this hospital, they had a process of making legend involved treating people. They would go out and start building rapport with the local unhoused population. They would buy them meals, cigarettes, and ask about their families. And then one day, casually, as if this was just a new idea that popped into the nurses' heads, hey, you know you can get money from the government if you're a patient at our hospital, right? They would lure them into the hospital, lead them to a windowless room called the stable room. They were thrown onto a bed, and their arms and feet were tied up towards the ceiling. So they're able to lay on their back, but all their limbs are raised above their chest. They would keep them like this for a full week because this position, all the blood is pumping towards the chest, and it puts a lot of strain on the heart. So after a week of this, what do you know? They do some scans, and the person's heart is weak. It's not looking too good. It looks like they have a heart condition. They need to be kept in the hospital longer, and because they're unhoused, the government must pay for it straight into the hospital's pockets. Hundreds of people were hospitalized like this just based off this torture room tactic. They were earning like 7 figures a year at the hospital from the government.
That is crazy.
People died from this.
No, this is not like a huge thing that people talk about.
Because it was a huge thing after it was exposed. People didn't know because they would target unhoused populations and they would physically ask if they had family. And if they didn't, that's when they were brought in. So with no family around, they're vulnerable already. People didn't even notice that they were missing. Everything was just swept under the rug. But now the hospital was shut down and Mrs. Moon was thrown back into prison, where she made several complaints. She stated she argued with her two cellmates too much. They didn't see eye to eye. She felt like it would be best for her. She didn't have to ask the question of what do they know that we don't know. And maybe this is reassuring, maybe it's not. But the former CEO of Reddit stated, most people just assume improbable events don't happen. But technical people, they tend to view risk very mathematically. The tech preppers, they don't necessarily think a collapse is likely. They consider it a very remote event, but one with very severe downsides. So given how much money they have, spending like a tiny fraction of their net worth to hedge against that is a very logical thing to do. But what about everybody else? Get crafty. That's the only way. You have to build your own bunker if that's what you think you need to survive in the future. They would accelerate the flames. Additionally, authorities found a pipe bomb that failed to go off. Now, side note, a pipe bomb is essentially a homemade bomb, or what they formally call an IED, which is an improvised explosive device. Typically it's made from steel water pipes, so think of like a steel tube. PVC pipes can also be used, but usually the steel ones are more popular. And inside is a mixture of explosive materials, and then it's closed on both sides to create pressure. There's a fuse running through it, so there's a string that's typically made of electrical wire and attached to some sort of battery or timer. The pressure that builds inside the pipe bomb not only makes it dangerous from a receiving perspective, but also from an assembling perspective. That's why they're not as popular as you might imagine, because everything is pretty easy to purchase. Imagine one of those confetti tubes that you pop open and the pressure sends confetti flying everywhere, but only it's not confetti. People often add nails or broken glass on the outside of the pipe or inside the pipe to increase pain, destruction, and death. But even just the outer metal shell is dangerous because that's what becomes shrapnel. The power of the boom of the mixture inside, it shreds the metal of usually steel pipe and it sends it just like hurling in whoever is in the vicinity at very high speeds. And a lot of times it detonates while it's being assembled. So that's why it's just, beyond the ethical, moral, and law standpoint, highly unadvisable. Just The US Department, sometimes you call you and you have the most casual conversation like, hey Eric, what's going on? And you just act like nothing's going on, and at the end before you have to say, so by the way, I'm upside down in an ATV right now, I need you to come pick me up and probably let the authorities know. Wow. Like, okay, maybe you should have told me this in the beginning. So he was someone that really liked to surprise people. You just never knew we were going to get with this guy. So after graduating high school, Eric goes on a 2-year mission trip to Mexico City, and he learned Spanish fluently. I'm telling you, this guy lived like 25 different lives. And everyone in Mexico City called him Rico while he was there. And they did it in a very like, endearing way. Everyone there could feel his appreciation for Latin culture, and they just really liked the guy, okay? He was a people person, but not in the way that most people are. Like, meaning people person means like you're good with people. Eric didn't have to try. I think that's what made people like him. He was just very naturally likable. He was a walking party. Even when it came to serious things like work, working with Eric was always a good time. Eric would come back from his mission trip and he started his own business with a good buddy of his named Cody Wright. So the two started a successful masonry business from the ground up. It just got fiercely protective of Eric. Like I think it just, when you see someone who's so kind and is such a nice soul and they go through so much heartache, it's almost this primal instinct where you're like, I gotta protect this person. I literally have to shield this person so that they don't experience any more hardships in life because they don't deserve it. That kind of feeling that Eric's family had. She got work connections. She had the ability, not just financially, he would spend a lot of time with his sons. He did his absolute best. In any sport that his son was in, like all three of his sons, because I'm sure they're doing all different sports, they're all in different grades, he was always the assistant coach or the head coach on every single team. And all the other little boys were so jealous. He was the cool dad that everyone, he was always involved. He was so good at sports. They're like, Dad, why can't you be that good? Come on, get up off the bleachers. Look at Eric. That's the type of dad. And parents even loved him too. Because Eric was not the type of captain that would go in there and be the coach and be like, okay, I'm gonna put a spotlight on my kids. I'm gonna make my kids look good. You have to encourage every single kid to do well. And he was just so excited to take his kids fishing, to help them learn archery. Like he was just obsessed with being outdoors and he brought his sons into it. He just really knew how to manage his time and he had a very successful business on top of all of this. And that he would even help his wife, Corey, with her business ventures too. So side note, I hate attributing a woman's success to a man or a husband, but if you don't act right, a rag is a really nasty word to call someone. It's supposed to mean that they're used and slept with by everyone. He continues, should I break your life for you to listen? If you don't act right for me, you won't survive. I will carve out your private parts. Behave like you did with the other directors. He assaulted Sora, allegedly, while forcing her to watch X-rated movies. Each time the assaults lasted several hours, and it said that they would make threats to Sora the entire time, saying things like, I'm gonna kill your mother, I will kill your sister, I will set fire to your house with everyone in it. Some of them even took videos and pictures of the assault and threatened to post them all over the internet. In very sick detail, it stated that some even threatened to assault her younger sister while they were assaulting her. And not even just that, all of his house to film his children's friends when they came over to shower and use the restroom. So welcome to the video was a CP operation that would watch his collection of videos for 51 years without ever repeating or stopping for a single second. 51 years. 5-1. Another man, a father of two, was copying by while in the video, and when they went to arrest him in his house, they found hidden cameras all over his house to film his children's friends when they came over to shower and use the restroom. The victims are intoxicated. It only takes 11 pounds of pressure to kill them, which could easily not leave any marks. Because they're not resisting. They're not even fighting to keep breathing. 11 pounds of pressure sounds like a lot, right? But for reference, it takes 12 pounds of pressure to pop open a beer can.
Wow, okay.
Jay was arrested and released on $1 million. Money laundering can involve 3 big steps. So the first step involves the placement of legally obtained money, meaning introducing that illegally obtained cash into the financial system. So that could be putting it into a bank or in crypto, introducing it somehow into the system. And the next phase is layering the money. So this is when you start mixing the illegal money with legally obtained money to disguise the real source of the illegal money. So imagine you have a deck of cards, and this deck is all legally obtained money. Everyone like from their jobs, these are like people have bought stuff from you like legal. Then you introduce illegal funds into this deck of cards, and you just start shuffling to the point where no one can really pinpoint which cards were illegal and which ones weren't. I mean, statistically, you would say maybe a certain percentage of them were illegally obtained money, but you don't know which ones, and you just keep mixing. Then the next phase is called integration. This is when you reintroduce the illegal funds straight into the economy. You start dealing out this deck of cards. Now, money laundering is crazy illegal, like everywhere, not just in the US, but everywhere, in Indonesia and China, everywhere. Money laundering is at this large scale. It's a very high stakes, high punishment crime. Most governments clearly let a lot of things go, but they are not. If they're not getting a cut from your earnings, that is like an unforgivable crime in most government entities. Charisma is often defined just though, nor is she spoiled about it. She was just classy in a way that money can't buy. She just has this level of self-assuredness. And interestingly, charisma is often defined to be the combination of warmth and competence. When someone is super competent at what they do, but they still have the ability to be warm to others, that's what a lot of people say charisma is, and that's lean. So when she first gets to campus and starts living in the dorms, all the other students are just thallium is to make someone a shell of a human before they kill.
Thallium?
Yes. I'm gonna get into the whole thing. Now, an email like this could be written off as a super dramatic pessimistic doctor who has like a propensity of fear mongering. More than half the emails that Bay is getting from respected doctors say the same thing. Bay and Ming's family, they have to take it very seriously. So they start doing their own research. Thallium is heavy metal atomic number 81 on the periodic table of elements. It's a highly toxic metal once considered the magic ingredient in bat poisons and insecticides. Mainly because it's just really, really killing. Like it's not any sort of crazy science like when it enters the rat has this and then the rat comes. No, it just like kills everything. It just kills. It's really good at it. Eventually it was banned in rat poison in most major countries, including China and the US, because people started using it not on rats, but like on their boyfriends, on their rich aunts, their wives. And actually, interesting history, before it was used in rat poison back in the early 1900s, it was used as a lice deterrent. So if your kid had lice, you would go to the pharmacy and pick up a bottle of thallium, feed it to your kid because it causes hair
hair loss.
way.
Yeah, and your pubes go bald. You like that rid of lice, which is, I don't know what your problem is. Imagine having a bruise on your arm and cutting your arm. But nowadays, thallium is called the poisoner's poison. It is odorless, colorless, tasteless, slow-acting, and painful. Thallium causes a wide range of symptoms that often overlooked in misdiagnosed by doctors. And it leaves no bruises, no wounds, no obvious signs of infection. Doctors are led to believe the victim is suffering from kidney infection, bowel infection, UTI, autoimmune diseases, stomach infections, way before they even think, oh my god, is this thallium? So for that reason, it's also often dubbed as the inheritance power. Because how many wealthy grandparents started showing symptoms of thallium poisoning? And the creepiest part about thallium poisoning is you don't know until it's too late.
typically. And I really try to not get too paranoid when I'm talking about these cases, but I will say this is a case where it does make me feel a little bit more protective of my beverages and my food. So with Valium, it can enter your body through inhalation, so it can be in the air, it can be absorbed through the skin, in a lotion, any skin contact, and ingestion. A lot of times will actually go the ingestion route because it's odorless, it's tasteless, and it smoothly blends into drinks and food without changing the color or texture much. So you can put it into coffee. It's not going to do like a whole coffee creamer thing where it makes it like a lighter color. You won't even taste it, you won't even see it. And all you need is less than a gram. That is less than half a dime. You know the coin, the dime? Half of a dime.
That's like deadly?
Yeah,
How much?
in an adult. That's all it takes. And it's bad. There are 3 phases to poisoning before death by Valium. The symptoms will initially start off slow, and again, it's very confusing to the person who has it because you're thinking, oh my god, do I have a stomach bug? So you get stomach aches, diarrhea, vomiting. Most people at this stage are like, what did I eat? And then the unbearable pain hits. You realize this is not an ordinary stomach bug. You have tremors, you've got headaches, insomnia, temporary if not permanent loss of vision. There are reports that people suffering from Valium poisoning can't even see a water color right in front of their eyes. Every part of the body starts to feel pain, just like this. It feels tender, as if someone went and used tweezers to peel every single piece of skin off the first layer of your skin. And anything touching your body now feels like a 4th degree burn. A lot of people report feeling, even the pain of having a bed sheet, not a blanket, like those thin sheets on you, it's like the Eiffel Tower stabbing into your body. You can't get up because it feels like you're walking on hot coals and your skin is burning. If you try to lift the leg of someone suffering from serious Valium poisoning, even a gentle touch to the leg is so painful that you're just gonna hear some of the most horrific cries for help. And it's on every part of your body. It's not just your extremities, like your arms and your legs. Some people report feeling these never-ending, ruthless, stabbing sensations all over their body, including their private parts. And then the neurological phases. The final phase before death. You're talking involuntary movement disorders. Seizures may start to occur. You'll lose function of your own limbs and extremities, leaving you paralyzed temporarily or indefinitely. Impairment of thought and mood, regression of mental acuity. And in this case, Ling was going from being a chemistry major at the Harvard of China to having the IQ and mental competency of a 6-year-old child. The most notable person associated with Valium is actually a man named Graham Young. Let me know if you want a case on this. Graham Young, he didn't discover Valium. He was a serial killer that poisoned 70 people with Valium in their teacups. He was fascinated by Valium. He wanted to watch his victims suffer in the most painful. This is not it's not a graceful way to go. It's not a painless. You know, you have some cases in true crime where the murderer wants that person dead and they want to get it fast, like get it over with. This is not one of those. It's a slow burn. It's a full degradation of human bodies. When Young went too long before killing again, he would miss a killing. He said, I miss the power it gives me. I suppose I ceased to see these people as people. They were simply guinea pigs to me. So Bay and Ling's parents, they're reading about all of this, and they even tell the doctors everything they just learned, and they're like, we just cracked the code. We need to get her the antidote to Valium because guess what? There's an antidote to Valium. They're telling the doctors, it's Valium. It makes sense. She's got the telltale symptoms. Look at these doctors. They studied Valium extensively. These are the emails that they sent. They said we never found it in her blood because we need to send it to a specific lab that can test specifically for Valium.
So they never tested that?
No. And the doctors look at them and they go, you know, no, it's not Valium. These internet doctors are just doctors on the internet, but we are her real doctors. We see her every day. Well, if she didn't disturb her dorm mates, group mentality is a very scary thing because it's a 4-person dorm room. One person says, hey, did you know that she's a little rude? The others might not agree, but the next time they talk to Ling, maybe they start thinking, why would you say that? That's a little rude, isn't it? Then they go back and maybe it just snowballed into something that probably rooted in jealousy to begin with. Because I personally, I mean, we tried to dig as deep as possible in this case. There was not one report of Ling being rude, disrespectful, not caring about people's schedules. She just primarily minded her own business and did her work. So did they all collude to kill her? Maybe it wasn't her dorm, maybe it was the next door dorm. We don't know. Or maybe they just wanted to do something like this. A real estate agent that helped SJ get that space said, why do these kinds of sentences exist? Like, why ruin these women's lives? Like, for what? The terrifying part is, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Once you start looking into it, the amount of sexual assault, sexual misconduct claims that have been filed against medical professionals is honestly alarming. And of course, for people that, I don't know, no critical thinking, I'm gonna put a disclaimer. My sister's a medical professional, she's a pharmacist, I trust her with my life, just like I would trust some of the doctors I worked with my entire life. But in any position of authority, with power to help relieve pain and power to control people's physical health, mental health, these types of positions are gonna be easy for abuse to take place. The agency uncovered a sick investigation that doctors that are facing sexual misconduct cases are let off so easily. It's a bit different state by state. Some of the worst states, Georgia and Kansas, for example, every 3 doctors that are publicly disciplined for sexual misconduct, 2 of them are allowed to return to practice. In Alabama, nearly 3 out of 4 doctors. In Minnesota, 4 out of every 5.
Most people would consider to be their personality is more along the lines of a self-defense mechanism. The apathetic who must cover their feelings so they're not made a fool. The anxious, afraid that the simplest mistake would mean regret. The overcaring, putting others before themselves, afraid that no one else might do the same for them. The overjoyous, afraid that anyone might find her company distasteful without putting on a show. The gluttons, overindulging in their worst habits, all for a fantasy of not being alone. Of course, it's difficult to reverse addictions. Smoking is a physical habit. It's not as simple as a quick change of mind telling someone to quit. We don't expect these cases to work. However, observation, taste, feeling, pause, the moment. That is the very foundation for change. Peter looks to Magnus cautiously, trying to fully understand the implications of his words, while weighing the question that maybe Magnus Nelson's brain damage was more severe than anyone had realized. But I'm not a cynic to judge what maybe Magnus Nelson's brain damage was more severe than anyone had realized. But I'm not a cynic, Peter. People want honesty, but they're too quick to judge what that is. The pause gives the possibility to reflect, but it's not as simple as who you are and who you are not. Everyone has everything inside them. Introvert and extrovert, shameless and ashamed, apathetic and empathetic. The personality machine is a service to provide a guide to these traits. What a pile of crap! I mean, come on, you're just this is all garbage. No, there's an overbearing shame that comes with change. Didn't you feel it, Peter? The thought that you're unable to change without the machine. What would other people think? What would people think if you suddenly changed? It's the only reason someone would come here. It was even a positive change. Quitting smoking. It terrified you, didn't it? Your parents, your coworkers, your friends. What would every single person you know think of a different you? How do you give the appropriate answer to what betrays their expectations of you, to what you have become? And what I'm selling is the answer. The very moment, the same gift that I was given. A scientific invention, a journey through a machine, and as a cherry on top, a personal meeting with the great Magnus Nilsson himself. An opportunity to explain everything to yourself, your friends, your family, to anyone. Be undoing of your very own self-defense mechanism. A story. A silent pause. I'm not sure I'm following. You're not making any sense. None of that could be true, but perhaps it isn't. It's up to you, Peter. I'm telling you all this because asking me to understand. No one else has been able to replicate what I've done. Not because it's impossible to replicate the machinery of the personality machine, but because they always look towards the physical structure of what a machine is supposed to be. This has been the undoing of the procedure. As you may have come to find, it might not have been in your best interest. Magnus lights a piece of paper. And I thought, man, I don't want to be Nelsson again. And as I was about to smoke, I saw Crow pick up a cigarette butt and eat it. And I thought, man, I don't want to be like that. So I throw away my cigarettes. And Veronica laughs. Really, after all these years and all that, this is what makes you quit? Is that really what happened? Well, do you really want to know? Either way.
High level of emotional intelligence to be considered by the FBI. For example, there are 3 types of people, and next time you're at a party, you can test this out. Pronounce a word wrong on purpose. It's gotta be a hard word where it sounds like you're trying to sound a little educated but not condescending. You pronounce that word incorrectly. There's 3 reactions, 3 types of people. The first type of person, they're not even gonna notice that you mispronounced it. Most likely, they're not even paying that close enough attention to you to even notice that you mispronounced it. The second type of person, they're gonna smirk. And they're gonna point it out directly in front of the whole group, and either intentionally or unintentionally, they're gonna embarrass you. The third person will smile genuinely and say something more along the lines of, oh my god, how funny. I actually learned that it was pronounced this way recently. And funny enough, there was a study done that found that avid readers often mispronounce words since they expand their vocabulary through reading rather than watching movies or watching shows, so through sound. I thought it was just really curious. What kind of books do you typically enjoy?
That's some very high-level communication skills.
And that third one is gonna be a hostage negotiator. You're correcting them, you're letting it be known that it is not a correct thing. You're not shying away from the fact that they mispronounced it, but you're doing it in a way where it gives them the opportunity to walk away.
Yeah, and you're complimenting them.
Yes.
You can feel good about it.
Exactly. It's all about saying the right thing. You can say the same thing in 2 different ways and get 2 different results. So let's say you're in a hostage situation. You are the hostage negotiator. The purpose is to prep the hostage taker for some bad news. You're trying to soften the blow. Something they're gonna be upset about and you know it. Do you say, 1, look, I don't want you to be offended by what I'm getting ready to say? Or 2, what I'm getting ready to say is probably gonna offend you?
I think number 2, right?
Yes. The first is almost in order. I don't want you to be offended by what I'm getting ready to say. It centers the negotiator, but the statement itself assumes that the negotiator holds the power because they have the power to offend.
That is true. I don't know why the second just sounds better. And I feel like it can almost be applied to in relationship maybe.
In just regular communication, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy how subtle it is. And then two, it's like a preemptive measure. You need to say something, and this is just to let them know it's not the best news that you're bringing, unfortunately. Also, the natural reaction to option two is, okay, well, that wasn't that bad. Let's try another one. This can be used when talking about family members of hostages, or even the hostage takers themselves. So when they're delivering horrendous news to them, do you say, 1, you sound angry, or 2, I know you're angry?
I know you're angry.
Yes. 1 is going to get you the response of, yeah, you bozo, you're the one that pissed me off. Or even, of course I'm angry, you idiot, you made me angry. But with 2, you're more likely to get a response of, yeah, and what are you going to do about it? That at least gives the hostage negotiator an opportunity to make it right.
Wait, can you say those two again?
You sound angry. I know you're angry.
No, you're angry. Wow.
It's so subtle. It's crazy. This is what the hostage negotiators from the FBI were talking about. It's just switching a few words, and that makes or breaks a hostage negotiation. Because in a hostage situation, not talking about anger does not make it go away. Anger is the elephant in the room, so you just need to address it in a way that doesn't escalate the situation. And last question, before we get started, do you know what the F-bomb is in negotiations? It's like the one word that you cannot abuse, but is incredibly overused in almost all negotiations, business, relationships, friendships, colleagues, everywhere.
It's been used too much?
Used too much.
And it's not good?
No.
The F-bomb.
F-bomb. What do you want in a negotiation? Even business negotiation.
What I want?
What do both parties want?
Okay, so it needs to be a win-win. It needs to be a fair.
Fair is the F-bomb. Hostage negotiator Chris Voss said that there are 3 types of ways to use the word fair, and only one of them is correct. Can you guess which one? 1, we just want what's fair for everyone. Fair for you, fair for us. We want both parties to be happy and healthy.
No.
2, we've given you a fair offer. This is the best we can do. I really tried to get the best deal for you. I really did.
No.
3, I want you to feel like you're being treated fairly. So please stop me at any time if you feel like I'm being unfair.
Yeah, the fair one sounds so much better.
Yeah, so he said that don't even use that word unless you're using it so correctly, like the third one. So for 1, it's wrong because the implication of like I want what's fair for both of us. Whoever utters those words is already admitting loss. They've already got the short end of the stick. That means they feel like you're scamming them. 2 is wrong because it's almost condescending. Trust me, this is a fair deal. This is the best you're gonna get. It's like you don't know it, but I'm letting you know this is the best. 3 is the best because it disarms someone. It makes you seem like a person of integrity and very reasonable to work with. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to be treated fairly. They want what's fair. But what is fair when you've taken 4 teenage hostages by gunpoint? It's 1 p.m. on a Monday. 15-year-old Lola and her 3 best friends, Nayara, that's her best friend. She called her. Do you know what the first rules of hostage negotiations? Chris Voss once said, me making you dumber than me will always hurt me. But that doesn't mean you should know everything, right? Or at least as much as you can, but never make the hostage taker feel like you know something that they don't know. That you know a lot more, that you're smarter than them. You need to use every piece of information to your advantage and reveal it piece by piece, bit by bit, by calculated, controlled ways to the hostage taker. If you reveal too much information at once, you show them everything you have, and you're putting them on the defense. They feel threatened, which is never good. If you don't know much at all, we're just flat out at a disadvantage. The first things hostage negotiators typically go for profiles. Profiles of the hostage taker and all the hostages, and floor plan. What does the inside of that apartment look like? I need that information now. How was Gate alerted of the hostage situation so early on? There were 4 hostages in the apartment, all teenagers. Aloha and her 3 friends. One of the hostages, the guy once, was named Victor. Victor told his dad that he'd be coming home at around 5 p.m. after spending the day at Aloha doing homework. Never made it home. Victor's dad, being protective, came to Aloha to see if something was keeping him. He walked up to the apartment door, knock knock, taking time. Between conversations and negotiations are about exploring. There's no set goal. Negotiations are all about closure and resolution. There is a goal and there's a ticking time bomb. Do you know the most powerful tool in any verbal communication? Your voice. The literal sound and inflections and how you draw out your words and your cadence, the tone, all that plays a role in being a good hostage negotiator. Some of them, you listen to them on podcasts, they have such a soothing voice, or almost a slightly authoritative, but not too overly powerful voice. It's like right in the middle, it's not too soft. The 3 voices of negotiations are as follows. Late night radio host, positive playful friend, and assertive direct communicator. The key identifiers in the late night radio host voices being the voice of calm and reason. I'm your host for this midnight show. It sounds like that it's a soft down inflection at the end of every sentence. It's authority without triggering defensiveness. But you don't go without triggering defensiveness? Then there's the playful positive friend voice. This should actually be your default voice. It's easygoing, good natured. Outside this situation, I'd be a fun person to share a beer with, okay? Even after all of this, maybe we'll be drinking buddies. I can take a joke. Come on, let's hear it. Say something wild. And then the last one, assertive direct communicator. You would think that this is what most hostage negotiators operate in. It's not. They say that this voice is almost always counterproductive. It's like slapping yourself in the face while trying to make progress. FBI negotiator Chris Voss said it's like getting hit in the face with a brick, and that is never a good idea. Which is kind of hard to get out of because most law enforcement officers are trained only in this voice. So to learn that this voice is actually bad, loud, clear commands are actually bad, and it makes people feel attacked, it's going to be very hard to reset your boundaries.
So the first 2 is good.
Yes.
The last one bad.
The last one is very rarely you need to set a boundary, set it with this voice, but it's only when you need to set incredibly firm boundaries. You know what you're talking about, and just trust me, this is going to be okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And another key important point is 738-55 rule. 7% of messages are conveyed through the words. 38% tone of voice. For example, I'm really impressed by how much you've learned in a short amount of time. I'm really impressed by how much you've learned in a short amount of time. One seems a little more genuine. One is like, I don't know if they're patronizing me or not. I don't know if this is like condescending. But that still leaves 45% of the percentages. What is that? Body language. Now, how do you do that when all you have is a phone? Focus even more on tone. Because once you have that tone, close your eyes. Hi everyone. Did it sound like I'm smiling?
Yeah.
You can almost picture someone's body language through the way that their voice sounds and their tone. Oh, and one more thing. Veteran negotiator Voss said along the lines of silence. Silence is good. Sit there in silence with a hostage taker. Why? Because you don't sit in silence with people you don't know. You try to fill the silence. You sit in silence with people that you're intimate with. There's a level of intimacy, and you need to manufacture it sometimes. So now they know who's in the apartment. They know the floor plan. They know Lola and her relationship with the hostage. Pointing out the apartment, hoping to get another money shot of Lola out the window. And then it goes dark. The power was shut off by gate agents. In most hostage situations, this is a tactic that is frequently used. It's just to make their lives more inconvenient. Forces them to negotiate. And it's interesting. Sometimes you take away something, give it back, but with enough mind games, you actually make a hostage taker feel like you're giving them something. But in reality, you give it away and you're just giving it back.
Yeah.
You're using it as I will give you this for that.
Yeah.
But they already had that. It's crazy. Yeah, so that's why they do that. But it seems a far better liar than you will ever be, and they will spot it right off the bat. Second, they could be luring you into a trap to test if you will lie to them. They already know the truth. They're testing to see if you're gonna lie. And third, even if you pull it, it's Nami's best friend. She hands over screenshots of text messages. The woman that got Samuel's girlfriend hooked on drugs is my best friend Nami. She's the madam of a very famous room salon, and she provides drugs for celebrities. SJ was so annoyed at Nami for leaving her like that. But also, SJ was so mad at Nami, mainly for not giving her share. All SJ wanted was $75,000, but Nami got $250,000 left. Now what? All that work creating a blackmail account? I mean, it can't go to waste, right?
SJ did it all?
SJ is the original blackmailer.
What?
Yeah, because Nami would tell her all these wild stories and send her pictures of all the celebrities that she would meet at her room salon, and now SJ's like, oh, you know what? I need some money, so I'm gonna blackmail my best friend.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
And Nami has no idea.
No, she's gonna find out, but as of right now, no. She thinks it's talent.
But they go both, so that's the level of evilness just keep on going.
Looks around at Frank's family and friends, and now staring at him like he's such a crazy power-tripping guy. And ultimately, that's humiliating. It's insulting. And what does a wounded ego do? A humiliated ego strikes back. Janelle leans back and punches Frank square staring matches. Their faces are inches apart from each other. They're staring into each other's eyes. I thought it was goofy. I thought it was all for like photo ops and press conference and to get more views. But there is psychology there. A lot of the MMA fighters that, I too thought it was goofy, but you actually learn a lot about your opponent just by staring into their eyes. It's an opportunity to see if are they really confident. Is there even a moment where they stare down, they waver, or maybe a slight second where you can see like doubt or fear flash before their eyes. When you're only focused on their eyes, you can see it. You can see a person's soul. That's what they said. The first person to look away is the automatic de facto loser, the submissive one. And that's what it felt like on this front lawn. It was like an MMA stare down. Janelle punched Frank. He slumped down the wall. For a month, his whole family was gone. They'd been wiped out by some mysterious illness that the doctors could not even pinpoint. And so by himself, he goes back to his empty home. He slumps down the wall and he just puts his head in his hands and he starts sobbing until his body is exhausted. Someone had killed his son and wife, and he was sure of it. Both of them were healthy, and in the matter of the past month, both of them had now been buried. He was going to find out whoever did this, and they were going to pay. Yeah, basically, because guess what that cleaner was?
What is it?
Industrial rug cleaner.
Wow, like why?
So what happened? Let's talk about the chemical. It's called PHMG. That's the chemical in the sterilizer. Decades ago, in the 90s, a company called Yugong in South Korea released a disinfectant liquid sterilizer into the market. Yugong is a chemical supplier, so they're not releasing this new sterilizer into the public market. They're not selling at grocery stores or anything like that. It's going to be sold to other companies. So usually other cleaning companies or industrial businesses, which would then use these chemicals in their own products or potentially sell them again. Now, at this point, the chemical that they created was called PHMG, and they had done no government reviews or safety tests yet, so there was no government labels of safety on there. And Euglin just wanted to sell it to other companies in bulk, wholesale. That's where Oxy RB comes in. Oxy, yes, the one, I think they're just known as RB Group now, the Reckitt Benckiser Group. It's like a mega corporation that usually cannot even go to a grocery store or Target without seeing their products. They dominate every shelf of every cleaning supply aisle. They also have the pharmaceuticals branch. I mean, it's crazy. They own Airwick, Durex, Lysol, Mucinex. Side note, I believe RB Group is actually one of the manufacturers that are paying massive settlements for the opioid crisis in the US. Recently, the RB Group was fined like $1.4 billion in the US to settle all civil and criminal probes over their marketing of opioids. Yeah, so So I mean, I feel like that's just how you know about this company. It's really hard not to buy their products though because they do dominate in the market. But anyway, RB Group goes to Yugong and is like, hey, I want to purchase a boatload of this chemical PHMG. And they say that they're going to use it for industrial cleaning products to clean rugs. So like, not even at home. This is something you can buy as a consumer. You're like, oh my god, my dog peed on my rug, let me buy a rug cleaner. No, you're probably getting a bottle of Folex. This is like when you take your rug to a certified professional rug cleaner and they've got these crazy machines, crazy safety equipment, and they've got some industrial strength cleaners that you can never get at home and they're going to charge you an arm and like, that's the level of cleaning I'm talking about.
So they know exactly what they're buying.
Yeah.
They're like, they know what this is for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is crazy, right? It's not for little old Stephanie who found out recently that you can't mix bleach and vinegar. Okay, not like recently, but still. Alarmingly late, it creates toxic gas fumes and you could die. So they specifically stated...
Wait,
oh, you just found out? Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we don't keep bleach in the house, maybe that's why. Yeah, exactly. So they specifically stated to Yugong, yeah, we're going to be using it as an industrial strength rug cleaner, which, you know, I highly doubt that Yugong would care as long as they're making a profit off of this. Now, this deal opens up a ton of doors for Yugong. They have this massive company as big as Oxy, a global megacorp for cleaning supplies and even pharmaceuticals that are buying from Yugong. They've got the street credit now. This is putting them on the map and giving them the credibility that they need. If RB Group is purchasing from them...
These companies are getting really confused.
Yugong is the Korean company that made the chemical, and Oxy, now known as RB Group. Okay, so Oxy. Okay. And if this company, as big as Oxy, a global megacorp for cleaning supplies and even pharmaceuticals, are purchasing from this South Korean chemical company called Yugong, that's putting them on the map. That's putting Yugong on the map. It's giving them the street cred that they need, the credibility, everything. They're now selling a bunch of products to a bunch of people.
So a Korean company created this cleaning solution for rugs.
Yes.
And this
well,
medical...
they never stated for rugs.
What did they create it for?
An industrial cleaning solution.
For like heavy duty cleaning purpose. And this medical company, big medical company.
Well, they also own cleaning, like they own the cleaning.
This mega corporation reached out to say, I want to buy these chemicals from you, from Korea.
Yes.
And now that's the contract is so big, it's putting this Korean company on the map. What we're saying.
And now a lot of these Korean companies that sell household items or industrial items, they're like, oh, we want to buy from you, the chemical supplier that they just bought from.
Okay.
So Yugong, they do not sell anything in stores. They are a wholesale chemical company. They don't even really sell cleaning products. They don't even sell industrial cleaning products. They just straight up sell chemicals.
Yep.
They're like, these chemicals clean shit. And then these other companies will be like, let me buy that and mix it with this, and then I'm going to sell this as a cleaner.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay, understood.
Yes. So basically, that's what's happening, right? And 2 years after the initial order from Oxy, Yugong submits the chemical, PHMG, to the Ministry of Environment in the Department of South Korea for approval. They're like, hey, we created this chemical, and now we just want to get it certified so that we can sell it to more suppliers.
Okay.
They're like, okay, sounds good. What are you using it for? Oh, it's going to be like an industrial rug cleaner. Because that's what Oxy said they're using it for. So they're like, okay, Oxy says something, that's what they're using it for. The government runs their tests and they come out with a shiny new non-toxic sticker. These non-toxic stickers are very misleading because non-toxic does not really mean non-toxic, okay? The government only tests for the intended purpose of the product, which makes sense. So when they're told it's going to be used as an industrial strength rug cleaner, the government tests to make sure that if by accident, even with the proper cleaning gear, like gloves because it's an industrial strength cleaner, if they get a little bit splash a little bit on their skin, are they going to have a chemical burn and lose a limb? No? Okay, non-toxic. They do not test per se for consumption or inhalation of the product because if you're out here drinking industrial strength rug cleaner from a rug cleaner bottle on purpose, that's not really the government's problem or the company's problem, that's the personal problem. So Yugong, they get this proof with a non-toxic seal for this specific chemical for a rug cleaner. But the seal does not say that. The seal does not say non-toxic as a rug cleaner. It just says non-toxic certified by the South Korean government. They turn around and give the seal to Oxy.
So you would say that it's the Korean company that messed up? Like they know what they're doing?
No. Because Oxy is using it as an industrial strength rug cleaner. So they're like, hey, you know that rug cleaning chemical part? But they have to charge it and the battery doesn't last long. So if he's out when the oxygen machine dies, he has minutes to get somewhere before his brain shuts down from the lack of oxygen. So he has minutes to find electricity, but he can't run. He can't panic because he has to stay calm because he can barely get oxygen. So he and his parents, they constantly live with that fear that a simple jog back home because his machine is running out of power or a simple cold could literally kill him. They said that it broke their heart to see their kids sitting at home bored when all the other kids were living their lives. And because he spent so much time as a kid just laying down instead of up and running around because of how weak he was, his bones are so brittle to the point where if he trips and falls a bit too hard, his bones break. It's like he has the bones of an elderly person. And the scariest part of all this is that Songjin's lungs were only able to recover because he was away from the toxic fumes of the humidifier when he was hospitalized. He recovered. When he got back home, his mom went right back to using the humidifier because she was told it was good for her son. But in some sort of act of craziness from God or the universe or whoever you believe in, the humidifier broke down. And she read online that sometimes humidifiers break down if you use too much disinfectant. She never got around to purchasing another one and it didn't seem like he needed it. She said, I shudder at the thought of what would have happened if I continued to use the disinfectant in the past 10 years. In the interview, 13-year-old Songjin said, I guess my only wish is to be able to run around or go to the gym or go to the playground with my friends. There was another victim whose life was irreversibly damaged by the sterilizer, so his mom bought the sterilizer after watching TV, and all these commercials talking about how healthy this was and how good it was for family homes, and a few months later her baby was hospitalized. His lungs had literally collapsed. Thankfully the doctor stabilized him and they were able to get him to a point where he could leave the hospital and live life on his own. But since he was 1 when this happened, his body would never develop normally ever again. He also can't exercise, he can't do anything that's too strenuous on his lungs, and at 13 years old he only weighs 62 pounds. For reference, the CDC says the average healthy 13-year-old boy weighs anywhere between 75 to 145 pounds. Junseok, his name, he cannot exercise, and he was so bored at home, he said that due to his inability to be active, he read 10,000 books. He also volunteers as a tour guide at a museum at 13 years old.
And you said this happened in 2011?
Yes.
2008. So they're all like 20-year-old right now?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
He said he tries to stay positive, but no matter how many books he reads or how positively he thinks in this park, this was her favorite spot. She gets dropped off by the taxi driver, walks into the grassy area, and starts scattering the remains of Hannah. Seoul University forensic professor would say that even the grassy location by the Nakdong River could have been planned. The tall grass by the water, it holds a lot of insects and disinfectants, like I'm assuming it's like pesticides, that would accelerate the decomposition of the body part within a week. So if she had not been caught by then, there's a high chance the body would have been hard to recognize or even how to ID the body. Professor Yu is quite certain that she knew about all of this, which is why she chose to go this far with the body and even get in a taxi to scatter the remains of this park. Correct plan. Except the taxi driver. She believed the taxi driver would not be able to tell the difference between a girl traveling with luggage for vacation at 3 a.m. versus a girl traveling with luggage full of body parts. The taxi driver would call police and it was very quickly traced back to Yuzhong in the world. Another redditor said, see, it sneaks up on you. You think it's okay for a month, and you do it for 6 months, you think it's not that bad, then you do it for a year, and then 2 years, and then you realize that all your peers are light years ahead of you economically, socially, mentally. You feel like there's no way you can even try to catch up now. So what's the point? It's been known to psychologists that the more one doesn't socialize, the less they know how. It's something that you can technically forget. It's like talking, you have to learn to talk again. And it's this vicious cycle of not socializing for even longer because you forget how to do it and then repeat. It's happening in Japan, China, South Korea, the United States. Some behavioral scientists have credited this retreat from society to the overwhelming pressure of succeeding in Asian work culture after high school. So in China, some people actually attributed also to the fact that the population has profoundly more men than women, saying that this puts so much pressure on men looking for partners, whereas women can be a lot more selective. So these men decide, I don't even want to partake in this game that society plays. I want to completely withdraw. Non is affecting millions of people around the world, and it's honestly very heartbreaking. It's a very lonely existence, I imagine. And again, I don't think that Yuzhong can be fully categorized as hikikomori, but regardless, she probably felt the effects of the lack of social connection and almost complete social isolation. Which risk of that is mental health issues like depression, anxiety, substance abuse. You can even get chronic conditions like high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, higher risk of dementia because you're not socializing. And again, just another disclaimer, like most mental illnesses, the hikikomori lifestyle, I mean, this is typically only detrimental to the person themselves, and maybe perhaps their family members have to interact with them and try to provide for them and help them, but most of the time they are just illnesses. The hikikomori lifestyle, I mean, this is most of the time they are just non-violent, introverted, modern day hermits. There were a lot of hikikomori in my room and be on the internet, and I thought, this is nice, I like it. And then it was a month, and then they were thinking, this isn't too bad. And then 6 months crept in, a year crept in, 2 years crept in, and then a lot of them report feeling like it was too late. Like they had already ruined their life. They felt like I already spent the most formative years, the most important years of my career. There's no way I can get a job in the competitive Asian work economy. Like, people just out of college, prestigious colleges, they can't even get a job. I've been doing nothing for the past 5 years. How am I gonna get a job? A lot of them report deteriorating health, a lot of weight gain, and you're in your room and eating cup ramen all the time and just staring at your computer. A lot of them report having a lot of acne, and that would just prevent them from going out even more. They felt awkward around people. They felt like everyone was staring at them weirdly. They just felt like they didn't fit in. And the longer it went on, the harder it was to reintegrate back into society. And so most of them just thought, I'm just gonna stay with my computer. That's it. That's what I'm gonna do. And Yujin was kind of like that in the sense that she was obsessed with her computer.
which themselves contained. Martinez and Jim found Silverstone, the Finders member, in a room of the warehouse which contained several computers, printers, and documents, which themselves contained very shit, very incriminating information. Just on their first cursory examination of the documents, the agents discovered that they contained detailed instructions for, quote, obtaining children for unspecified purposes. But I think if you have to a priest in which both things might have. These instructions included various methods that could be used to obtain children, including the, quote, impregnation of female members of the Finders, which already sounds fucked up, but is actually somehow the least concerning method listed here. This is because the documents also detailed instructions for purchasing children, trading children, and even kidnapping children. So that's how these people not immediately in jail for this, right? Blood ritual involving children that I mentioned earlier. And he goes on to describe this whole event in more detail in the report, which you'll have to go to my separate video diving into these documents deeper if you want to hear about that. It's pretty gross. Further investigation revealed files relating to the group's, quote, activities in different parts of the world, information gathered on families totally unrelated to the Finders, which this shit scares me. I think this all scares me quite a bit, but this part is like really particularly creepy to me. These files appear to show information gathered through a, quote, systematic response to local newspaper advertisements for babysitters, tutors, and anything else related to unsupervised access to children. It appeared to show that a member of the Finders was tasked with responding to these ads and then collecting as much information as possible as to the habits, identity, occupation, and any other personal information relating to the families posting these ads, as well as a large amount of data collected on various child care organizations. And I don't think I need to tell you why that is profoundly upsetting. Reports also went into detail about areas contained within the warehouse, including a large library, a hot tub, sauna, and a, quote, video room, which the report goes on to say appears to be set up as a, quote, indoctrination center. Again, on Jorge on YouTube, who a lot to get through, first of all, and hard to piece together based on all of the redacted information. But the channel Blame It on Jorge on YouTube, who actually has a great video on the Finders that had a lot of good resources for this research, goes into detail on some of the documents, which seem to implicate the CIA even further in this cover-up. These FBI documents, according to the video on it, they said the Pentagon invented AIDS, it goes hard. And again, this everything I just said up there was just part one of 24 goddamn parts of this thing. Okay, that was part one of Vault 7. I won't go through all of the other parts because I value both your and my sanity and my viewer retention. But I will name literally all of them because their names are funny and they make me giggle, and I don't value my viewer retention that much. Okay? I'm just kidding, please don't leave me. They're funny. I promise. Please stay. I have done. So part one of Vault 7 was again called Year Zero, and here's the rest of the parts in chronological order: Dark Matter, Marble, Grasshopper, Hive, Weeping Angel, Scribbles, Archimedes, After Midnight, Assassin,
Your neighbor down the road today, just poor, beleaguered cashier at Walmart with the tired eyes and the swollen ankles. Just look her down and ask her, how are you doing today? Just somebody actually cares. You know, we talk about holding the door. Well, somebody stops on the side of the road. Your neighbor down the road is in a difficult place and they can't get their yard mowed. The old lady across the street, the old gentleman across the street, it snows. Just take your shovel and go over and shovel their sidewalk. Just somebody at work, you watch and you look, and people at work, they're going through a hard time. Just, hey, are you all right? Anything I can do to help? Just in your life, be an agent for good. It's kind of like people say, I support the troops. I support the troops. What do you do for the troops? Do you send them care packages? No. Do you walk up to them when you see them in a restaurant, airport in uniform, and do you stick your hand out and say, thank you for your service? No, I don't do anything, but I support the troops. No, that just means you're not against the troops. And going through life, become a good man. And be a dangerous man. Now, being dangerous is not being a threat. They're two different things, all right? And it's not about going out and lifting weights and get a bunch of tattoos and wearing leather jackets and walking around with your chest and shoulders up, hulking around saying I'm dangerous. That's very rarely is that a dangerous man. Often the most dangerous man in the room is the quietest man in the room. When we were in Wyoming, this last trip, I was talking to the neighbor behind me, the manager of all this grazing land, ranch land, and across the road he and his wife had just a few head of sheep. Not very many, 10 or 12. And we were talking about this is here and this is over here, and he said, no, I don't recommend you go over and check out the sheep. He has one of those great Pyrenees dogs over there. He said, that dog doesn't know you, and he might eat you up protecting those sheep. Now, sat there for a couple days and watched. That dog was dangerous, all right? But that dog did not sit on the hillside with his head up and his hair flowing in the wind like some kind of lion telling the whole world I'm dangerous. He wasn't down the road down there barking and everything come by says I'm dangerous. He was just with the sheep, and he was not a danger to the sheep. The lambs and the ewes and everything come around and going around amongst them and everything, and they were perfectly 100% safe. And when they were all down in there down in the middle of the day and kind of gathered up and resting, he's not under a shade tree out there somewhere. He's resting too. He's not telling everybody how dangerous he is. In fact, from a distance, if you look down there, he looked like a sheep, about the same size, big old white woolly. You can tell him from a sheep. But you go down there and he thinks you're trying to harm one of the sheep. It's a different story. He's dangerous. Listen, you cannot. If we tie this into the earlier point, be a good man. You can't be a good man, a fully good man, if you're not a dangerous man. All right. To be good is to do good to people, and sometimes doing good to people is protecting those people. It's protecting those people, protecting those around us. All right. These days I'm a laid back, mellow, middle-aged fella, and I kind of talk slow and easy. I move slow and easy. All right. But you say one disrespectful thing to my wife in my presence, or I get a phone call from one of my daughters crying. I am not only willing, but I'm able to inflict great bodily damage, and I will do so. I'm not a danger to those around me. I'm not a danger to the sheep. You need to be a dangerous man. Look up. There's a guy on the internet, and he's on YouTube, and he discusses this. He's much smarter than me. He discusses this much better. Jordan Peterson, and he talks about this a whole lot more eloquently than I can. All right. But you need to get a mindset. Look, I'm not a sheep. I'm taking care of those. It's a willingness and a mindset, and then you work on the physical side of it. I start losing some weight, start going to the gym, start learning some things. And fellas, if you are not willing and able to some degree to protect the family that you have started, you don't have a right to have a family. That's my opinion. That's Doinism. Okay. You don't have a right to have that family. So study. These are things I'm just giving you a start, and you research. Okay, be dangerous. Third, be educated. Listen, you want to know how to be a man among men. You start following and reading and listening to guys like Jocko Willett, Jordan Peterson, these guys, and start learning. Start reading. And just the brain is a muscle, and like any muscle, the more you work it, the stronger it becomes. I talked about reading on here before. Mama laughs at me all the time. I cannot multitask. I get to talking and I completely forget about my cigar. I can only do one thing at a time. All right. Become educated. All right. And I don't mean going to college. I'm not knocking college. All right. But become educated. Learn to do things. Learn what's going on around you. But go through life learning. Learn something new. Okay. Become educated. And become educated and better with your vehicles. Educated, of course, in our line of work, what we're doing, educated horses, you're always learning. You're always growing. You're always reading. We've got two young men here. Apprentices we got here. One of these young men, he's always reading. He's always, Dwayne, do you know you recommend a book on this? Do you know a book on this? And he asked me the other day, and I said, well, I recommend this book here by this fellow. He says, I already have that one. And I have the sequel he wrote to it after that. These weren't novels. But he's just always learning, always growing. All right. Just become educated. Thirdly, be calm. Be calm. All right. Now, Mama's grinning behind the phone. A lot of people talk on the channel about how calm and level I am. Look, this is not the me that used to be. And we looking at these comments and talking about how lucky your children were to be raised by you. My children were not raised by the me that is today. It's a journey. All right. I was a hot-headed, scratchy old fella. I just didn't know any better. All right. A lot of stuff outside of family in my life that was causing tremendous amounts of stress, and I was bringing it home, and I was not calm. You need to just be calm. Just be calm. Dwayne, how do I be calm? Get rid of the things that don't let you be calm. All right, if you come in and you watch the news every night and it just agitates you, turn the dang news off. They're lying to you anyhow. It's inevitable. Nothing you can do about it. Turn it off. You got people in your life that are just people of constant conflict, people of melodrama, just people that are always stirring the pot. They're not happy unless the pot is stirred. Just walk away. I have friends, old friends, family. I just walked away. And I guard my calmness. We have a deal here. We have Sunday night. Everybody comes in, so we lay out the rules. Rule number one. Rule number one, every class. Do not disturb Dwayne's calm. All right? Just calm. Find things that will make you calm. Cigar? Okay. Calm music. Listen, if you got a stressful job that you don't like, that you're not proud of doing, and you are slamming Mountain Dews and Dr. Peppers and sweet teas or whatever, jacked up on sugar, I used to drink a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper and 2 big tall glasses of sweet tea every day, and then go to heavy stress, construction jobs and stuff, and along with other things in my life, I stayed jacked up. Just quit. Cut that stuff down. Cut it out, all right? And if you do that, and you've got cranking, driving music on your radio to work, that stuff just gets your heart rate going, gets you going. So you wake up in the morning, you got a job you hate, you don't like, you don't want to go to, you slam some sugar breakfast down, you grab you a Mountain Dew or a Coke or Dr. Pepper on the way to work, and then you crank up some hard driving music, and you come screeching and roaring into your job, and you get out and go in, and it's machines and everything else going, and people are not happy, people don't want to be there and whatnot. Goodness gracious, it's no wonder you're about to blow a gasket. Make some major changes in your life. Change that music. You listen to country music. Well, there's a lot of country music these days. It's not very country. But instead of listening to, Brantley Gilbert, learn to appreciate some Emmylou Harris. Okay? Find beauty and calm, and kind of tone down on the drums and string guitars of the thing that a tomato is classified as a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. You don't have to open your mouth and dump out everything that's going on in your brain. You don't have to tell people everything you know. There's two sides of that calm thing. There's the people who stir things up around you, but there's times we go around, we tell tales, and we agitate. Hey, I heard this. Did you hear this? And stirring stuff up. Be that quiet man. Be that quiet man in the corner. All right? You got something to say that's good, beneficial, helpful, or properly corrective at the proper time, then say it. Otherwise, be wise. All right? Talking all the time about everything to everybody. That's not an indication of the wise. All right? So now these are just some things just to think about and to help. And it's a journey. It's a journey. All right? You start where you are today, and you say, I wish I was that man right there. But I'm not. And I don't mean that particular person. I mean that kind of man. I wish that is the kind of man that I was. Well, there might be a long journey to get to that man. But start. Work at it all the time. Make sacrifices. And the other thing is, you've heard the saying, fake it till you make it. You see that man right there, and you want to be that man right there. Pretend to be that man right there. Listen to me. Pretend to be that man right there. Inside, you say, I'm not really that man. I'm going to act calm. I'm going to pretend like I'm that calm man. But I don't feel like I am that calm man, but I'm going to act calm, and I'm going to pretend to be calm. Then are you not calm? Do you not become calm through that process? All right? Act like, see a picture. Listen, if you don't have a destination, how do you know when you've arrived? And how do you know how to get there if you don't know where you're going? Sit down and figure out what kind of man do I want to be. And then begin the journey. But just this country and the people around you need good men. Good, effective men. We have enough neutrals. We have enough people running around out there that, let's be completely honest. Let's be completely honest. If you were to leave this world tomorrow, would you leave a hole? If you were to leave this world tomorrow, would you leave a hole? Become the man that leaves a big hole when you leave this world. All right? Hope it helps. And I'm going to stop right there. 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. I never allowed that. The reason I never allowed that is because you start setting a precedent, a life habit in your mind. This is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend. Now we're not getting along, so we're going to break up. And we'll find a new one. And so you start setting a life habit, a mindset that a relationship is disposable. And you start setting that mindset, you start setting that life habit while you're still young and impressionable, forming who you are. Okay? I never let any of my children, when they're home, once they're grown and gone, they do what they want. But while they're still in my house, no one was ever allowed to date just for the sake of dating. Their boyfriends and girlfriends were not allowed. Dating, for me, is a path to marriage. And so I've asked sometimes, they come to me, I'm like, do you think this is who you're going to marry? Are you ready to marry this person? But Dad, I can't marry him. I'm 15 years old and you can't date. Because you don't know who you are. You're not emotionally developed yet. Your identity is not set yet. And so that emotional dating should not begin until you have a certain level of maturity. That includes you have a job, you're making some of your own finances, you're making financial decisions, you're starting to look in decisions about providing your own housing. But if you're living at home, you're starting to look in decisions about providing your own housing. But if you're living at home with your parents and they're feeding you and they're housing you and they're clothing you, you are not mature enough to date. Okay? So my recommendation is stop the dating. You stop the dating until you're at a point where I believe this is someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And I'm mature enough to start figuring that out. Because I'm mature enough to start figuring out who I am. And they're mature enough to start figuring out who they are. And so now we can start making logical decisions about, is this going to work, is this not going to work? And so dating should simply be a time to make double, triple sure that this is someone I want to spend the rest of my life with. It should never be something where this is someone I have a lot of fun with, we like hanging out, and so we want to hang out with each other exclusively. And you're one of those people you speak up and say, I have no regrets in my life because everything that happened in the past made me who I am today. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't step in and say anything. But I'm going to just let you know right now, you would be placed in a book inside of me. Your name would be written down in a book of a person that I will never respect and that I will surely never trust. Regret is not about us. Now stop and listen to me, okay? Regret is not about you. Regret is a safety mechanism for those around us. If we feel regret for how we hurt somebody else based on decisions that we made, we are less likely to hurt them again in the same way. We are less likely to hurt somebody else in the same way that we hurt that person. We are less likely to make the same approach to our horse. If we saw it didn't work, we saw that it didn't put them on a good path, and we're like, man, I wish I had done that different. That's regret. If you go through life with an attitude of no regrets for anything I've done in life, that is the attitude of a sociopath or a psychopath, someone who has no empathy for other life around them, be a man or animal. And so we need to embrace our regrets. I know that's very against the grain. That's very swimming upstream against attitudes and philosophies today.
Who am I? Let's just say I'm God. You're God. At least the only God that's listening right now. What do I want? The same as any God. A little faith. For without faith, I am nothing. And without me, you're fucked.
Russian swear.
A different perspective that you might not. In fact, it lets you have a deeper understanding of oneself. So you're asking a question, there's almost this gut feeling of what you want the cards to be. Or it pulls out a card that makes you self-reflect in a different perspective that you might not have done before.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that makes you want to get the tarot card.
So it's just a medium for you to think, let your mind wander. And
people say that it's not really about talking to a spirit like people make it out to be or predicting the future or even like trying to get you to do a life decision off of it. It's genuinely just meditation, they said. Instead of journaling, you're just asking yourself these questions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I kind of like it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's actually science behind that.
Yes, because does it not show that? The mall stated there was a local power outage. So all of their lights and power and cameras shut off. Locals disputed this and said, we did not have a power outage that night. So what are you saying? And coincidentally, it happened at the same time that Jocelyn was leading them all for her shift. It felt really, really, really sinister. So people kept bringing up a human snake. People kept bringing up human trafficking. There were just rumors that the mall owners tried to deal with the police to ignore cases like this so they can feed their human snake or do some sort of underground activities. I mean, people also wonder, what if this was news planted by by the mall's competition, SM Supermalls. They're like the biggest competitors of Robinson Malls. What if they wanted Robinsons to go down? So they keep pushing this mall narrative.
This is like the Chinese school kid.
Yes.
It's like when someone go missing, I feel like school or the mall, they should be the number one people on top of this.
Yeah,
This should be hurting them the most.
Exactly. I do think it's weird when the establishment that's getting hurt the most, that is known for being super capitalistic, is suddenly not capitalistic. Because capitalism would mean that you want to distance yourself.
No, they think that distance is the way to go. Like suppress it. Let's just get rid of the story. But instead, only fuels more online discussion and more conspiracies.
It's so weird. Wouldn't you rather just want to show the footage like, hey,
Exactly.
we gotta do it. Have fun, everyone.
Yeah. So now it's like what's going on with security, the cameras, and it just sounds more and more fishy. They should come out and provide.
Board the ship and spray the entire vessel with luminol, which I'm sure you guys have seen in crime shows and movies. It's a chemical compound that you spray onto a surface. It detects blood. Even if someone tries to clean up said blood, it can detect blood that has been diluted 10,000 times. Once it comes in contact with blood, it starts to glow this pale blue fluorescent color. Now, Squid was caught. If you made me answer a few weeks ago, I probably would have made a guess of, I don't know, boats go out into the sea, send down some nets and catch squid, right? Squid fishing feels more like Squid Games. There's human trafficking, forced labor, runaway boats, and people thrown into the ocean, beaten, abused, injured, thrown overboard to their death to catch squid for profit. It's actually basically a cartel. It's the squid cartel. It's terrifying. These squid fleets boats are sent out into the deep waters of the Pacific Ocean to catch squid. They will usually stay out there for a year or two. Every single day, every single person on that boat wakes up and their sole existence is catching squid, cutting squid, freezing squid, taking a brief nap, and then catching squid, freezing squid. Most of the squid population in the colonies, they thrive in South American water. Now, most of the squid catching companies are Chinese. They're not South American. Start playing Hunger Games on this boat. The first phase is nothing is wrong until something's wrong. Zach was in the dorm one day when he saw Lou, another crewmate, and he left his notebook laying on the bed. They were almost to Peru, so he reaches over, he's flipping around, and it's all sort of like random numbers written down. When Lou comes back into the room, Zach asks, hey Lou, what are you writing down in your journal? Oh yeah, those are the ship's coordinates and where we are. Oh, why? Doesn't the ship track that? No reason. I just thought it'd be kind of fun. Zach kind of waited for Lou to explain further about this whole coordinate situation because it's just a little bit weird. But Lou is just an interesting man. He always looked like he was deep in thought on this boat about something somewhere, but he was never telling anyone what it was, which is fascinating because by like month 2, everyone was telling everybody their deepest, darkest thoughts and secrets because you don't have anyone else to talk to. All people knew about Lou was that his parents were poor farmers and he made money to marry his girlfriend. He was also kind of scrawny. I mean, you would never really look at this man and think this guy's strong, this guy's muscular, but he was. When it came time to unload all the squid and carry the giant metal trays down into the freezer, those things, like I said, they weigh 33 pounds, and because of the size of the tray, it's just really very difficult to balance and carry it down. Lou offered to do it for Zach because Zach was dirty veg. Kill Baldi. Kill him and we'll let you live too. Lou's favorite thing on this boat was having his friends kill people. He called it getting their hands dirty. If they don't have dirty hands, they would have no incentive to not turn them in when they got to land. He needed everybody to be bonded by blood and murder. He told Captain Lee if he got his hands dirty, he would let him live. Captain Lee agreed. But there was another boy on that boat that really wanted to help. Charlie. Charlie is Zach's friend. Squid fishing industry. It is scary. There have been bodies that have been washed ashore, notes in water bottles filled with rice that have been washed ashore. Random people from Southeast Asia that have been recruited to work on these ships. They would be just dumped on the ports, like literally about to die. And they were all on these squid fishing boats. Like, the stories coming out of there are really terrifying and nobody's talking about it. Nobody. As Blue is sniffing around the bushes of weeds that surround them, and just as Blue is about to relieve himself, he freezes up, his ears go up, and John blows up quietly. He notices the sudden shift of energy in his dog. What is it, Blue? It's like Blue was trying to tell him something. And immediately John's heart starts racing because he's seen this before and he only knew one thing. Blue is not just John's beloved pet. Blue is a cadaver dog, and Officer John Malia was about to find a dead body. And immediately, it was like a police parade. Cop cars, one after another, pulling up, uniformed officers running into the weeds, forensic teams, coroner, homicide detectives. They would find 4 bodies. These 4 bodies would be known as the Gilgo 4. All 4 bodies were found clearly murdered, strangled, and none of the 4 bodies belonged to Shannon Gilbert, who had just vanished not too long ago in this exact area.
Oh, they were searching for Shannon.
Yeah.
They found 4 other people.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in the matter, because he got off on it, he's a sadist. He can still trace calls back in the day. So why would a killer risk calling the sister of the victim so many times? Because he got off on it. He's a sadist. He's a cold, calculated, sadistic killer. This was a man that enjoyed the hunt, the taunting, the inciting, the riling up people is like a big part of that. He just wants people to know, I did this and I got away with it. He just can't stand not getting some credit for his crimes. Well, the police would trace his calls and it would lead them right to the middle of New York City, Midtown, in Manhattan, to be exact. So the calls they can be traced to a very small area. But New York City is a densely populated city. The calls also placed during rush hour between 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. The authorities would pull up CCTV footage around the couple of blocks that the calls could be zoomed in on. And literally so many people in and out of offices trying to catch a cab, trying to get on the train, trying to get into their cars, and almost all of them on the phone.
It's 5:30 to 6:30?
Yeah, peak rush hour.
It's like someone getting out of work time, right?
It's like a killer just finished his day job and it's like, I've been waiting for this moment. Yeah. It would be impossible to pick out the killer. I mean, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And then for decades, nothing. The investigation clients, I don't know if his success ebbed and flowed. I don't know if he was in and out of financial despair, but I believe that at one point his family was on welfare.
Okay.
So that's a huge debate too. I believe he worked on the project for the new Target store in Soho, as well as the Burlington Coat Factory store in Brooklyn. Yeah, and his double life came crashing down because of a pizza. And I think the general tidbit in true crime is don't commit crimes and eat pizza. And if you do eat pizza, eat the whole rest. Barry was in his early 70s. This is not the killer. Okay, Barry. And if you wanted to know what was going on in this little neighborhood of Long Island, you would go to Barry. Barry was like the eyes. Maybe not the ears because he's a bit hard hearing now. But he was the all-knowing figure in town. Like he would see which kids acted up, which neighbors stared a little too long at each other's wives and husbands. He would also see the yellow kid go up. He was there when many of the neighbors were interviewed or talking about what it was like to live so close to a suspected serial killer. And a lot of these testimonies are conflicting. So whether it's hindsight, truth, attention, or just a little bit of everything, many of the neighbors said, I always knew that something was shady about that guy. My whole family stayed away from him. He's always, eerie, cold, creepy, and whenever I talked to him, I just could not put my finger on it because he gave me a sense of uneasiness. Some neighbors even wore their suspicions about him almost like a badge of honor. The Schmidts always had that feeling about this guy. Mike Schmidt, the dad, he banned his kids from trick-or-treating at this man's house. They had to skip that house every single year, every single Halloween. There was one time that Mike caved and was like, okay, fine, kids, you can go ask for candy. When they got home, his wife flipped out and threw away all the candy. She did not trust him. Mike said one time a couple of neighbors' dads were having beers out back, and they were in the backyard that faced this man's house. And he remembered as they're sipping on beer during a lull in the conversation, he just couldn't help himself. He looked over and he said, your brother's body's in there. And all the dads agreed. And now with the crime scene tape, the police light, the uniformed officers in and out of the house, everyone wondered, were there bodies in the house? Barry, on the other hand, he questioned himself. He's like, how did I let a secret scene tape, the police light, the uniformed officers in and out of the house, everyone wondered, were there bodies in the house? Barry, on the other hand, he questioned himself. He's like, how did I let a serial killer slip into the neighborhood? This guy was just an average businessman. Nothing about him was particularly outstanding nor extraordinary. And in fact, the guy grew up here. So this suspected serial killer grew up in the neighborhood. Barry watched him grow up in his family home, only to come back not too long ago to raise his own family here. He's a family man. He had a wife, he had 2 kids, a lovely daughter, and a big fancy job in the city. I mean, how could he be a serial killer? So news spreads to high school friends. A woman named Marie, really dark stuff. He wanted to see minors anywhere between the age of 10 and 13 years old. He was looking for explicit content with girls with beaten or bruised faces or being tied up and tortured. The word crying appeared numerous times in his searches. He wanted to see women and girls crying and in pain, and he specifically wanted to see them cry while actively basically being tortured. It traced Russ's home IP address. They monitored his IP address, and in creating one of these fake emails, he had to accept terms and conditions. That was accepted from his supposed IP address. So they're basically saying, we can confirm, at least we're going to argue that this can be confirmed to be his fake email address that was used to create a Tinder account that is also used to link to a burner phone. Because he accepted terms and conditions from the IP address of his in the same general area. And then made those talking phone calls if it indeed is him. On top of that, they pull his Amex records, and there were numerous instances where Rex was buying something in the same general area as he was calling. So like right after a phone call was between Midtown Manhattan to one of the victim's family members, he would be purchasing like a hot dog in Midtown Manhattan. So just another link. And if you guys want the whole nitty-gritty breakdown, this show notes, I'm gonna have a bail application, you can read over that, the court doc. But there's just a lot more in depth of like where each stuff in the towers came in and at what times and like all that. They also have the hairs from the Gilgo Beach 4, and they needed to test Rex Huberman's DNA. He ends up throwing away a pizza box in a garbage can in Fifth Avenue, like on the side of the street, one of those public trash cans, while leaving work. He's not a crust eater, so his DNA is left all over that pizza crust. That pizza box was brought in, and the DNA was a match. Now, it is again important to note that even though Oz Al-Rawrabi wiped DNA with a match to the hairstyle on the bodies, authorities do not believe that any of Oz's family members have been involved or to even have knowledge of experience to chill the dark winter. It is very unlikely that we will ever cherish the warmth of the bright summer's day. And I think that applies strongly to the victims in this. Yes, remember her?
And it disposed them separately.
Yes. So some people think that there was an evolution. If all of these bodies were belonging to one killer, there's an evolution as his personality evolves, as his killings evolve, maybe his confidence goes up. If this is true, because these bodies seem to have been from much further back, so people are speculating he might have dismembered them as an attempt to, because he's more anxious of being caught. But maybe as his confidence grows, he has been just dumping bodies whole. Because he's like, no one's gonna find the bodies. I don't have to go around and do all of this.
And then he stopped.
Well, people think that he probably didn't.
Yeah.
That there's another dump site somewhere where he rests decades.
Where he collected billions of dollars?
Let me tell you, okay? You're thinking billions of dollars in church donations? That's crazy. Not exactly. Pyongyang was a businessman before he was a religious leader. The South Korean man who went to his mom's house and saw another box of these supplements that she had just recently become so obsessed with. She's like, these supplements are gonna save my life and they're gonna save yours. He didn't really understand why she was into squalene. It was like made from shark livers. But maybe that's what happens when you get older. You start looking for ways to stay healthy. He didn't realize it was too late that she was being scammed. Not just scammed, but meticulously targeted, manipulated, and defrauded. Mrs. Lim, his mother, was known in the area as being rich, alone, and very sweet. You know, her kids would check up on her, but they're all adults, they have families of their own. She would spend most of her days alone. A group of strangers would get at her door, asking her questions and helping her around in the kitchen, giving her massages, giving her tips on what to eat to feel more energetic. She loved the conversation. I mean, it was just nice to talk to someone. But the visits became more and more frequent, and they started telling her that if you ever plan to be saved, because you don't have much time left, our religion is pretty easy. Other religions are so complex. You have to go through this whole process where you have to repent for your sins, you gotta do all this, and then you gotta do all this good deed. You don't have to do that. You don't have to read the Bible every day. You simply have to join our church, and you'll be saved. They told her it was founded by a billionaire named Yu Byung-hun and his father-in-law, and they were special. What do you mean they're special? It's hard to explain, but Mrs. Lim will drop off some sermons, and you'll see he's different. And you know, when you're listening to the sermons and you feel this enormous wave of emotions come to you, you need to write that time down. So they were in the practice of writing down the exact time that they got saved. So Mrs. Lim listens to the tape in her condo, and it hit her. She feels these emotions. She wants to cry, and she writes down the time. She's like, I've been saved. This is what salvation feels like. But you know what else salvation feels like? Squalene shark liver pills. Yeah, the church sold it. They recommended it and sold it for salvation, and they sold it for $1,300 a box. They also sold knickknacks for like $2,000 a jewelry box made out of the shittiest quality material. They sold everything. It's like an MLM inside of a church.
Wow.
This is not a regular organization that we're talking about. This is straight up QVC MLM meets a church. Mrs. Lim bought box after box after box after box, as well as a bunch of other things that the church insisted that she needed, and sold at insanely ridiculous prices. And she couldn't go to the market and be like, you know what? You're squalene $1,300, and I can find squalene $10. No, because that's not blessed. Okay, you need to buy this one. They were cluttering up her home. It's speculated that she spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these items. But the real salvation happened when the Salvation Sect offered her a rare opportunity, not only to get rich, but also save the world. They said that they were going to create a business that was coming up with this top-notch medical facility. So they need funds for it, and you're going to get returns because once the hospital's up and running, I mean, it's going to be a lot of profit. I mean, think how great that idea is. And her saving wise, she forged over $500,000 in cash to make it happen. She invested $500,000 and never told her sons and daughters that was the majority of her remaining assets. In exchange, she received a formal official note. Is this sounding similar? Is this sounding familiar to anything? A document explaining the transfer of funds and how she's going to be paid back with returns. And the company that signed this note was the Samwoo Trading Group. That trading group would file for bankruptcy, and they would have $225 million in debt. They would leave Mrs. Lim with nothing. I think even worse than losing money was she felt completely abandoned. Bizarre. So this church is a church. There's sermons, but they also ask all of the church members to invest in the companies that are basically run by the church. The executives of these companies are run by church members. Most of the employees are church members, allegedly. All of this is kind of, it's like a networking event. A professor who studied Yu Byung-hun and his religion said, Yu Byung-hun preaches that corporate activities are equivalent to religious activities. He used his followers as a tool to bloat his own wealth. A pastor that made it out of the Salvation Sect said, Yu Byung-hun expanded his business through a system of believers and exploitation of labor. I mean, it's crazy. Imagine if Jeff Bezos started a religion and asked you to donate all your money into his companies because you follow him spiritually. And everything was set up like a pyramid-like structure of dozens of subsidiaries under his holding company, like shell company after shell company after shell company after shell company. A lot of the times, Yu Byung-hun's name wasn't even listed as a major shareholder, or someone who had heavy interest in the success of these businesses. Most of the times, they would be listed under followers' names that he indirectly controlled allegedly, or his own children's names, or other family members. But it's alleged that Yu Byung-hun was the mastermind behind every single company in this web of companies. So the way that it worked is that a new company would come up, Company A, and church believers are now investing in Company A and being promised big fat returns. Mr. Yu Byung-hun might not have any direct shares in Company A. He's not a shareholder of Company A, but the largest shareholder of Company A is Company B, and Company B is a subsidiary of Holdings Company C, which Yu Byung-hun's two sons were controlling shareholders of. So that's why a lot of people say he's not the de facto owner of any of these businesses, but there is a connection, let's be real. So yeah, on paper, he might not even own Company A or have shares or be the CEO of Company A, but he's profiting off Company A. Now, one of these companies that started very, very early on, before even I believe the
During the Mexican-American War. The gang who rode with him was known as the Clanton Gang, and they were among the most feared and brutal headhunters in the Wild West. Years after Sable Chambers left the Clanton Gang, he would detail their journeys in a book called My Confession, Recollections of a Rogue. So everything that I just said is from a true historical account of the American and Mexican Wild West. Story of what they and whom he was surprised in the act of violating while actually clothed in the livery of his god. A monk swept through the crowd, a lady sank to her knees. This is him, cried the Reverend, sobbing. This is him, the devil, here he stands. Not 3 weeks before this, he was run out of Fort Smith, Arkansas for having converse with a goat. Yes, lady, that is what I said. Go. One day in my eyes, if I won't shoot the son of a bitch, said a man rising at the far side of the tent and drawing a pistol from his boot. He leveled it and fired. From there, the entire tent revival breaks out in a gunfight. People begin pulling boot knives and shooting randomly into each other. Several people in the tent, including the kid, begin to grab their knives and cut holes in the tent so they can make a speedy exit. The kid makes his way to a bar across the street, and from there he watches people run bleeding out of the tent before the tent itself falls over, surely with the dead Reverend inside. By the time the kid gets there, the judge has already made it to the bar, and after more men begin to come into the bar out of the rain, a few of them walk up to the judge and begin talking to him. Judge, how did you come to have the goods on that no count? Goods, said the judge. When he was in Fort Smith. Fort Smith. Where did you know him to know all that stuff on him? You mean Reverend Green? Yes, sir, I reckon he was in Fort Smith before he came out here. I was never in Fort Smith in my life. Yeah, he was. They looked from one to the other. Well, where was it you read up on him? I never laid eyes on that man before today. Never even heard of him. He raised his glass to drink. There was a strange silence in the room. The men looked like mud effigies. Finally, someone began to laugh. Then another. Soon they were all laughing together. Someone bought the judge a drink. The judge, either not liking the Reverend or just claiming this, walked into a tent revival, told a lie about the Reverend as well as several others killed, and seemed to do all of it for fun, which is a perfect introduction to his character. The kid seemingly pays no mind to this. There's very few moments in the book where we're told explicitly what the kid is thinking or what his thoughts.
Was like, yup, that's exactly how Ted writes. And beyond that, we all pick up words unique to our education level, socioeconomic status, and geographic area. If you say garbage can instead of trash can, you're more likely to be from the American North. If you say sneakers instead of tennis shoes, you're more likely to be from the American Northeast. So pro tip, if you're trying not to be caught, don't write a manifesto. The FBI can pinpoint where you're from, how old you are, and a scary amount of other demographics from just your writing alone. And audio recordings are even worse because you say a bunch of unique stuff subconsciously all the time, like how frequently you say filler words like or like. All of this is done in a specific idiolect different from how other people talk. Fun fact.
Where she would service several clients at the Brighton Hotel, where Mike occasionally worked as a security guard. Mike was offering Alex £100,000 and said that he would set everything up. All she would have to do is do this one big job, and then she was finished. Alex was so delighted with this that her phone record showed that she immediately started looking for houses for sale in the area, and Alex accepted this offer. Alex sent a message to Mark saying, I trust you, and thank you again for doing what you're doing. I really appreciate it. Mark replied by telling Alex to remember him when she is rich and famous. Alex made sure that she organised childcare for her 2 children at her parents' house. She then told people she knew that she was going to the city of York for a spa trip for a couple of days. Before leaving, Alex left a note on her living room table marked with a smiley face, saying, let's go rollerblading. At first, this seemed out of place. Alex had not been home for days and was supposedly at a spa in York. However, it became apparent that this was left there in the event that she didn't return, in the event that something bad happened to her. This note was designed to direct her children to the rollerblading shoeboxes in their bedrooms. In these boxes were bundles of £20 notes amounting to £2,500. It was clear that Alex didn't trust Mark as much as she said. Alex had done this as a precaution, illuminating the fact that she did feel like there was an increased risk when setting off on that day. This became even more apparent when she left a note inside a box with a pin to a mobile phone. Hidden beneath the ice-skating boots was a phone, and in the note section, Alex had written a message saying, if anything happened to me, go to this address. The address was Littlebridge Farm. At some point during their correspondence, the planned escorting event was moved from a hotel that Mark worked at to his own property, which likely triggered her caution. On the 13th of November 2021, Alex's parents collected her 2 sons and her dogs, allowing for her to go on this 4-day trip. Then on the 14th of November, CCTV footage showed Alex buying petrol for her white Mini Cooper at a petrol station. She told the cashier that she was heading for York, but when she left the station, she headed south. Alex. It is suspected that the method of killing was strangulation, but in this case, Mike's obsession with fire ensured that the method of death was never discovered. What is known is that Mark gathered Alexander Lalonde, who would do anything to help. When he was asked, he happily gave up his fingerprints and his DNA. Mark thought he was in the clear and was a few steps ahead of the police. For Mark, all was well. That was until certain things began to not add up. Mark confessed that he organised to meet Alex at Littlebridge Farm, as he had done many times in the past, for a casual encounter. He claimed that she arrived as per the CCTV footage, but left 45 minutes later in her car. Only the police knew that the White Mini Cooper hadn't driven off the property for several days. This, of course, aroused the suspicion of the police. On the 24th of November, just days after the murder,
and sees two strange men dressed in ordinary clothes.
They claimed their police. They say, okay, do you know this person? Blah, 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 which is his name I never heard of. He said he got picked up yesterday, and he said you are his culprit, like a crimes. And they said I was required to go with them to assist you in some investigation.
Doug has no idea what they're talking about. He's starting to panic a little because he's used the VPN to access YouTube to watch drumming tutorials. They take him to their car. Doug is surprised they're driving a regular Jeep, not an official police car. The men explain that they did this on purpose to save him the embarrassment of being seen being taken away by the police. So Doug gets in the car, but when they start driving, they go right past the local police station. 30 minutes later, in another part of the city, they